Sword of Coming Chapter 840? Listening to Qin Pinggan's defense, she didn't hesitate to pour dirty water on her husband. Ning Yao was silent. Qin Pinggan changed a bench and went to sit next to Ning Yao. She looked even more angry and unwilling. Sit leaning on him and moved his position. Qin Pinggan didn't make any progress either, so he sat in his place and drank silently. Affection between men and women is what it means to be romantic. It means that a person has only one bottle of true wine, so he has to drink it when he meets everyone. What is affectionate? It means that a jar of wine is buried in my heart, and then one day I drink it to the end until I drink it out. How to not get drunk. It's just that Qin Pinggan carried the hip flask with one hand, and placed the other on the bench between the two quietly, like a crab rampant, sneaking closer to Ning Yao. When he was about to succeed, Ning Yao suddenly punched and hit the back of his hand. The strength of his hand was so great that Qin Pinggan was so painful that Qin Pinggan fell into anger and gave a soft drink. When Ning Yao put away his fist, Qin Pinggan quickly raised the back of his hand and rubbed it. Rub your chin. After a moment of silence, Ning Yao asked, You seem to have a better impression of Song Jisin? Before in the courtyard, Qin Pinggan talked about his neighbor for many years when he was young. Although his words hurt others, his evaluation was okay. Qin Pinggan nodded. I'm not going to talk about the big things. Song Jisin did nothing less. I only talk about one small thing. Song Jisin, Nipping Lane, became King Song Mu of the Dali domain. He used to sit in the old dragon city, Nanyue Mountain, Dadu accompanying capital, and 3 battles. Song Jisin was always on the front line of the battlefield and was responsible for the central dispatch. Although the specific formation of troops, there are military commanders such as Su Gaoshan and Chao Ping who are familiar with warfare, but in fact many key issues, or some seemingly interoperable, will actually affect Song Mu needed to make his own decisions about the subsequent trend of the battle. If it was just a king of the Dali domain with an empty title, it was just a palace decoration that spared his life and was responsible for stabilizing the military spirit, it would definitely not win the respect of the frontier army of Dali and the monks on the Aquarius Mountain. The area under the jurisdiction of the Dali Pei capital, including many vassal states, all states, counties and counties as long as they borrow usury to lend to all colleges and schools, Song Jisin ordered the imperial courts and local governments to borrow money from these loans. After grabbing all, one hand was chopped off. Dare to flee, cross the border, go to hide elsewhere, add more crime, and both hands are gone. In fact, it's not a trivial matter, it's just that it doesn't look very eye-catching compared to the major events of other mansions and accompanying capitals. Ning Yao said, It's really not like what Song Jisin will do. In her impression, Song Jisin is a son who has no worries about food and clothing. There is also a maid who is not good in name, appearance and character. One is squeamish and the other is hypocritical, and the two are a good match. Qin Pinggan explained with a smile, It may be that Song Jisin feels that when scholars have no money they have to have no money. Before leaving the school, if there is no money they should study hard every day and be honest. Fame. It's just that young students or young Confucian scholars have insufficient determination. Song Jisin went to settle accounts with those who had the courage to make this money. Song Jisin hated him the most when he was a child. In fact, it happened that he had no worries about food and clothing, and he had too much money in his pocket. This is not considered hypocritical. After all, he is poked on the backbone every day by neighbors in the neighborhood and scolds illegitimate children. It's all uncomfortable. Song Jisin is so squeamish. He never moved out when he arrived at a place like Mud Bottle Lane, probably because I felt that I was almost like him. One is that he has no parents and the other is that there is no such thing. So living in Ni Ping Alley so that Song Jisin will not be too comfortable. Qin Pinggan finished drinking, put the empty jug on the bench, poured some salted soybeans from the sleeves in one palm, and handed it to Ning Yao. Ning Yao dialed half of it. After learning boxing, especially after becoming a pure martial artist in the Golden Figure, the calluses of Qin Pinggan's hands and feet have disappeared. Qin Pinggan twisted a soybean and threw it into his mouth. The shoe gently bumped it. The pair of cloth shoes on his feet were sewn by the old chef himself. The craftsmanship is more exquisite than women's needlework. On the mountain, those who are willing to wear cloth shoes are well equipped. As for Jiangshang, there are really a few pairs. Especially how much money Jiangshang really spent was even harder to say. In fact, there are 2 pairs of cloth shoes sewed by xuanhuan, but Qin Pinggan was reluctant to wear them, so they kept them inside the square. Qin Pinggan is determined to take Ning Yao back to Luapa Mountain this time, and Ning Yao will definitely have it. Nuan Shu, the busiest little housekeeper every day, can't think of anything. Qin Pinggan ate the salted soybeans, smiled, and his eyes were gentle, as if he had seen a girl in a pink skirt, who had left her house early in the morning. When she walked alone and no one, she would gently lift up her sleeves and walk briskly. I quickly walked to the door of a house, slowed down, picked up a bunch of keys, skillfully selected one, opened the door, brooms, rags, water scoops, buckets. Be organized, get busy, sweep the courtyard, wipe the tables and stools and dry them. Betting? What, you bigly cavalry dare to encircle me, Luapa Mountain? Qin Pingan turned his head and glanced at the direction of the imperial palace. It is possible that the 11 people of the earthly branch have not realized one thing until now. He is higher than the white-clothed Qin Pingan. The latter is only part of him after all. This means that at a certain moment, Qin Pingan will use all the means of that pure divine nature, and that the battle in the cage, the other himself, did not exert all his strength. Ning Yao noticed the change in Qin Pingan's mood, turned his head and asked, "What's wrong?" Qin Pingan closed his gaze and smiled, "It's nothing, but the more I think about it, the more angry I get. I look back and find some wood to make a food box to hold a late-night snack." Ning Yao didn't bother to ask what this anger has to do with carpenter's work and late-night snacks. He just asked, "Within half a month, Nan Yen will really take the initiative to hand over the tiles? If you leave out the natal lamp that I found behind, it's not necessarily true. So in the house, did you scare her casually? It's not all scares, but it's mainly to make her sleepless and sleepy, and if she is suspicious, she will see that everyone is a ghost." Qin Pingan sneered and slowly said, "This Empress Dowager is actually a very useful person. She didn't give up the broken piece of porcelain if she was killed. Not only was she lucky at the beginning and wanted to pursue profit. To maximize, her original idea was that there was a best situation, that is, when I was in the house, I nodded on the spot and agreed to the deal. In this way, not only did she not need to return the tiles, she could also win over for the Dali court. A sword repairer in the upper 5 realms and a martial artist in the end of the boundary, there is no name for worship, but there is actual worship. Besides the Baiyujing and the Baidu, there are monks from the earthly branch in one line in the dark behind the scenes, slowly accumulating cultivation bases, and having me and Luopashan in the bright place, it is naturally very beneficial to the Song family of Dali. It is obviously her. Make mistakes first, calculate insidiously, but want me to disregard her suspicion and turn the enemy into a friend. The second advantage is that in the other 8 continents of the Howran world, the Dali Song family can earn a reputation for treating those who have done meritorious services. 3. As the Lord of Luapa Mountain, I have the incense relationship with Beiju Luzhou. The next sect was founded in Tonggishao, and Dei can share a piece of the pie. Of course, Dei court will be very pragmatic in doing things, and both parties will benefit each other. Reciprocity. 4th, I am still the last hermit of the Great Wall of Sword Qi. In the future there will definitely be Lu Jinglong, as well as foreign sword immortals like Xuanhuan and Yu, to have a relationship with Aquarius Island and Dei. This pair of Dei dynasty, the Kendo luck is invisible, it is very beneficial. Finally, as a disciple of my husband, I can help the Song family of Dali build a bridge with the Confucian temple, and the Song family can completely leave the Yunlin Jiang family behind. Treasures of heaven, material and earth, who are you not giving them? For example, the 11 people of the earthly branch and the 2 Yamen of Dali did not pay less. The cost of a random fight is calculated with Guyes money. Qin Pingan threw all the last bit of salted soybeans into his mouth and said vaguely, "These are the reasons why she speaks so well at the beginning. You are the Empress Dowager of a country, so she considers the overall situation and says she is humble. It's not an exaggeration. Don't look at the large foreign debts that Dali owes. In fact, his family is very rich. If the brother was not preparing for the Second War, he would have expected that the frontier cavalry would need to rush to the wilderness, and he would be able to help casually. It is for the Dali court to pay off the debt." Ning Yao said, "The fame and benefits are available. This Nanzan takes the best advantage and has a good calculation." Qin Pingan clapped her hands. "If she says that she has long hair and short insights, we have been wronged by our great Empress Dowager." Ning Yao frowned and said, "There must be a bigger reason to support her to the end. Is it from the Lu family of Zhongtu?" Qin Pingan said, "As long as you are an individual, you will have something to care about. Nanzhan is of course no exception. For example, what is the surname of Dei in the future, or whether the surname is Song, whether her son is the emperor or the dynasty of Dei, is it possible to preserve half of the territory of Aquarius, and whether her Empress Dowager's noble status can be preserved, especially whether she can rejoin politics, such as taking advantage of my brother's absence. Will she have the opportunity to control the monks of the earthly branch, and then her own life, or as a child of the Lu family, the Middle-earth Lu family placed a chess piece in Ao Pingzhou. Is there anything more important than her life, etc.? Each has its own severity and depth. Anyway, the more you those who can't help but practice the way, the more things can do more than life and death. After all, many mountain methods make it very difficult for people to want to die. In contrast, the old attendant in the lion park of Xuanhuan country, his name is more important than his fate. Of course, not the kind of polite fame. And Su Gaoshan, the patrol hunter of Dali, is the ambition in his heart. The identity of a military commander of Han nationality is more important than fate. Ningyao asked, Earthsea only lacks a pure martial artist, so Dali has never thought about Pei Qian? Qin Pingan said, I've definitely thought about it, but I don't seem to have this plan, and Pei Qian will not agree. Ningyao asked again, now, you never thought about letting Pei Qian make up for the earthly branches? Since you don't go to the barren world, you actually have an official status. Whether it's walking the rivers and lakes or practicing cultivation, it is very stable. Qin Pingan shook his head and said, I won't agree. Ningyao shook his head, did you not agree, or do you think Pei Qian did not agree? Don't forget, Pei Qian fought to kill the enemy in Jinjiazu and Beipingzu, there is no ambiguity. Why don't you ask Pei Qian himself the meaning of? Qin Pingan was stunned, really never thought about it. Ningyao said, if Pei Qian is willing, would you still stop her? Qin Pingan hesitated for a moment, maybe you won't stop it. Qin Pingan chuckled softly, no way, even now, as long as you don't look at Pei Qian standing in front of you, it seems that she is still the little black charcoal who ties two in a bun. The black little girl, slender and thin, with two small arms, when she ran, she wandered like a wicker. Noisy, timid, heart-minded, the cerebellum turns faster than anyone else, and even more awkward than Li Huai, who can easily abduct people who don't know her details to thousands of miles away. Later, I heard Yu Yufu and Lin Junbai said that after the Jinjiazu War ended, the local monks who survived on the continent all respected the female martial artist Zheng Qian. In short, if the master and apprentice went to Jinjiazu, over there he must only recognize Zheng Qian, not any hidden officials. Returned to Beipingzu, Pei Qian also won the nicknames Zheng Qingming and Zheng Seiqian. Ask her what to do, 3 faces will be over. There is even a saying that makes Qin Pingan dumbfounded. On the mountains and rivers and lakes, they all say that Zheng Qian is the most martial and old-fashioned master in Aquarius. What about our Aquarius? Pei Qian is the most worthy master of martial arts. Being ruthless to the Yaozu, Zheng giving money is definitely not a vain name, only a wrong name, no wrong nickname. But when I asked my family's martial artist, she was polite and polite again and again. I really don't know how elegant the preacher of Pei Qian, a female great master, is, presumably his martial ethics is even higher. Until Pei Qian appeared to watch Xinyang Mountain, the sword fairy of Luapa Mountain, who had done a fight with Xinyang Mountain Yuan Jinya. And then, there is a certain gossip that spreads widely on the top of the Aquarius Island, the battle between meritorious deeds. Some people will inevitably be puzzled. They only heard the truth that the upper beam is not correct and the lower beam is crooked. Never thought that there is such a thing as the upper beam and the lower beam being crooked? But it is real, really real. Such a black charcoal girl is indeed brought up by Qin Pingan. It's like a jump and grow up. She has walked so far by herself. In fact, everyone in Luapa Mountain knows well, don't think that Qin Pingan is the fiercest on Pei Qian's side, the strictest discipline, seems to have the worst temper, but in the eyes of the young mountain owner, the gentleness of Pei Qian will not lose. Give warm trees and millet grains. Ningyao joked, when Pei Qian gets married someday I can worry about you. Qin Pingan coldly snorted, among the peers, there are not a few who are worthy of Pei Qian. Qin Pingan put his hands around his chest, if anyone dares to move his mind and shake those clever romantic tricks, ill him. Ningyao smiled and said, come on, wherever you are, it will be very difficult for them to cheat Pei Qian. Qin Pingan nodded, that's true, quickly added, I still have to check. Then I kept adding, not only me, I have to secretly pull Zhu Lian, Cui Dongshan, Jiang Shangzhen, and Miyu together to help me check. The old cook is a past person, experienced, and Cui Dongshan is thoughtful. As for Chief Zhou and Mi Zishi, Sipi has the most accurate vision. No, I have to get a teacher, and whether the person who is in the school exam is really good at learning. Of course, if the guy is not good at character, nothing will be mentioned. Qin Pingan intertwined his fingers, raised his arms, stretched out, and whispered, when Pei Qian went to the Jianqi Great Wall for the first time, Cui Dongshan told me in private that Pei Qian went to the temple when he was a child. When the Bodhisattva kowtows, he will add a sentence sincerely at the end. If the Bodhisattva is very busy, you don't need to listen to it today. It doesn't matter if it doesn't work. We'll talk about it next time. We'll do it next time. Anyway, it'll come often. Recommend an app that is comparable to the old version of the book-chasing artifact, and can change the source books for Mimi reading. Pei Qian made him swear not to tell others. In fact, she doesn't want me as a master to know. Ning Yao turned his head and looked at his profile. Qin Pingan turned his head, smiled and said, "Isn't he handsome?" Ning Yao nodded. Otherwise, my Ning Yao will find an ugly monster? Otherwise, you can still make so many yin yen yen on the mountain just watching the beautiful scenery. You will be a nympho? Qin Pingan was a little caught off guard and he rarely blushed. Ning Yao remembered something. She had been to the backyard of the Yang family drugstore when she traveled to the Lizhu cave. She followed Qin Pingan. At that time, old man Yang asked Ning Yao 2 questions. On the top of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, a few words are engraved. Who is talking about the heart? Ning Yao said, I didn't think much about old man Yang's question about the voice of the heart at the beginning, but it was very helpful for me to break the bottleneck of Yupu realm and enter the fairyland off seeking truth in the colorful world. Qin Pingan nodded and said, no matter what, when I return to my hometown, I'll go to the backyard of the drugstore first. After saying this, Qin Pingan looked down at the cloth shoes on his feet. Ning Yao knows why. This is Qin Pingan reminding him who he is. Before in the Xinjia Inn, when Qin Pingan sat on the steps, he had such an action. Maybe that mud bottle alley the young apprentice gradually changed clothes, boots, status, age. But the only thing that hasn't faded away is the pair of straw sandals in my heart. Qin Pingan intends to make a special trip to ask Zhao Duaming later, what special authentic small restaurants in the capital, so that he can take Ning Yao around the streets and stroll around. Remembered some past events. If my beard is shaved, you too will not be as handsome as I am. Yuha, the hot pot is very spicy? Don't you have a drink at your fingertips? You can relieve the spicy. What do you look at? Will I blind you? Aha, it's a melon peel. I really believe it. Drink slowly. The wine can't get out of the bowl. Qin Pingan leaned forward, swaying his shoulders with his arms folded in his arms, looking at the quiet but deserted street. If you leave the home-cooked meals aside, Qin Pingan suddenly realizes that in fact, he has eaten in his entire life. The feast, big fish and meat, is one of the few. The first meal was a trip to school with Xiao Baoping and the rest of his life. At the attendant's house, he had a meal that allowed Qin Pingan to have a small sacred mountain offering, followed by a banquet in Nanyuan Guojingqing, a blessed land of lotus root flowers, and a banquet with the emperor and his family. Pingan rarely spent money to set up a banquet. At that time he invited Han Jingling, the prince of Shihao Kingdom, and Huang He, the son of the general, to dinner and drink. Ning Yao asked, when did you stop wearing straw sandals? When you arrived at the Great Wall of Jianqi? Qin Pingan shook his head and smiled. I really want to say that for the first time, I arrived in the capital of Sui dynasty. At that time, I bought a special outfit and changed my boots. As a result, I wore it on my feet and was very awkward. I almost didn't know how to walk. And in the end, I didn't go to the academy. I secretly ran away. At that time, I was mainly worried that little Aquarius and Li Huai would stand up with me and be looked down upon. Later I realized that I was thinking too much, but actually not. It's time to escape. Then Qin Pingan laughed to himself. Actually, I didn't wear straw sandals before I was 5 years old. Do you remember that inside the house in the alley of clay bottles, I hid a clay pot in the corner? Ning Yao nodded. Remember the one you hid the copper coins and broken porcelain pieces? The earthenware pot, apart from taking out the broken pieces of porcelain, seemed to have been placed in the ancestral house by Qin Pingan since then, and even Ning Yao didn't know what else was in it. Family property. And every time Qin Pingan returned home from a long trip, he would spend the night in Nipping Alley, alone, waiting for dawn. As a young Qin Pingan, he didn't want anyone to feel sorry for himself, and he felt that he was doing well. Qin Pingan smiled and said, in fact, when I was a child, I didn't sell everything cheaply to pay back. There were 2 things left. There is a custom in his hometown, regardless of whether there is money or not, every household is like this, otherwise it would not be considered a family. Ning Yao turned around and asked curiously, what? Qin Pingan smiled brightly, raised his hands and stood in front of him, with a short distance between the palms of his hands. He whispered softly, a pair of shoes I wore when I was a kid, it's just that big, it's very small, right? Then Qin Pingan made a few more gestures. There is still a small dress, spread out, it must be so big. She turned her head abruptly, not looking at the smiling man. He stretched out his hand to hold her hand and whispered, Ning Yao, I think about the name of our child in the future, so we'll call it Chen Ning, okay? It doesn't matter if you choose your last name, of course, but I always feel Ning Chen's not as good as Shen Ning. Chen Ning. Qin Pingan's Chen, Ning Yao's Ning, Peaceful Ning, that child, whether it's a boy or a girl, will always live in stability and peace of mind. Qin Pingan actually wants a daughter even more. A girl is better, a little cotton-padded jacket, and then looks more like her mother and can have more temperament. Song Su stayed alone. Yuan Huajing sat on the futon in the house. Song Su did not enter the house to take a seat, just sitting on the threshold. The leaders of the two hills rarely get along alone. Yuan Huajing let out a sulky breath and asked for the first time, "Song Su, did you bring any drinks?" Song Su smiled and said, "I don't have anything to do with me, nor do I drink alcohol, and I didn't bring it. You can find Gayan or Yu, they are both willing to earn this money." Yuan Huajing was silent for a moment and whispered softly, "In fact, the human heart has been dismantled and exhausted." Song Su said, "I don't care. Except for you, the other 9 have the same mentality as mine. So what is really dismantled by Mr. Qin is only your selfishness and ambition. If you really want to go back, in fact it was you who helped Mr. Qin personally solve a potential hazard that should have had the opportunity to hold back the mountain. Even if we will join hands in the future, I feel like being tossed by you once, just like Mr. Qin said, just waiting in line the head is nothing. Besides, you have to admit one point. As far as you are concerned, you are no longer half-hearted. Then go ask Mr. Qin about the sword. It is meaningless to deceive yourself and others. For our xianxia, this is actually a complete loss. The next thing you have to do is to patch up your state of mind, otherwise the most likely demons are not Sui Lin and Lu Hui but Yu Yuan. Transformation. By the way, if in the next 100 years, a person with the best spiritual aptitude will eventually become the person with the lowest level, what I can do is not to win a joke about Yuan Huajing. Yuan Huajing turned to look at the young prince who was repaired by the golden core sword. "You are much smarter than I thought." Song Su shook his head and said, "Compared to Mr. Chen and the Emperor, I am so smart. This Yuan Huajing is definitely not a hero, he is ambitious and a hero." Song Su has always felt that a general who is dejected and vents his ancestral shadow is not as good as a mundane child who accumulates yin and virtue. That's why Song Su and Yuan Huajing couldn't talk together. Originally, 2 people, a Song prince and a descendant of the Xianghu kingdom surname, should be the best match. Song Su put his hands on his chest, leaned back to Yuan Huajing, the second prince of Lili, facing the courtyard. "Have you discovered that Mr. Qin and that Qin Pingan are like 2 extremes? The Chinese teacher once said that if any strong man in the world is just to be feared, it is not enough, it must be awe-inspiring. If we say that Qin Pingan, who opened the door by himself and walked out of the waterless realm before, makes us all desperate. It is the extinction of all things, so it is the Su in the 12 earthly branches. Then Mr. Qin, who came to rescue us later, was choosing our humanity recognized by him. At that time he was Mao. Qin. Jianghu Xin? It seemed all wrong, maybe more like Su. Everything else?" Yuan Huajing looked back at that figure as if he really knew this Prince Dali for the first time. When Song Xuan raised that nursery rhyme flying sword, especially becoming a monk of the earthly branch, it meant that Song Su would never be an emperor in his life. Yuan Huajing asked, "Song Su, have you ever thought of becoming an emperor?" Song Su nodded, "Of course I thought about it. I even hated this children's rhyme flying sword. Then one day I suddenly didn't want to. That time was a ceremonial ceremony. We needed to be guarded secretly. I watched from a distance the emperor who was wearing a dragon robe, surrounded by the stars. Of course the emperor was also in the team. I don't know why, but I didn't envy him. On the contrary, it feels cramped just like that dragon robe, which is a cage. I had a strange idea at the time, that is, our Emperor of Dali, where can we go in this life? That night I went to the city and stood there. At that high place I suddenly found myself like the sky and the earth, I can go wherever I want. Father and brother will not be successful. At that moment I was willing to be a practitioner of proving the longevity. As the elder brother of Song Su, the Prince Dali, the prince who will be nailed in the future, is indeed very tactical, and his wrists are not bad. It is a big difference between the predecessors and the predecessors. Knowing not to smash those porcelains, books and confessions because they will record files, but sages and sages are not afraid to smash them. In the end they can only take some silk and satin products to blow their breath, but the third brother is gentle, although the talent is not as good as brother in Song Zu's eyes, may be more resilient. As for the other younger siblings, Song Su is even more unfamiliar. In the courtyard, Yushu and Xianxia, "How old are you?" Song Su Lung asked suddenly. "You made the move without authorization this time, did you get the instruction from someone in the palace?" Yuan Huajing was silent. Song Su stopped asking more questions. "There is already an answer. Not as an example. Song Su got up and left, turned his head and said, I said it. From today, Xuanhuan has actually lost his status as the leader of the monks of the earthly branch. On the other side of the flower shed, the old xianxia didn't actually drink. He raised Erlang's legs, interlaced his hands and put them on his knees. It seemed that he glanced at the colorful knot that Aunt Feng tied with the blue silk. It was very valuable. Aunt Feng smiled and said, Why, when Sheng is here to help Baiwafudi as a lobbyist and want me to return this thing? Or is it that the flower master gave me some good wine and flower cups for half sale and half selling during this discussion? A certain leader of the Middle-earth Confucian temple has softened his heart, so Jinar Wenxing actually carried a saint's will with the constitution? The old scholar said with great righteousness, What is the matter between ladies? I am a big man, not good at. Except for his closed disciples, Wenxing's lineage is a bachelor who can't figure out this matter. The old scholar angrily said, Furthermore, it is directed at the many years of friendship between Aunt Feng and our Wenxing. Who dares to be so poor and white on my side, so young and old, and Aunt Feng, not to be scolded by me? 8 factors. Auntie Feng nodded, That's good, otherwise I'm going to give a eviction order. This colorful knot hides mystery, which is why there are so many flower gods in the history of Baiwafudi. The flower gods of generations have never been able to have the root of an ascendant realm. Because of the incomplete lifeline of the natural avenue, entering the fairyland is equivalent to walking it's the end of a dead end. And the lack of 100 flowers land in the ascendant realm is ultimately inadequate. There are hundreds of flowers in the world and she was really bullied by Aunt Feng. The old scholar said casually, The world is mutual cause and effect. This cause bears this result is the other cause and the other cause is the result. Anyway, it is such a cycle of cause and effect and the sage is infiltrated. The truth is such a truth it can't be simpler. Therefore things in the world are always going around and around helping us to meet again both good and bad. Just saying that you don't give an example is a hooligan, then I will give an example, and it is also a bit involved with Aunt Feng such as the Great Wall of Jianghu the criminal officer Haosu, you know? He was born in a blessed land in Fuyazhou in the past. Not long ago he cut off Nanguangzheo's head and accepted an apprentice. He asked that child to swear to kill the flower pickers on the mountain. Knowing that he shouldn't stay for long, tried to leave Haoran and seek refuge in the Qingming world, but was blocked by the Saint of Ceremonies. Of course, Auntie Feng doesn't think that Bai Yujing's invincible disposition would be so gloomy. It's just that the old scholar's seemingly random example is quite reasonable. Aunt Feng thought for a moment, stretched out her 2 fingers, twisted the colorful knot, and took it out of the blue silk. The old scholar seemed indifferent, but in fact her eyes were rolling. The old scholar is actually not helping people to resolve grievances. It's just a natural toil and can't help but say that it's done. Aunt Feng and Baiwafudi have settled a grievance. It's the best and it doesn't matter. Aunt Feng held the colorful knot the size of a copper coin, and the green silk was like a waterfall, pouring from one shoulder, like a sudden flood bursting a bank, flowing turbulently between the deep valleys and gullies. The old scholar suddenly raised a hand without squinting. Senior, stop. Aunt Feng was puzzled and joked, Why, when I was the girl in the hook, I want to undress and undress? When things are coming, the big masters are instead counseled. The old scholar was so frightened that he couldn't speak well, and waved his hands vigorously, and drank a sip of the wine to suppress the shock. Suddenly, Aunt Feng rewrapped the colored knot on a blue silk and said, Understood, when Xing wants to give this benefit to Chen Ping and to help him travel through China in the coming year, so as to forge a blessing with 100 flowers. Pile of good destiny? The old scholar smiled and said, Senior is wise. Aunt Feng smiled and said, Being a sir, is it hard work for the students to pave the way? The old scholar shook his head and said, Wrong, let the many saints in the Middle-earth Confucian temple who did not recognize the knowledge of Wensheng's lineage before, and now they have greatly improved their impressions. It is the credit of my closed disciple. Seeing me at best it was a good deal with Wensheng, but now it is different, and I am willing to sincerely ask a few words from my old talent. And what made these old-fashioned changes their attitude was not Qin Pinggan's sword, or even the deployment of soldiers and strategists who commanded the line of hidden officials in the Summer Palace, but this one who was more notorious in the Great Wall of Jianqi than Aliang. The scholars who originally hated Haoran's Great Wall of Sword Qi and later Fei Xingcheng, there is the sound of Lang Longshu, especially for those local sword repairers, and gradually have a relatively peaceful attitude towards Haoran. At least they recognize Haoran's fact. They're good and bad. Perhaps Qin Pinggan himself hasn't realized one thing yet. Although he has not personally changed a jianghu or anything, he has actually changed the customs of a sword-like Great Wall. Probably this is the spring breeze diving into the night, moistening things silently. Aunt Feng lifted the slender puppet that was called the palm of her hand, and gently rubbed her red nails with the belly of her thumb, and asked casually, "The inn was very quiet before, didn't Wensheng seem particularly worried about Qin Pingan?" The old scholar shook his head and said, "Passing the heart pass and cutting the heart demon, my disciple of closing door, I am not here yet." But in fact the old scholar almost called the saint directly. Anyway, bragging is not against the law. Then the old scholar smiled, turned around and picked up the wine jar. It's human nature to live a stable life for a long time. It is inevitable to be boring. This is human nature. The pleasures of the world are like drinking alcohol, often when you wake up, it is extremely difficult to keep only loss. But bitter things are like tea, and there are often opportunities to be free of bitterness, which makes people feel cherished. The ordinary thing is to drink water, which is not tasteful, but you have to drink it every day. Auntie Feng still bowed her head, with one hand cocked and the other hand gently touching the bright red nails, as if she hadn't heard the meaning of Wensheng. The old scholar gently put down the jar of 100-flour stuffed rice. Seeing that the auntie was deliberately pretending to be stupid, he simply pointed out, "Now don't think about betting any more. It's considered kind enough. Besides, our ritual saint is not very good-tempered. I urge seniors to say that you don't mess with anyone. For thousands of years, the ritual has not said a few words in the Confucian temple. On the contrary, I have great patience with you, and I have never talked less. Don't take some scholars abiding by the rules as justified." Aunt Feng raised her head and said with a smile, "Okay, I know. Don't worry, in the Lizhu cave, I'm the one who listens to me the most." The old scholar nodded and said, "That's why I went through this experience." Aunt Feng did nothing less about betting, but compared to other old immortals her methods are gentler and more recent, like Sun Jiashu of Lao Longqing, Zhou Ju from Xuanhu Academy and Aunt Feng. There have been different ways of preaching and protecting the way, such as the ancestral abacus of the Sun family, and the digital golden incense villain. The latter likes to roll on the abacus, which means the wealth is rolling. When Sun Jiashu meditates on the numbers, the golden little people will push the abacus beads. This is not a practice method, it is a veritable gift of supernatural power. Then there is the book on the house of the Sun family on the table, the inconspicuous oil lamp that needs to be constantly fueled by the patriarch of the Sun family is also the handwriting of Aunt Feng. Auntie Feng began to change the subject, saying, "The appointment letter written by Wensheng Gang Qin Pingan, is it counted as unprecedented? To talk about this I have to drink a little wine to cheer up." The old Xiao just took a sip of Baihua stuffed rice. "It's okay. The old man has no time to talk to me in Suishan. The saint of ceremony is very busy. The three leaders of the Confucian temple, Fu Lao Fu Jing Xing Shiping. Plus together anyway there must be more than 20 scholars who are qualified to eat cold pork head. They are all kind to help review the text." Aunt Feng said with emotion, "To be honest, I still can't believe that Qin Pingan can really get to where I am today." The old scholar cocked Erlang's legs, covered his knees with his hands, looked at the sky, smiled and said, "I don't know the moon when I am young. He is called a white jade plate. Listen, my brother Bai is a child of a wealthy family when I was a child, otherwise where can I write such a verse like me and Pingan, a poor people like us at least feel like a white bowl, a pie, and how can I say such a rich bastard or a white jade plate?" Aunt Feng asked curiously, "Will Bai Yi be a sword repairman in this life?" The old scholar did not answer this question, but just smiled to himself. Whether he was a sword repairer or not, Bai had to wear a tiger hat before he reached his age. It was okay when I was young, it looked cute, and it was still like that when I was young, isn't it just silly? However, the old scholar thinks that this kind of whiteness is actually another kind of pride that I have never had before. My old talent adds another great beauty to the world. Aunt Feng smiled and said, "Earthly branch monks, although their temperament is not bad, but they are inevitably arrogant, and the eyes are above the top. This is good, I met you, a closed disciple, and it was really hard. Nearly half of the cultivators who have almost beaten them will have a heart demon, and they deserve to be the hidden officer of the Great Wall of Sword Qi." She couldn't help but drank a sip of wine as a celebration. Those little rascals, didn't they even look at her before? Although it is related to their ignorance of her identity, even if they do, they may not respect her how. Especially the sword repairer Xuanhuan, whose heart is higher than the sky, in fact for so many years, has been trying to kill A with the flying sword, Stop Spirit, which was renamed Yelong. The old Xiaozai said, "With the earthly branches, there will be heavenly stems, and there will be plans such as 28 stars. For example, on Bai Yujing's side, Da's second child has been planning the 500 spiritual officials. The most important thing about this kind of thing is to fight for the first place. It is to occupy a certain one first, and it will form a kind of first hand of the great circle. For example, the monk of the earthly branch, the first one is like Cui Yang's first hand on the chessboard. Whoever makes this move will form an indestructible chessboard. If others want to imitate this move, it will be too late and will be rejected by the Tao. And this pioneer must be the reincarnation of A with numerology, and the threshold is extremely high. Aunt Feng hesitated for a moment, waved her sleeves, and a breeze swept across a fire temple. Then she said, Lu Qin set up a fortune-telling stall in Lizhu Cave. After all, I personally participated in the completion of the earthly branch. I've talked to Lu Qin and listened to him. Obviously, he had already counted Cui Yang's plan. It was just that when he mentioned it, he was rather absent-minded, saying, the poor Tao skills are shallow and I dare not be the first in the world. I can only follow others. Behind his ass, draw a scoop according to the gourd, at most winning by quantity. Lu Qin said something strange to me when he arrived, saying that an accident given by Cui Yang was the real accident of the wild world. Later I learned that it was saying that Aquarius Island was blocking the wild world. The old scholar has weird eyes and complex complexion. Aunt Feng noticed the strangeness of the old scholar. Any other mysteries? The old scholar was drinking and not talking. When high of the wild world is thorough. Before he reached the sky he chose the first hand for 10 days. After he went to the sky the wild world immediately filled up 10 people. The key first was his closed disciple, the Jiaxian account clogs. Later Zhou Qinggao stepped into the Jade Realm. Beipingzu Dali State Master Cui Yun began to build the 12 earthly branches. After is the 28 stars of Bai Yujing's 3 masters. The first step is the younger brother of that generation of teachers and apprentices, with the name Shanqing. The former Haoran Jia Sheng and later Wen Hai Zhoumi are the first to start the layout of the monastic years. Lu Qin might not have thought of this later than Zhoumi and Cui Yang, but even if he had thought of it early he would definitely be unwilling to work because of his loose nature and tired temper. Aunt Feng said helplessly, Wen Sheng, don't be silent. The old scholar sighed, raised his hand and pointed to his head. Cui Yang deliberately suppressed his mind many years ago, that is, deliberately lowered his chess power. When did he move his hand? When Aoyang returned to the Haoran world, it might be earlier. I don't even know what it means to be unconscious. Therefore Cui Huang's soul separated out Cui Dongshan. Although he did have a plan, it was a layout of one continent. One of the links, but the biggest intention is just a blind trick. You can fool yourself before you can deceive all the mountain monks in the world. So for Zhoumi and the entire wild world, this is the biggest accident. With this accident there was a later accident. Do you really think that Zhoumi has no defense against Aquarius? How could it be possible? You have to know that the whole barren world's worst strategy is the best strategy of Zhoumi alone, since Zhoumi has long been on guard against Aquarius and the Dali court, especially the ascending platform in the Pearl Cave sky is even more a must-have thing, so how can Zhoumi not have an extremely meticulous calculation? The old scholar murmured, now that we are aggressively attacking the wilds, what are we lacking? Immortal money? Manpower and material resources? The strength of the mountain monks? No, these are the ones that we dominate. The only thing missing, the most lacking, it was such a big accident that Zhoumi couldn't even count. Aunt Feng was stunned. Cui Yang is sick, right? It's no wonder that in the Lizhu cave Cui Dongshan, who was able to play the game with Zheng Juzhong, and Qi Jingchun's master brothers, turned against each other, using the future younger brother as a chessboard. Cui Yun was always at a disadvantage. It's very interesting. It's interesting to see the boy with a mole on his eyebrows eating everywhere, falling and falling again. She stood by and watched the excitement. In fact, she was quite gloating. You didn't drink less at that time. As a result, your old talent is today. With me, is this actually the embroidered tiger deliberately? Then Qi Jingchun had already understood, just to cooperate with it? Well, you two brothers, when we are all fools. Aunt Feng slapped her head and shook her head vigorously and said, no, old scholar, you have said it yourself. It is his best strategy to reach the sky carefully. Cui Huang and Qi Jingchun, why don't they stop? Isn't it a deliberate plan? It ended up in vain? Field? The old scholar squinted his eyes and said, we have preserved Luxiazu, Beiju Luzhou and Iazhao, so that the mountains and rivers of the 3 continents will not lose an inch, and the 8 continents have not been occupied by the wild world, and the Middle-earth continent is besieged. How many fewer people have we died in the world? In Aunt Feng's mouth, is it just a waste of work? Aunt Feng was horrified and immediately got up and apologized. When I was the one who failed to speak. Is really this old talent who came to visit the door. He smiles and is not stingy. He is so friendly and approachable so that Aunt Feng almost forgot about it. When has a few progeny which temper is good. Cui Yang, the national teacher who once said, His Majesty the Emperor only needs to listen? After hitting the sword fairy embryo in the Middle-earth divine continent, Lu Shirlu, who once expelled the world's water descendants to flee in a hurry, just to survive? Forcing Qi Jingchun, the ancestor of the Lu family of Yin and Yang family, who almost couldn't solve it by himself. Or the disciple of the closed door who just cut off the head of the Empress Dowager Dali not long ago. And the source of this trend is the old talent in front of him. The old scholar nodded and then blinked. I really don't know the reason. Am known for only accepting apprentices and teaching. Am not good at these rounds and corners. It's enough that blue is better than blue. My old talent is not good at it, but several of my students are very good at it. The first disciple, Shaoqi, the closed disciple. As for Zuozuo and Junqian, they are all fools who lack roots. You will only show up on the younger brother's side looking for scolding, right? Dare to blame Mr. for being partial? Of course not. Aunt Feng was really curious. She said, Master Wenxing, just a reminder, there will be a reward. For example, I am willing to help the Confucian Temple and take the initiative to do something in the wild world. As for merit, it is all counted. In the vein of Wenxing. The old scholar shook his head. Farewell, seniors don't need to be like this. I am ashamed for being ineffective. Our line is not good for this one. Aunt Feng sat back on the steps, raised her head and took a sip of wine, wiped her mouth and smiled bitterly. I dare not go back to the town because of what Wenxing said. I didn't think it was dangerous before, but it was more interesting. Now I start to feel panicked. Look at that year. A Liju cave sky just like the landscape of mountains and rivers, just so little people. The teacher of the small town school, and the saint who once sat in the sky of Liju cave, Qi Jingchun. Later, his nephew Cui Dongshan, or his former brother Cui Yang. Old sword strip under the bridge. One of the 5 highest, sword bearer. Back then, Aunt Feng and the others had actually mistakenly thought that she was just the sword spirit. Wanxiu. Lilu. God of fire, God of water. 5 to the highest 2. Pharmaceutical shop old man Yang, Qingtong Tianjun, Eastern Prince, holding one of the 2 old heavenly ascending platforms, was once the ancestor of the male earth immortal. Master Yao of Long Kiln. Mr. Sanshan Jiuho, master of magic and supernatural powers, master of the world talisman, alchemy. Fulu Street, Li Shixing, the first disciple of Taoist ancestors, is one of the one of by Yujing master. Lu Qin who sets up a stall, Qingming Tianxia and by Yujing the 3 head teachers. Jigui the last real dragon in the world. Walking through the streets, carts selling candied haws, Zhou Zi, a yin and yang family who does everything in heaven. Aunt Feng, an old coachman, the ancestor of the Fulong family, the ancestor of the Lu family of the 5 elements family and the Middle-earth family. Lier. Zheng Dafeng the gatekeeper. Originally expected to break the barrier of heaven and become of pure martial artist, Cui Cheng. Fang Wang Song Changjing, who served as a kiln supervisor for a period of time. Blind Taoist Jia Sheng, the dragon slasher 3,000 years ago. Ruan Xiong, the first swordsmith in Aquarius. Tianjun Xiesher, whose ancestral home is in Taoye Lane, and Chao Shi, the sword fairy whose ancestral home is in Nipping Lane. Ning Yao, the first person in the colorful world today. Later, Baidi Chengjing Juzhong also appeared in the small town. Just imagine, anyone who travels in a foreign country who dares to make a mistake here, claiming to be invincible? Better than swordsmanship? Daoifei? Martial arts? Supernatural power? Calculation? Regardless of whether you are a great monk in the Ascension realm, whether it is Nan Guangzhou who has been decapitated by criminal officer Haosu, or the powerful ascension of Yishio's background and Taoist name Qingmi, if you know in advance a little Liju cave sky all the truth and the inside story of Qin Lingjun, it is estimated that they have to walk with soft legs, and they may not be as courageous as Qin Lingjun. In the small town, the older ones would never dare to provoke the slightest, but the younger ones would dare outsiders? In fact, I dare not. The youngest generation at that time, among them were Qin Pingying, Lu Xianying, Song Jisin, Ma Kuxuan, Li Baoping, Li Huai, Guqin, Zhaoyu, Lin Shui, Xialing, Sudian, Shilingshan. Looking back, even if it is the locals in the small town or the existence of Aunt Feng, being in it is actually the same situation as looking at flowers in the mist. Is there anything I dare not return to? I am not afraid of shadows when I am upright, and I have no ghosts in my heart, so I am not afraid of walking at night. The old scholar smiled and said, but then it's really not like you, Aunt Feng. There are endless people in the world and the time of my generation is limited. It may be because of this that we will cherish this travel in the world. The person who cultivates the Tao is no longer human. In the eyes of some people, the world is an empty city. This is not right. The old scholar stood up and planned to return to the Confucian temple. Of course, he did not forget to put the 2 jars of 100-flower brew into his sleeves and thanked Aunt Feng, but so that the master can be drunk and treat a foreign land as his hometown. Senior, it's a blessing in the world. Auntie Feng followed up and asked tentatively, Wen Sheng, don't you tell me the reason? The old scholar smiled and said, after listening so much, I'm replaced by my closed disciple, and I already have the answer in my heart. Auntie Feng stretched out her hand to twist the colorful knots and said angrily, Wen Sheng, if you don't tell me, I will treat it like nothing. The old scholar smiled and shook his head, which was boring. Besides, I didn't take it seriously. As for the closed disciples, even more so. You are not the only one who is willing to destroy the flowers. Aunt Feng sighed and accepted her fate. 1 yard, I will send things. Wen Sheng, don't worry. After taking care of Qin Pingan, he will only be regarded as a guest of honor when he travels to the Blessed Land. Maybe he will stay there for many years. It's not difficult for the Blessed Land to be a guest. For a year and 12 months, in Baiwafudi, there will be a high-ranking December flower god. Among these 12 flower gods, there will be the blessed flower master empress, and the 4 life masters who are in charge of the 4 seasons of flowers. The goddess of flowers, the 12 goddess of flowers, all have their own natal guest, and there is also the grand guest who is similar to the peony flower. Of course, Bai did not appreciate it and never visited the Blessed Land. Therefore, the imaginary title of Taishang Kaching cannot be taken seriously. It is mostly a sentimental act by the flower god. Moreover, the position of the Taishang Kaching of 100 flowers in the Blessed Land has been vacant for thousands of years. In fact, the Blessed Land is waiting for someone to be granted. My aunt retrieved the colorful knot made from the lifeline of the flower god. The eyes of the old scholar brightened, and the predecessor was so kind to compare his heart to heart. Is just the answer, I still don't say it, suffocating you to death. Aunt Feng suddenly said, why don't I make a bet with Wen Sheng? I've been drunk by me for so many years, but there is not much left. How about I bet that Qin Pingan can't give that answer? The old celebrity came into interest and said, what if the senior won? After all, the senior one is too big. In my opinion, it is simply a winning ticket, so there are only 10 altars of wine. Is it less? Aunt Feng twitched, then 18 jars of wine. I only have 2 jars for myself. If I win, the knot will still be given to Qin Pingan, but after he becomes the grand guest, he must let December flower god come to my side to admit a mistake. If Qin Pingan gets the knot and travels to the 100 flowers, regardless of whether he is the grand guest, anyway, as long as he fails to let the flower god admit his mistake, he must promise me one thing, such as protect the flower-picking thieves on the mountain from being killed. The old scholar was shocked and said, it is not appropriate to bet such a big bet. Aunt Feng smiled and said, forget it then? The old scholar rubbed his hands and said, follow it, just bet on it and bet on it. Aunt Feng used her life's magical powers. From the long river of time, it seemed to pick up a stream, and then condensed into a breeze, and went to Qin Pingan at the entrance of the inn. Aunt Feng was about to speak. The old scholar took out a jug of wine from his sleeve, shook it and said with confidence, you won't lose, so it doesn't matter if I tell you the answer first. Aunt Feng still didn't know what to say. Later that wisp of breeze returned to the flower shed of the fire god temple. After hearing the words of her husband almost instantly, Qin Pingan gave the answer on the spot, saying only 4 words, which was actually Cui Yang back then in Jianghu. I said it a long time ago. Please enter the urn. Sword of Coming Chapter 841. Qin Pingan intends to ask the old monk Lu Ka for some landscape report, from this continent and other continents, the more the better. Never wanted to go to the alley, a young Hongyu temple official came. He took the initiative to find Qin Pingan, whose official rank is not high. He has just entered the Qinglu from the 9th grade, but temporarily leads the Beijing Temple Affairs Department and the point of reference. Officially, he is a cultivator of Taoism watching the sea-level cultivation. He respectfully handed Qin Pingan a wooden official card, a spoof of Dali Mandarin with a hint of the local accent of Xuanzhou, saying that Si Qing personally ordered him to be responsible for connecting with Mr. Qin, and greet him whenever he has anytime. In addition to the official wooden plaque, a simple sword case carved with the word was also given. It was small and exquisite, but the size of a palm, and the young officials themselves had hidden the word D case, which was convenient for the two sides to fly swords to spread letters. The young man was named Xuanhu Fengshin Xiui, and was born in the second class of Xinka. Nangsanfeng is located on the right side of the Qianbu corridor. There are many yamen, and Honghu Temple is one of them. It is the neighbor of the Ministry of Industry and Administration where Guaniran is located. Chen Pingan looked at the wooden official card, the front of which was Honghe Temple, Xuban. On the other hand, the official Chao Gong suspends this card. The unlicensed person is guilty according to the law, and the borrower sin the same. No need to go out of Beijing. A glance at the handwriting reveals the handwriting of the head of the Zhao family in Tianshui. In fact, the Jie Shiming, which is used by government officials and offices in a country, also came from the patriarch of the Zhao family. At first, Qin Pingan wondered how the Dali court sent a small official from the Honghu temple to temporarily lead the repairs of the temple in the capital to follow him. Whether it was a young man's government, official rank, or monk state, it was actually inappropriate. After hearing the young man's name, he understood the thoughts hidden in the Dali imperial court. Xuanxu was born in the Han nationality of the Dali clan. The key is that his student, Chao Sunny, was a close friend. When Jing took part in the test, he and Xuanxu used to stay at the temples in the capital together. Two paupers having fun in hardship and reading leisurely, the two often went to the bookstores and shops with many cultural, recreational and antiques, but they couldn't buy them. On the side of Luapa Mountain, Chao Qingqing only mentioned Sun Chu for a group of officials and colleagues in the same year in the imperial examination, so Qin Pingan remembered the name of this student in the same year. There was a little smile on Qin Pingan's face, and he returned the wooden official badge to Xuanxu, jokingly said, "When I have a free time in a few days, let's go to Shilio Lichang together to buy books and seals. It's Hongxi Temple who paid for it. When you have the rare book that you have photographed early, and everyone seals it, just give me a hint to buy it and I will give it to you when I look back. Naturally, you won't count as a fake public aid and you will be filled with your own money." Sun Chu nodded lightly and understood. It's no wonder that Chao Sunny didn't read dead books so much. He was flexible and confident in everything. He had learned from his husband. But this Mr. Qin is indeed much more approachable than he thought. Qin Pingan put the small sword box in his sleeve and said, "Sun Shuban, I really need your help. Send some mountain mansions to the house. The more the better." Sun Chu said goodbye immediately, saying that he was going to be busy now, and Mr. Qin probably had to wait for an hour. Qin Pingan nodded and went to the alley. After talking to Lu Jia, "Don't stop the young man named Xuanxu from Hongpa Temple." The old monk naturally has no objection. He is just a sevuing monk and there is no sense of accomplishment. Qin Pingan arrived at the senior brother's house and did not close the door. He picked up a few books in Renyuniyun building to read, and waited patiently for the young man to deliver the newspaper. 1 hour away, when there was still a joss stick of incense, a carriage stopped near the alley. Sun Chu got out of the carriage, walked into the alley and whispered Mr. Chen at the door. The young man held it. Holding a paper bag, Qin Pingan came to the door without inviting young officials into the house. Sun Chu glanced at the courtyard door and left respectfully. Qin Pingan returned to the book building, sat on a Wangwali armchair produced in Danzhou, opened the bag and found that in addition to a dozen Shanshuidi newspapers from different sects in the Howran world, there were also court diaries from Lubiaman of the Dali court. Ichi Lane and Cheer Street are not far from Nangsanfeng and Kajia Lane, where there are many government offices. Xuanxu will come and go about half an hour, which means that these 20-odd newspapers are collected in less than half an hour. In addition to the Shanshui Dibao under the jurisdiction of the Ministry of Rights, it is easy to gather together. In addition, Honghe Temple needs to go to 7 or 8 tightly guarded Diya offices, and take the initiative to send the court mansion newspaper. It was Sunkus' own suggestion or the meaning of Hongshu Siqing. Qin Pingan guessed that the former is more likely. After all, not responsible for the 3 characters is one of the first-class knowledge of public practice. Qin Pingan frowned when he read the Shanhaizong residence report, wondering where he provokes this great sect of Zhongtu Shenzhou. If it is the last time he was thrown over there by the Saint of Rights, he was mistaken for an expert. Deng's disciple who broke into the sect, was then taken revenge? It's not like that. Nalan Shenxiu, the founder of the mountain who likes to smoke, looked very good at talking, but in the end the first Dibao who revealed her name was Shanhaizong, most of which was implicated by Aliang? Or was it because brother Cui Yang broke the heart of a fairy of Shanhaizong in his early years? Even with myself, the younger brother was displeased at the same time? Suddenly there was a breeze and I came to the book building. 12 altars of 100-flower stuff were dropped on the bookcase, and Aunt Feng's voice rang in the breeze. "I made a bet with Wen Sheng, am willing to give it to you. Send 12 jars of stuffed flowers. Qin Pingan asked, my husband left the Huoshan temple? Aunt Feng replied, let's go. I helped send Wenxing a scenic journey to the west coast of Aquarius Island. Qin Pingan thanked him and said with a smile, if Aunt Feng feels bad about the drinks, just bring back Baihuanian as a gift from the younger generation. Aunt Feng said, no, I still have 100 pots of stuffed rice, not bad for these 12 pots. Qin Pingan took it down by Lai Tan. With more thoughts, Qin Pingan still put it on the newspapers of the official residences, lay on the table and took out the pot of Baihua stuffed rice that had been opened in the Huoshan temple, and a plate of salted soybeans. He watched with relish. Weilang, a member of the Accompany Capital Engineering Department named Li Chue, who is proficient in hydraulic engineering, drew a map of victory in the shape of a guide, but the project was huge, involving the diversion of several Dadu vassal rivers, and the court had to send personnel to conduct field investigations. Some officials pointed out that the big wood in Yuzhang County, Hangzhou, is now too much demanded by the capital's teachers and relatives, so that the theft of giant wood can never be forbidden, so that there are often armed fights between officials and thieves. A 50-mile-long stream was found in the territory of Yunzhou under the domain of Huang Tinghua. It has not been named and the water quality is very good. The water quality is very good. According to the inspection by the Qin-Tianjian Kanyu Diocese, it is most likely to be a dragon palace site in the ancient Shu kingdom. Wuzhou's cocoons stand on the mountain, and the number of looms reached 1,200 at the end of last year, with an annual output of 30,000 horses. Whether the court can reconsider and set up a Ziluoyan here. An official of the Ministry of Rights named Wang Qinrua proposed to collect statistics on the genealogy and branch genealogy of a country, as well as the main shrines, branch shrines and branch shrines of ancestral halls in all states, counties and counties. Someone from the Ministry of War suggested abolishing part of the post, reducing the number of subordinates, avoiding redundant officials, and elaborated on the pros and cons of this move. After flipping the debao, Qin Pingan was in his sleeves, sitting in a chair with his eyes closed and rested, concentrating on one, with a grain of mustard seed. He began to tour the major natal Qi mansions in Xiaoxiandi. When I arrived at the waterhouse, there were 2 painted pictures of rain master, door gods with ambiguous faces posted at the door. They could be identified as a man and a woman. The villains in the green clothes saw Qin Pingan. All of them were very excited and a little drunk. Yes, it's because Qin Pingan just drank a pot of 100-flower stuffed rice. Within the water mansion there was another shower of rain. Qin Pingan smiled and greeted them and saw the big picture on the wall of the water mansion. The painting of blasphemy, the of the finishing touch, more and more, come to life, a painted mural just like the true body of the god because the road is hydrophilic. It was on the Sea of Clouds in the old Dragon City that year, refining the water seal, and later served as a Fan Junmao of Zhou Nanyue Girl Mountain Monarch. She personally helped protect the road, because Qin Pingan accidentally found an extremely rare water law Tao Tong during the refining process, which is the text, composed by these green-clothed boys. It is a very wonderful Taoist art, which can be directly taught to direct disciples, as the inheritance of the ancestor hall of a hilltop fairy house, so that Fan Junmao mistakenly thought that Qin Pingan was the reincarnation of a rain master. Qin Pingan squatted beside the pond with both hands in sleeves. He smiled and said with a few older boys in green clothes, "At that time we will make an appointment. Later we will send you back to the Bio Palace where the goddess buried the river. As a result, it has been delayed for so long. Don't be surprised, next time the Luapa mountain sect chooses the location of Tongyi's Hao, I will send you home." The boys in green are both happy and sad. After entering the Longmen realm in his early years, Qin Pingan refined the 2 ancient legacy swords traded by the Huawei Tianma into the 2 dragons in this Dragon Qiu pond, and the first water transport was condensed and manifested by the water pill. The Jiaolong was turned by Qin Pingan to be refined into a water transport Liju. In the end, besides the watermark of the water mansion and the map of Dedushui, a dragon pond pattern of double dragons was formed. Qin Pingan took out 2 jars of 100-flower stuff from his sleeves and placed them next to the pond that was temporarily Longqiu. He uncovered the red paper mud seal, 2 dragons, 1 black and 1 white, and their heads poked out from the water. Long Jishuizi began to drink, but they didn't seem to dare to look at the master Qin Pingan. Leaving the Shui mansion, Qin Pingan went to the mountain shrine and sprinkled the Wanyan soil used to seal the wine on the foot of the mountain, and gently tamped it with his hands. The mountains and rivers are dependent on each other, the floods form the abyss and the dragons grow and the soil forms the mountains. This is also why the ancestors of the ancestor of the ancestral hall, and the immortal master of genealogy, will try their best to make up the 5 elements that belong to the destiny. The 11 practitioners of the earthly branch in the same line are like this. This group of spiritual practice never sorrowful immortal money and heavenly treasure. The most critical piece of life is still a mountain treasure of semi-fairy rank. Just think of the old Longqing Fu family. In the early years, it was a wealthy continent and it was a way of making money. After thousands of years of hard work, it was the family of 3.5 immortal soldiers. Qin Pingan planned to say hello to Ning Yao at the inn, saying that he would stay at the house today to practice. He bypassed the desk and came to the door, tentatively shouting, "Ning Yao, can you hear me?" There is no verbal response from Ning Yao. Qin Pingan had to run to the inn, but as soon as he walked to the door of the house, he heard Ning Yao ask, "What's the matter?" Qin Pingan said, "I'll be here for now. Let's go to see Yu Hong and Zhou Heijing's ring together tomorrow morning?" Ning Yao said that there is no problem. Qin Pingan suddenly remembered that he wasn't staying here so he could stay at the inn. "I was a little sad, so I simply walked into the alley, went to the White Jade Dojo and chatted with a pair of masters and apprentices." The young Zhao Duanming had just finished a big week and was practicing those spicy-eyed fist and foot poses. The monk was sitting on the futon. Qin Pingan squatted aside, and asked the boy for a handful of spiced peanuts. Lu Jia asked, "How come you have a relationship with Hongfu Temple?" Qin Pingan smiled and said, "I have a student named Chao Sunny, have you heard of it?" Lu Jia thought for a while, "That new subject?" Qin Pingan said, "Chao Qingqing and the Xuanhu class of the Hongtong Temple were in the same year of the examination. When they went to Beijing to participate in the Chunwei test, they met each other and had a good relationship." Lu Jia asked puzzledly, "Your student, how can you just be the second best player, not the champion?" Qin Pingan didn't bother to talk nonsense, but squinted at the old monk and dropped the peanut shell on the ground. Zhao Duanming shouted and punched, shouting, "Master, don't you know, I heard from my grandfather that Chao Bangyan's imperial examination is full of talents and prosperity, let alone Chao Sunny and Yang Shuang. The second place and Tanhua are the top Malin Langs in the second grade Jinshi. It is not difficult to get a champion if you put it aside." Lu Jia said casually, "There is a spring festival every 3 years in the capital. It is not surprising that there are 1 in 3 places every time. If you want me to see, since I haven't got a champion, it's better to take a look at the flower, the youngest Jinshi." The 2 of them rode horseback to Beijing together to show off. If I remember correctly, Yang Shuang was 18 years old and that little guy was only 15 years old? How old was your student Chao Sunny then? Is it a crown? Qin Pingan smiled and said, "Master Lu is this year?" Lu Jia said with a smile, "If I participated in the imperial examinations when I was young, I would be the one to explore the flowers on horseback." Qin Pingan left this White Jade Dojo young and Young said, "Master, that Chao Sunny is very powerful. My grandfather chatted privately with old friends from the Ministry of Rituals, and specifically mentioned him and talked about the economics and military preparations. The presidents of the 2 departments and more than a dozen room masters also deliberately gathered together to review the papers." Lu Jia smiled and said, "Nonsense, I don't know that Chao Sunny is not easy?" The master deliberately responded to Qin Pingan. He is still not satisfied with Pei Qian as a disciple of the mountain. There is also a proud student who won the top spot in the exam. Show something stinky with me. Zhao Duanming cautiously said, "Master, in the next night, your old man will be careful when walking at night. I heard Brother Qin said that Zhao Shilang of the criminal department was hung up on the tree." The old monk made his eyelids tremble, and threw a capital servant to hang on the tree? Lu Jia wondered, Zhao Yu of the Xing department? Isn't he a fellow of Qin Pingan? Besides, he is a scholar of the same culture. The relationship is very stiff? Not so. I heard you say before that Zhao Yu still took the initiative to look for him. Qin Pingan? This is a taboo thing in official circles. Zhao Duanming nodded and said, "Yes, they seem to have a good relationship, and the relationship between the uncle and the nephew is as familiar as the 2 of us and Brother Qin. So you have to be careful, Master." Lu Jia said in a huff, "Why did you go?" The young man said aggrieved, "Master, you have just witty remarks and there are words about needles hidden in the cotton." I listened very energetically and I couldn't bear to interrupt. The old monk glanced at the side of the futon. He smiled and said, "Duanming Minger, don't you want to go to the ring with Chao Jiogui? Take your brother Qin together to help occupy a good place." Zhao Duan knows his eyes and said, "Where Brother Qin needs my help, he himself has an innocence card awarded by the Ministry of Justice for worship." The old monk complained, "It's a matter of mind at all, I don't understand this." You are still a bureaucrat and you are stupid by lei pai? Zhao Duanming snorted, and continued to play the self-taught martial arts style. I wonder if he can take a martial arts master like Yu Hong and Zhou Haijing with a punch and a half punch? The next day, near the Huoshan Temple, a well-known mountaintop questioning boxing session was about to begin. The old shopkeeper of the inn originally wanted to talk to Qin Pingan and take his daughters together, so as not to be missed by the little thief or the slutty, but he never thought that his daughters would run away early in the morning. Most of them were with those friends. An appointment was made and the old man had to give up. The news of this question of boxing actually began to spread throughout the streets of the capital a month earlier, so when it was close to the Huoshan Temple, it originally only needed a stick of incense. Qin Pingan and Ning Yao walked a full half an hour. The crowds of people along the way, coupled with the small vendors who saw stitches on both sides of the road, made several nearby roads leading to the martial arts ground behind the Huoshan Temple become more and more congested, with women screaming from time to time, or panic of losing something. There is a young man or a young man who has agile steps, like a fish swimming in the flow of people. Whether it is the property of the common people or the young woman, once he succeeds he will disappear for a moment. Ning Yao began to regret that he had followed Qin Pingan to join in the fun. It was too noisy. Just such a distance, the disciples who tried to get closer were picked up by Qin Pingan. One of them was picked up by Qin Pingan. Qin Pingan smiled and squinted his wrists and pulled his toes to the ground. The pain immediately made his face pale with pain. Qin Pingan released his hand and patted the opponent's head. The latter became dizzy and immediately led people away. After a few times, there was no more people dare to come here to take advantage. These young men and women are those practicing family. On the road, a group of gangsters were smashed by a few government officials. They directly took the scabbard and slammed them on their heads. They fell to the ground with blood on their foreheads. They hugged their heads and squatted on the ground. There are also many sachets touched from women. Among them was an old government official who seemed to know one of the young men. He pulled him aside, glared at him, reprimanded a few words, and told the young man to leave immediately. All the others were taken to the county office by one of his subordinates. Yu Hong, gray-haired, burly stature, this old Zhuang dynasty martial artist, is said to be 150 years old and strong. He broke the border and reached the top of the mountain a few years ago. According to a designated route given by the Ministry of Justice in advance, the old master rose from a place south of the capital, the wind fell to the ground, and he appeared in the square behind the Huoshan Temple in an instant, attracting waves of applause. As for Zhou Haijing, a female great master from a small country in the southwest coast, she still hasn't shown up yet. Before reaching the top of the mountain, Zhou Haijing was unknown and born as a fisherman by the sea, like the daughter of a fish market owner. 57 years old this year, but a young face in her early 20s, slender, and rumored to have a very good appearance. Today, most of the children of meritorious officials in the capital rushed to her. As for that Yu Hong, what can be seen? Look at the old man's tendon meat. At a place not far from the martial arts field, there was a carriage parked at the entrance of the alley. In the carriage there was a young woman sitting cross-legged, breathing long and calm. She squeezed a piece of flour cake, named Fu Shouxiang, which is extremely popular in Beijing. One continent and 100 countries gathered together in one city. The driver who drove for her was an extremely elegant and handsome man, wearing a snow-white robe, a green bamboo hanging on his waist and a long sword green pearl on his back. The woman changed her hand and held the flour cake. Across the curtain, she and the coachman outside chuckled softly. I feel wrong that Mr. Su is the coachman. The man who was called by Zhou Haijing to drive Mr. Su was the sword fairy of green bamboo, Su Lang, who belonged to Songxi State in the central Aquarius Island. Not long ago, Su Lang had just closed his retreat and successfully entered the remote travel realm. Now he has secretly served as the second-class worship of the Dali Penal Department, and he and Zhou Haijing met in the rivers and lakes in the early years. Of course, Su Lang is a master of beauty. There are ideas, but one is intentional, the other is unintentional. This time Zhou Haijing is in Beijing to challenge Yu Hong, and Su Lang will do his best to be a landlord in public and private. Zhou Haijing put down the flour cake and then picked up a vanity mirror, looking from left to right, looking very carefully. No matter how you look at it, she is a lovely woman, a peerless beauty. Then she showed a look of self-pity and self-sufficiency. She is really not young anymore and she is still a man who doesn't like her. It's a pity that there is no one to ask if she should make up for beauty. Su Lang said, I wonder if Pei Qian will come over to watch the battle? Among the 4 great masters of Yizhou Wuping, Pei Qian ranked second, the youngest and the best reputation. Zhou Haijing, in a goose yellow dress, shook his head and while lightly applying yellow stickers on his forehead, said, "Mostly she will come but she may hide her figure." It can be seen that Pei Qian is a person who doesn't like false names. Zhou Haijing glanced at the makeup box at his feet, frowned slightly. It was not easy to earn some dowry money. There are still a lot of chaos and distractions to fill in. There is no way the opportunity is rare. There is no shop in this village and there are many shops in Beijing, including silk and satin powder and hairpin jewelry. As for the family, they have negotiated the price early. If the contract is breached and anything is missing, it will have to lose a lot of money afterwards. Su Lang reminded, "Yu Hong is here." Zhou Haijing hurriedly cleaned up, got up, bent down, raised the curtain, jumped out of the carriage, and she was full of jewels, not like a martial artist about to learn from others, but more like a rich woman who was used to hard days and suddenly became rich, but all valuable objects that can be displayed are worn on the body, head and hands. Su Lang held back his laugh, looking really funny, but if he felt Zhou Haijing's fists were soft because of this, it would be a big mistake. Zhou Haijing was not in a hurry to take a long stature. She went to the martial arts field and stopped by the carriage. She cautiously supported a golden hairpin that looked like leaning out of the cliff, and said, "Don't laugh, Mr. Su. I don't know how difficult it is to make money through hard times." On the roof of a restaurant far away from the martial arts venue, the young Zhao Duanming stretched out his hand to strangle a man's neck and said annoyed, "Chao Jiugue? This is what you call near the water tower, a treasured land of feng shui?" Chao Gingxin, who had long since returned to the capital for promotion from Longzhou Kiln Affairs supervisor, patted the young man's arm and coughed. "Tell me that you are a cultivator. At such a distance, isn't it a tiny difference? It's really clear. Besides, Heirace a wide field of vision, you have to admit it, don't you? Loosen it and accidentally choke the court commander to death, which is a serious crime." Instead, Zhao Duanming increased his strength and said angrily, "The dignified master magistrate in the capital begged Grandpa to tell Grandma, and finally asked for such a position. Who was there before and slapped my chest and shook the sky and made trouble with me?" Chao Gung tilted his heart, rolled his eyes and drooped his head. Zhao Duanming quickly released his hand. Chao Gingxin straightened his waist immediately, took off the bright wine gourd around his waist, took a sip of wine, craned his neck, and looked at Zhou Haijing on the side of the carriage at the alley. He was so slim. Tremble, ready to come out, ordinary men, difficult to grasp. Chao Gingxin looked down a little, wiped his mouth, squinted his eyes, stretched out his fingers and measured it from a distance. He said with emotion, "Sister Haijing, she is well known and her legs are really long." Zhao Duanming glanced at Chao Gingxin's crotch. Chao Gingxin was just a normal line of sight, one big and one small, and he looked at each other with a sharp smile. It seemed that the other party's concentration was good, and he could still hold it. Chao Gingxin coughed, "Duanming, be more decent." Zhao Duanming sneered and said, "I heard my second aunt said that you were only in your early 10 years, and you began to secretly care about selling albums on Cheer Street in Xixiang. Hey, if you can't afford it, I heard that you can borrow it every day. Double one price." Chao Gingxin said with a smile, "Then your second aunt said that she was one of the oil bottles on the back of mine and helped me walk through the door to cover up. She paid dividends. We did business in partnership. Every time before going back to each house, they would sit together on the blue bricks under the wall of the palace and count the money. Only your second sister had the brightest eyes, spitting and counting silver ingots, weighing silver ingots and gold ingots. I have to be skilled." Zhao Duanming was dumbfounded. "Can't it? The second aunt in the impression is a famous virtuous lady, one of the few ladies in Ichi Lane, and the early beggars have broken the threshold." However, Zhao Duanming also knew that, in fact, in her heart for many years, like many women, she always secretly hid a drunkard, and then became estranged but only polite. Zhao Duanming couldn't figure it out. Why didn't the second aunts like that nerd Yuan Jingding, but they liked Chao Gingxin, a guy who was full of evil and notorious when he was young? Is it really that bad old saying that men are not bad and women do not love? The boy once heard from my grandfather that there were many elders in Ichi Lane and Cheer Street in the early years. They guarded against Chao's little thieves who did not do their jobs every day. Just like anti-thief, the most famous thing was that they were a little older than Chao Gingxin. The year-old Yuan's prostitute, who is Yuan Zhengding's relatives, somehow provoked Chao Gingxin when she was a child. As a result, Chao Gingxin, who was only 5 or 6 years old, went to block the door every day. As long as she went out, Chao Gingxin would take off her pants. So until now, there are still people of the same age who like to call Chao Gingxin Chao Thief. Zhao Duanming asked in his heart, "You want to ask me about Mr. Qin?" Chao Gingxin shook his head and smiled. What to ask, what is the meaning? Even if you don't say a word, it is better than a face-to-face greeting. Zhao Duanming nodded and asked a very curious question in Ichi Lane in Cheer Street. Chao Jiugue, why are you still bachelor when you are not young? My second aunt said you may be because you don't like women and you like men. So I haven't married for a long time. Chao Gung slapped his knees with anger and said, Good fellow, I said why my father and mother were separated from each other, so I asked me some weird words, what kind of temper my father, what a gentleman's style, all began to imply that I can go to the brothel to drink more flowers and wine. It turns out that it is the broken-mouth aunts, including your second aunt, who do not get the body and mind of my lover, so they abuse me secretly. I am too old, otherwise I have to. As soon as they took off their pants, Guangxier chased them and cursed. Zhao Duanming laughed and said, Even if you take off your pants, Chao Jiugue, you may not see anything. Chao Gung said with emotion, Today's Ichi Lane and Cheer Street are not as interesting as when I was a kid. Then Chao Gingxin touched the young man's head. I haven't forgotten the old marriage of Lingjiu, winning this life and making it happy. You are still young and don't understand. Chao Gingxin suddenly turned to face the distance and picked up the wine gourd. On the ridge of a roof, a man in a green shirt smiled and lifted the red wine gourd in his hand. It turned out that Qin Pingan discovered that he was on the ground, so don't even think about it. Many people came directly from home with benches and chairs, so it didn't matter whether they would reveal the identity of the fairy. Ning Yao passed away in a flash and came to the roof with a wide view. That Zhou Haijing, with a graceful figure, walked towards the martial arts field in a hurry, holding a pot of Xinjia wine from the mountain in her hand, and she drank as she walked. Ning Yao was a little surprised. Is this female master who is about to ask people to fight too much? Qin Pingan only felt that he was eye-opening, but he could still make money like this? I can't learn it by myself. Zhou Haijing's dress, hairpin, cosmetic powder, hand-shining wine. She is like a moving golden sign helping to attract business. Sure enough, in the flow of people, there are constantly shops proclaiming that such and such objects on Grandmaster Zhou are from such and such shops. The Huashan Temple martial arts field has set aside a fairy family's snail dojo. If you only look at the people in the dojo and confront the two sides, in the eyes of ordinary masters, they are as small as mustard seeds. Fortunately, they are leaning on a few mirrors in the Changchun Palace. The Dao Shui curtain stands all around, delicately visible. There is a mirror flower on the mountain, deliberately staying on Zhou Haijing's hair bun and dress for a long time, and the mirror flower in other places, deliberately or unintentionally aiming at the makeup and earrings of the great female master. Some of the storytellers who ate in the capital restaurant, especially solemnly, kept writing records of the female grandmaster, and the next two martial arts masters' tricks and actions were all true in the future. Gold and silver. Zhou Haijing threw the wine bottle to the ground. His mother's taste was really ordinary. She had to pretend to be drinking first-class wine. She was more tired than a dry stand. Then she swayed on her toes and landed in the martial arts arena. Yanran smiled, clasped her fist and said loudly, Zhou Haijing has seen Senior Yu. Yu Hong clasped his fists in return. Ning Yao asked, How about the outcome of this challenge? Qin Pingan smiled and said, As far as it seems, Zhou Haijing still has a better chance of winning. The martial arts of the 9 realms of the two sides are about the same, but Zhou Haijing has a life and death spirit. Regardless of their respective killers, the odds of winning are roughly 6 to 4. Well, Yu Hong is rushing to win punches, Zhou Haijing is rushing to kill people. In fact, they are here high level of martial arts, fighting over and over, is to fight for a mentality. Fist knows how to do it, no one is in front of him. Ning Yao asked, How many punches can they carry if they are against you? Qin Pingan smiled and said nothing, just drinking. Ning Yao said, I want to ask you something. Qin Pingan had to answer honestly, if you really want to decide the outcome earlier, it's just a punch. Taking a sip of wine, Qin Pingan watched the confrontation on the side of the martial arts field. But I really want to face me, even if I know my identity in advance. They both are willing to try it, so I'm still not as good as Chao Ci. If their opponent is Chao Ci, no matter how high-spirited he is, no matter how conceited he is in his martial arts and martial arts foundation, don't talk about no one in front of him. They are just like a mountain or a city in front of him. Hope to win. Ning Yao asked again, what if it is Pei Chen's 9 realms? Qin Pingan thought for a while and said, leave aside the relationship between master and student, 3 to 5 punches will be the winner, and 10 punches will be life and death. Suppose Song Changjing wants to challenge you? At the moment I am sure to lose. As for how to lose, it is hard to say if I have not played. Qin Pingan suddenly said, Two foreigners from Beiju Luzhou have arrived. They were all experts who Qin Pingan knew them and they didn't know themselves. Beiju Luzhou, female martial artist, embroidered woman. The other man monk once had a fight with her in Tori Mountain. Ning Yao glanced at the man and said, this person's previous two realms of immortality, greed and desire to chew, miscellaneous but not refined, and the height is limited. Even if he enters the Yupu realm, the bottleneck will still be relatively large afterwards. Qin Pingan held sleeves in both hands holding a wine gourd and whispered, he was born in Yishio, it's impossible. You can only accept what God gives for fear of missing a little bit. People like Song Su and Han Zhoujin who practiced a path of cultivation, are not ordinary lucky. They are much exaggerated than the ancestral biography of the ancestor of the ancestor. They have the foundation of their own qualifications and talents and understanding. They are already excellent. Qi practitioners, the refining of the 5 elements belong to the destiny, and the opening of the mountain Qi residences other than the princes are extremely particular and fit their own numerology. Everyone has different talents, especially those who are born with something different from common sense. The natal supernatural powers, and everyone has the treasures of the immortal family, plus a group of preachers, all are high-ranking people with supernatural powers. I dare to say that I don't take detours, but this genius of monasticism, carefully cultivated by Dali, did not take any detours. There were fierce battles and hardships. The Tao heart was polished to be close to flawless, no matter if it was against people. Fighting together or jointly beheading to kill the enemy, are all experienced so they act sophisticated and have a firm mind. As long as they are steadily beaten by them, step by step to the upper 5 levels, on this Aquarius mountain, everyone is destined to shine. Once the last term is made up, the 12 will join forces, and within 100 years, it will be like an imitation by Yujing walking by a big Li. Maybe there will be a chance to kill a great monk in the ascending state, but of course it is the ascending state of the Nangguang group. As for the ascending state of Dao No Qing's secret, even if the earth branch can win, it is still difficult to kill. The appearance of Qin Pingan and the 3 battles in succession are to a certain extent, more like filling up the vacancy, helping the monks of the earthly branch and repairing the last flaws in their respective Dao Xn. Qin Pingan pointed to the sachet hanging on Zhou Heijing's waist and explained, this sachet is mostly her own belongings and has nothing to do with business. Because according to the customs of the seaside fishermen of her vassal country, she wears it as a woman. A silk sachet embroidered with a swallow pattern flower letter period is used by a woman to tie her body after marrying a woman to show that she belongs to her body and mind. Ning Yao nodded, this custom is quite interesting. Qin Pingan whispered, I'm actually thinking about one day in the future after visiting Zhongtu Shenzhou and Qingming Tianxia. I personally wrote a book similar to Shanhai Zitzi, which specifically introduces the local customs and customs, regardless of the details. He wrote a multi-million character masterpiece, not selling on the mountain, but specializing in the business under the mountain, mixed with some hearsay landscape stories. It is estimated that it will be better than any legend, small profits but quick turnover and fine water flow. Ning Yao lifted his chin and clicked on the woman who was dressed in powdery clothes. You can do business in partnership. Qin Pingan smiled and said, forget it, I don't care to watch this questioning punch. Qin Pingan moved the position, don't keep the sword gourd around his waist, and leaned back, resting his head on Ning Yao's lap and said, tell me after the fight and take you to the restaurant. Closing his eyes, Qin Pingan actually started to doze off and fell asleep. Song Jisin left the residence of the accompanying capital and took a trip to imitate by Yujing. After that, the capitals first sent a letter to the Dali Palace and the Ministry of Ritual by Feijian, and then Song Jisin took a border army ferry to the capital. According to Dallas laws, it was not a matter of random for the kings to enter Beijing. It was because Song Mu had the most authority among the kings and had more restrictions. What's more, the current Dali accompanying capital and the capital were vaguely facing north and south. On the way to the north of the ferry, I received a reply from the Emperor Dali, and asked Song Mu to lead the mountain ferries to go to the wild world and meet the Emperor. In fact, this secret decree, His Majesty only meant that you, Song Mu, must not enter Beijing without authorization. After Song Jisin received this secret letter, he just didn't see it and continued to go north to the capital. The king Song Mu was not suitable for entering Beijing, but as a son he had to go this way, even if he and Qin Pingan were completely torn apart. Song Jisin must prevent the worst result from appearing. Standing next to him was the maid Jigue and she asked, really? You are careful to turn against the emperor before turning your face with Qin Ping, and Song Jisin nodded. His eyes resolutely said, There are always things that make people have no choice. In the Qingming world, Daxuandu observes. There is a young Taoist priest with a lotus crown on his head, his hands are on the outer wall, his head is stuck out, his feet are hanging in the air, his neck is stretched and he looks inside. An old Taoist priest appeared inside the wall out of thin air and smiled and said, "Don't look, you can't pick up to eat. If you really want to eat it, it's warm, I will take you to eat ready-made." After all, there are still some young Taoists who have just practiced, so in their Taoist temples, there are still latrines, so I don't know if this guest will be full. Guests visiting the door must be courteous and courteous. The young Taoist priest shook his head. "Forget it, I'm not hungry right now." An old master of the great Xuandu temple. By Yujing's three masters. When the two parties met and chatted, they had always been so ethereal. Dao Chang's son asked, "Since you are not busy with business, what are you doing here?" Lu Chen smiled hippily. "Guess?" Son Dao Chang said solemnly, "I don't guess." Lu Chen said, "I'm not looking at the movement here, so I ran over to congratulate the old master." Dao Chang's son frowned and said, "You haven't been to Tian Weishan? Yudo is dead, it doesn't matter?" Lu Chen smiled and said nothing. Son Dao Chang twisted his beard and said with a smile, "If this is the case, then it's even Xian Duguan and Bai Yujing, neither of them need to congratulate anyone." As a Taoist disciple Chunwei, she didn't notice the existence of the three sovereigns until this moment. She walked out of the Taoist temple and came to the street and said solemnly, "Get off." Lu Chen turned his head. "No way." Sun Dao Chang motioned her to ignore the brown candy dipped in shit. Lu Chen said with emotion, "It's just that one raised the first flying sword and it has this kind of atmosphere. It has been the only one in thousands of years and it is worthless." Dao Chang's son smiled and said, "You can do it too, our brothers have friendships as long as you are willing to break the road, I will make an exception, lick my face and go to Bai Yujing to help you protect the road, and you will be reincarnated." Reincarnation as a sword repairer is not something that can be done easily. When the time comes, the sky will roll and the world will be able to hear it. Maybe it is possible to scare Zhomi to death. Not so much. Try it out. Forget it. So unassuming? Where is the heroic and unparalleled old man Lu Shen in my mind? Ba, no death, nothing, nothing. Chunwei, come, there is a who dares to spit into the Taoist temple and hack him to death. Sister Chunwei, don't come, I will take back that saliva. There was still a flash of sword light, and Lu Chen was casually put in his sleeves, shaking his sleeves and smiling. It's all a bit like a token of love. Here again. The veteran Taoist asked the female crown to return. Lu Chen continued to lie on the wall and asked with a smile, "Have you figured out the name of Bai Yes flying sword? Do you want me to help?" Dao Chang's son shook his head. "Don't ask for words. If you weren't idle today you wouldn't come to see this guy if you didn't curse. Lu Chen asked with a smile, "Brother son, there is one thing that the younger brother still can't understand. What did you think of that year, a Tai-Bai immortal sword and you just give it away? You are so rare in the 14th realm?" In fact, in the early years the second senior brother Yudo was ready to leave Bai Yujing and fight for a fight. It is very likely that he was going to go to heaven with this old master of swords, splitting life and death. Sun Dao Chang sneered. Lu Chen clasped his fists to bid farewell. The old master Sun Huaizhong, the leader of the Taoist sword immortal line, is not only a Taoist priest, but also a peak sword repairman in the Ascension realm. Bai Yi, the world's most proud of the world, once held Tai-Bai and opened the Yellow River Cave sky with a sword, but in fact it was not a sword repair. Now Bai Yi is finally a veritable sword repairer. Ruins of Jianxi Great Wall. Jianxiu was infatuated all his life, and Wuming came to the top of the city. Always alone around, now it seems that there are two more followers around him, Wei Jin, Fairyland Jianxiu, Chao Jun, Yuaningjing Bottleneck Jianxiu. The three of them were on the top of the city, separated by a distance, practicing their own practices. The two large and small thatched huts on the front of the city have long been gone, but it seems that no one wants to restore this scene. There are more and more Haoran monks visiting here. Everyone has been reminded by the elders of the division, and it is the kind of repeated admonitions, so no one dared to approach the three swordsmen. In fact, they did not dare to approach the left and right. The elder Jianxian threw a sword book to Wei Jin in his early years, as if only waiting for Wei Jin to return to the Great Wall of Sword Qi. In Chao Jun's Heart Lake, the lake was full of withered lotus in the past, and now there are 10,000 green lotus. When Chao Jun practiced swords in his spare time, he and the Confucian sages who lived here often borrowed the Shanshui Dibao from the divine continent of the Middle Earth to play a bright shadow. Chao Jun chatted with the great sword fairy of Fengshui Temple today. If I came here early to practice swordsmanship, how many opportunities can I get with my qualifications? Drinking wine in the Wei and Jin dynasties, qualification is the next thing and it depends more on whether the character fits. In Chao Jun's opinion, he obtained a sword book here. He used to practice swords after returning home. He was a dignified swordsman and the first person in Aquarius swordsmanship. As a result, he almost practiced himself into a fall. Genius. According to Mr. Zhou, the study of swordsmanship in the Wei and Jin dynasties is actually equivalent to a questioning of swords. If you change to Chao Jun to read the swordsmanship, it will not hurt. Anyway, you can't understand it and you can't learn it because of the qualifications of the sword. Nothing. Chao Jun had some doubts at the time. Did Mr. Zhou not learn more swordsmanship by the way? The answer from the left and right is very simple. The sword score rank is very high but he does not need it. Suddenly stood up today and squinted. In the far south, alien pulled Yi Xiu Qingmi, and he had penetrated into the hinterland of the wild world, but he didn't fight a single fight from start to finish. On this day, Liang suddenly said, "Feng Shuatao, you can go back." Feng Shuatao was silent. I was reluctant to be dragged here before, let alone go. Even if it is running, as long as it can run, I will run back to Howren and hide. Now I didn't even think about following Liang to make any feats of cutting through the wild, just didn't want to go so much. As long as he had no worries about his life, walk a few steps south as much as possible. Even if he fell for one level, as long as he could return to Howren alive, it seemed to be nothing. Liang snorted, no waste, spit on the palm of his hand, stroked his forehead and temples. No? Good guy, addicted to eating and drinking? Go away, don't stay here and drag me. Feng Shuatao said, I'm in an ascendant state anyway, so it's not difficult to protect myself? Liang narrowed his expression and shook his head. I was wrong, your enemy is not the great demon in the wild world, it is me. So it is difficult. Feng Shuatao was stunned. Liang looked around and said, I will put all my strength into swords later. I am worried that I will hurt you by accident. What is it that is not holding me back? Get out of here. One south and one north, two swordsmen of the world. The highest swordsman in the world, Liang. The highest swordsmanship in the world, right and left. About to join forces to make a sword. Sword of Coming Chapter 842. Ning Yao said, this Zhou Haijing played very well. For a while, the fist is like breaking a willow, and the hand is like holding a flower for a while, and the figure flutters like a colorful cloud. In Ning Yao's view, when a martial artist fights, you punch me and kick me. In fact, it is more exciting than practicing qi on the mountain. As for swordsmanship, it is actually very boring. Compared with Zhou Haijing, who is fancy punching and quick posture, Yu Hong's fists and feet appear to be open and close. His fists are strong, his qi is like a few dragons hovering around, and Zhou Haijing's hands have been achieved several times. Had already smashed the female grandmaster's hand and a few hairpins. Those who watched the battle, especially those of Gongqing who cared about Qixiang and Cheer Street, could not lift their heads. When they saw Zhou Haijing hit the fish and rainbow with the back of his foot, the momentum sank so hard that Yu Hong moved horizontally 10 feet away in the martial arts field by kicking it. For a while, everyone shouted and applauded. Yu Hong stood still and patted his clothes. A blood trough appeared on his cheeks, slowly oozing blood. It was a small injury that Zhou Haijing had previously scratched with a hand knife. This young auntie, her hands are really black. Previously, the hand knife was like a rainbow and it seemed to cut the neck straight. It was all an illusion. Assassin, it was her thumb that actually pulled out, trying to dig out one of Yu Hong's eyeballs. Yu Hong didn't hesitate at the time and kicked Zhou Haijing's abdomen. In order to relieve his strength, the latter had to take a step back so as not to be stepped through his body. Otherwise, if he changed his hands this time, Yu Hong would use one. For the price of the eyes, I killed a mountain-level martial artist. Qin Pingan was still closing his eyes and meditating, listening to the sound of the fist. For the end martial artist who was on the first floor of the return, it was not difficult at all. He explained to Ning Yao softly, Zhou Haijing is fishing, less than half of the incense stick, deliberately 6 different methods of boxing were used, and the 17 strokes were all learned from others. They win in the skillful strokes of the boxing, and lose in the skills are superficial, overly complex and inadequate, because they are not Zhou Haijing's own real boxing methods. She doesn't tell Yu Hong the level of strength everywhere, plus the hand knife at the top. Most of it is to make Yu Hong continue to deepen the impression in her heart. Zhou Haijing is a female martial artist. I guess I wait until Yu Hong is the first. The second time she took her breath, it was when Zhou Haijing was deciding the victory or defeat with him. One accident was that she traded Yu Hong's life with a serious injury. Ning Yao doubted, both sides have hatred. Chen Pingan thought for a while, it's hard to say, some martial idiots just like to separate life and death in order to strengthen martial arts. For example, the old cook in Luopishan. Zhou Haijing held a few orbs in his hands, exerted lightly and creaked, before being affected by Yu Hong's fist. The rope was broken and most of the beads were scattered on the ground. She smiled sweetly, yes, old waste is always strong, no wonder it's open branches and leaves many children and grandchildren this trip to Beijing. I heard that the old Zhuang dynasty, your fish surnamed Wufu, majestic and powerful, fist half a country. The spectators burst out laughing. Yu Hong frowned slightly and said, Wufu martial arts, stop talking nonsense. Zhou Haijing raised his hand and let go of his fist. Several beads were pinched into a ball of powder and fluttered in the wind. She clasped her fists high and smiled. It can be regarded as a blind medicinal material to prolong life and women can use it as a powder to apply face. My wife, the shop has to add money. Yu Hong had a vaguely angry expression. Wufu learning from each other is not a child's play. Zhou Haijing, you are learning martial arts together, and your breakthrough is so smooth that you disrespect martial arts so much. Today the old man will teach you how to be a pure martial artist. Zhou Haijing patted his palms, don't teach me how to be a woman. The whistle sounded one after another. Yu Hong sneered and said, speech, what kind of pure martial arts? Then the old man will not be polite with you if you accidentally beat your mountain. Remember not to blame the sky, you asked for it. Ning Yao smiled, bent his fingers and tapped someone's forehead lightly. Chen Pingan said helplessly, I am not Ma Xuanhuan. I fight with people, especially Wen Quan. I rarely chat. Zhou Haijing pretended to be horrified, patted his heart and swayed. I saw this scene of amorous feelings. I don't know how many vagrants and Deng's disciples screamed in the audience. On the other roof, Zhao Duanming suddenly looked at one place. The young man was shocked. He pulled Chao Jengsen's sleeve and said in his heart, Chao Zhogue, your majesty and empress are here, Yu Hong and sister Zhou are so great. It's enough for the ancestors of the ancestors. As expected, it's better to learn boxing. Let's practice the fighters to fight. How can your majesty take a look? Chao Gingxin didn't look at the place where the boy could see, but just stared at the wonderful question box in the snail dojo. When Sister Zhou stood still, her legs were already very long. When she asked people about boxing, she was heroic. Sa Shuang, when he whips his legs, Chao Gingxin can't wait to push the old man away, let himself carry a leg and remind the young man, take care of your eyes. You shouldn't look at things. If you can't help but not look, it's just cultivating your heart. Zhao Duanming retracted his gaze and laughed angrily. You can manage your mouth if you have the ability, don't drink. Chao Gingxin took a sip of the drink and smiled and said, I just want to use the drink to block my mouth. Drinking is slightly dim and looking at the flowers in the fog is more beautiful. A pair of graceful couples, young faces and a little girl by their side. The three of them just took their seats and sat by the window of a restaurant outside the martial arts venue. There were some melon and fruit snacks on the table. There were several tables nearby. It was enshrined by the imperial family of Dali, who had performed blindfolding techniques. The three at the main table were Emperor Song He, Queen Yu Mian, and Yu Yu, a military monk from the earthly branch. It's just that Song Su the prince did not show up. The restaurant did not clear the venue to rush people. Girl-year-old Yu Yu, she is not low in the Yu family of Shangzhou Kingdom, and is one generation higher than Yu Mian. Therefore, if the empress is going home to save her relatives, she must call her aunt when she sees a girl. In the Ao Pingzhou countries other than Dei, according to court regulations, almost all the queens could not go home to save their relatives, but the Song family of Dei was always lenient in such matters, regardless of when Nanzhan returned to Yuzhang County. Or Yu Mian went out of the palace twice to Ichi Lane, and the Ministry of Rights had no objection. Yu Yu was stealing wine in front of His Majesty the Emperor, stealing one pot after another. After stealing those pots, the taste was light but better than the long aftertaste of the Changchun Palace wine. The girl began to stare at the pots of immortals on the table next door. Home tea as a errand, can't drink alcohol but drink the first-class tea. Ning Yao said, you guessed it wrong. Zhou Haijing didn't seem to think about splitting life and death with Yu Hong, and she still had a sense of action. Could it be that she already knew that she would become the last monk in the earthly branch? In this questioning punch, the two sides actually hit 2 sticks of incense, nearly half an hour, and finally Zhou Haijing lost a move, and neither side of the questioning punch was seriously injured. Yu Hong holds his fists and respects the quartet. Zhou Haijing stretched out his hand to cover his cheek, and spit out a mouthful of blood towards the ground, arousing pity. She was hit in the cheek with a punch by Yu Hong, and when she was staggered, Yu Hong tapped her back with an elbow. If he is ruthless, Zhou Haijing will fall into a state if he is not dead. Zhou Haijing showed a smile. After I recover from the injury, can I ask Senior Yu for advice or two? Broken pots and sold iron beforehand, and both borrowed a lot of fairy money from Su Lang, betting that they would lose and make a lot of money. Yu Hong nodded and said, whatever. Qin Pingan sat up, squinted, looked at the woman Wu Fu who didn't care about the outcome, and said to Ning Yao Xen, it is roughly certain. Zhou Haijing and Yu Hong have a life and death feud. Maybe it was just killing a Yu Hong. Unhate. Qin Pingan suddenly turned his head and looked towards the hanging mountain in Jianghu in the past, his face pale. Ning Yao asked, who has taken the shot over the barren world? Ouyang? Left and right? Because of the dual relationship between Hadao Jianqi Great Wall and being overwhelmed by the wild world, Qin Pingan noticed a hint. Qin Pingan took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, the two joined hands. Ning Yao didn't need to think about anything and said straightforwardly, can you roughly determine the location of the battlefield? I can use my sword to open the sky, first return to the colorful world, and then rush to the wild battlefield. However, Ning Yao knew very well that even if he was in time he might not be able to help. Once Tua Yushan's plan had already included himself, he might have been unhelpful. Qin Pingan shook his head and suddenly laughed, we have to trust Liang and brother. Liang and the left and right joined out swords. Probably it was like the boss sword fairy Qin Qingdu went out of the city to fight and put all his strength in the sword. To make up for a big regret for the world. A siege carefully arranged in the wild world. The mountains and rivers are broken, the earth is cracked, and the aura is disordered, and a group of ambushes and hides have nowhere to hide. The wild great demon who first appeared, is Wenhei's careful disciple of the mountain pioneer, one of the new thrones, the sword immortal Shouchen, single-eyed, backsword box, hidden six swords and a green robe banana refining. Shouchen is one of the two newest ascending sword repairmen in the wild world after the war ended, and the other one is a remarkable one who has become a co-lord of the world in one fell swoop. Shouchen looked dignified even if his side occupied the right time and place, but he did not take it lightly. Shouchen looked at the four swords hanging on his waist, Liang, this frame, anyone could die. Immediately after Shouchen, there was a female fairyland demon from Tuyueshan, who was named Xinzhuang, a direct disciple of Tuyueshan ancestor, who had been acquainted with Liang for many years, and was a bottleneck in fairyland. In the small world big formation her combat power can be regarded as an ascendant monk. A large formation appeared at the feet of the two, like two yin and yang fish, one black and one white tangling each other. Shouchen and Xuanhuan just stood on top of the yin and yang fish, hanging in the air, rotating with the formation. The big array is very simple, just a yin and one yang double fish diagram, not to make more appearances. However, the atmosphere of the Great Tao is extremely mysterious and vast, like the authentic legal tradition of the Great Tao between heaven and earth to Jian. Xuanhuan sighed faintly, looking at the man who knows the sky is high and thick, and who wants to go southward into the barren hinterland, whispered softly, Liang, you shouldn't provoke a world like this. The 10,000 years of confrontation between the barren world and the Great Wall of Sword Qi, the Ascended Realm Great Demon is difficult to be killed, and the Ascended Realm Sword Repair is even harder to die. On the left-hand side of Liang, 200 miles away, an old mountain-moving ape who steps on a flying sword and carries a long stick on his shoulders presses down a hill under his feet with magical powers, so as not to be broken by Liang's sword intent. This old demon of the old throne, whose real name is Zhu Wei, grinned and said with a grin, you shit, since you are tired and crooked, Grandpa will give you a ride today and go with that dong sanging to be a companion. Unfortunately not. 14 realms, otherwise Grandpa will be more credited. Hundreds of miles to the right of Liang, there is an ascendant demon official lane with hairy brows and white robes. It is also one of the new thrones. It has already used magical powers to twist and connect a river for hundreds of miles. The final detention is a pocket futon. Guan Xiang and Na Liang laughed loudly and said, Brother Liang, the style is not diminished back then, but this time it seems hard to be slipped away by you, otherwise you can help me give a word to the hermit. What I said is still true. It was to persuade the young hidden official to turn to the wild, marry the little girl of his family, and become one of the new thrones without any suspense. The ranking is destined to be extremely high. Guanxiang is willing to take the initiative to let the virtuous people become the head of the family. The territory of the mountains and rivers under the jurisdiction of xianxia is no less than a continent of mountains and rivers in the vast world. One day, when Qin Pingan is among the 14 realms of sword repair, he may be able to share the world with Firen. A liang raised her remotely. This old man in Guanxiang has less foresight than the old blind man, who looks more handsome with Qin Pingan and has no points. De Yaoguan Ali raised his hand and detained a ray of sword intent from his side, lingering around his fingertips. Unexpectedly there was a vision of lightning and thunder. Farther away there was a rider riding a horse in the clouds, wearing golden armor, holding a gun, covered in armor and no real appearance. There were 2 small and exquisite meteor hammers hanging from his waist, one bright red and one pitch black. The demon female cultivator with a great Taoist name stands beside this rider. She is slender and looks like a Taoist female crown, wearing a fishtail crown. Wearing a yellow and purple Taoist robe, holding a whisk in his hand, there is a round moon in the back. Although these 2 are both immortal realm cultivation bases, no matter whether they are in the Summer Palace or the Middle-earth Confucian Temple, they are all listed as must-kill targets. There are only 3 monster monks who have won this honor, together with the ministers. Liang looked around, his eyes were dull, and after holding back for a long time, he suffocated a depressed speech. It's miserable. It seems that today's battle was lost to Bai Yi. It's really a way to teach people to beat their chests and feet. Fuyazu besieged and killed Bai Yi. There were so many thrones and monsters that could not be counted with one hand, and all of them were old thrones in the wild world, without any moisture. Sure enough, after falling from the 14th stage, he will be looked down upon. Before I was ascended to heaven, I made a special trip to say something strange with my own yin and yang. Brother Aliang, don't be sad, you just treat our 2 realms interchanged. Don't lose. When I succeed in harmony, remember to come to heaven to congratulate. I must to make the feat that I was thinking of when I was young. To refine inha to make fermented rice and good wine was enough. The wild top combat power who temporarily appeared on the battlefield, there are only these 6 in the eyes. The old ancestor of the genus of moving mountains in the world, Zhu Wei, is the pinnacle of the ascent. Among the old thrones, this old ancestor of moving mountains is actually considered outstanding. Make do. Shouchen, a newly promoted ascendant sword repairer, is still young after all, and belongs to the junior in the ascending realm sword repair. No matter how talented in sword practice, he still can't make up for the innate defects of insufficient realm fighting. Guan Ali, the ascended realm great demon who ranks on the new throne, is an old enemy of the Great Wall of Sword Qi. Is even an old acquaintance of Aliang. The old guy doesn't seem to be good at all except for his loud voice and funny speech. Tua Yueshan Xinzhuang is a formation master, but his fist skills are quite good, and he can be regarded as a boundless martial artist. As for the golden-armored knight riding a horse in the cloud, his avenues and feat are extremely obscure. There is no record of the Jiazi account, let alone the real name of the big demon, even a pseudonym. Female crown Catkin, it is rumored that she is the mountain Taoist companion of Xuanhuan of the old throne, but in fact it is Xuanhuan's remnant of the road of killing the 3 corpses, half of the appearance of the outer demon. If she puts aside her endless magic weapons, the combat power is not too great. High is extremely difficult to kill. After the great demon Xuanhuan was eaten by Zhou, many of the secret treasures were thrown by Zhou to the Catkins before reaching the sky, which was regarded as returning to the original owner. These 3 put together a bunch, the combat power can barely be regarded as 2 ascended realm monks. So in Aliang's eyes, there are roughly only 5 soarings. Aliang gently touched the ground with his toes, pressed his thumb against the hilt, and the long sword was out of its sheath. He glanced down at the borrowed long swords and smiled and said, "No, rest assured, you will never be wronged. To kill me, Aliang. Especially when he is a sword repairman who starts to saber right away. There is definitely not only this point. It's not that there are not enough great monsters on the paper, but the true backbone of the abbot's siege today, Shouchen? That's too much meaning." Wandering alone in the wilderness in his early years, a series of ascended great demon followed his ass. Before, Aliang deliberately walked to the edge of the hidden big formation before he stopped, and then let Feng Shuatao leave and let this Shanzi Yeshua return to the Great Wall of Jianghu alone. It is not easy for a wild Xiao who is most afraid of death and cherishes his life. It is not easy to follow him to this point, especially when Feng Shuatao feels that he can try to stay, Alien feels that it is enough. Of course, Feng Shuatao has to live well, return to the world, and brag about this battle for me. Don't hide and fight anymore. It's just that it's boring to see how boring people are in fighting, so it's better to end up gambling yourself. When Aliang pushed his sword out of its sheath within 3,000 miles of a larger area, all the mountains collapsed, the dust covered the sky and the sun, and all the flowing water was shattered by the fine sword intent, and there was no water transport at all. Exhausted water and dust are mixed together, and within the territory of 3,000 miles of mountains and rivers, it is like a torrent of mud that is descending quickly. The sword intent crisscrossed in the rain curtain, and the earth was densely covered with ravines. There was no mountain, a stream, or a plant of vegetation, all turned into powder in an instant. Even the top of the mountain under the foot of the old ancestor who moved the mountain was completely shattered. Zhu Wei waved his long stick and drew a circle of arcs to disperse the surging sword intent around him. Aliang of this dog day, it's not the 14th realm sword repair. Besieged and killed by Yi, this ancestor who moved to the mountain still has lingering fears. At that time, it was fortunate that the 14th realm Baya was not a sword repairman. The large formation rotates, and the Shouchen and Xuanhuan hovering above the two swimming fish in black and white do not need to cast spells. They have a formation to help wear out that sword intent, and the large array collides with the sword intent. Agitated for bursts of glazed time ripples. Shouchen squinted his eyes to observe the trajectory of the sword intent, and shook his head after a while, unable to find the slightest kendo flaw. The biggest reliance of sword repair is the ultimate lethal power of one sword to break through 10,000 laws. No matter what kind of person you are cultivating and what magical powers you have, just one sword breaks it. However, it is difficult for Jianxia to take care of his personal superiority and large-scale damage on the battlefield. This is why Wu Qingpei, who is not good at fighting with others, is only a jade sword, whose life is listed as the first-class flying sword by the Summer Palace. Swordsmanship in the pure realm, however, can become the first choice for the great demon in the wild world to be beheaded as soon as possible. It is difficult to have the best of both worlds. Sword repairs and natal flying swords, who are born to be suitable for the battlefield, are often not good at fighting each other between swords, and a sword repairer on the battlefield of the mountain, even if the sword is very alive and the sword intent is extremely heavy, but there are pros and cons. The advantage is that you are not afraid of encirclement, and the disadvantage is that if you are not careful, you will be caught by the enemy's mountain monks, and use the technique of avenue deduction to find a certain avenue omission. Aliang is a big exception. Whether it is catching a rival or being trapped in a siege. This daunting Howren sword repairman, a swordsman who is least like a scholar, is almost invincible. The so-called near is because there was the old sword immortal sitting on the city head before, and Bai Yujing had the invincible Dao second child, because Yudo had one of the 4 more immortal swords, Dao Zong. Taibai Wanfa Taoism naive. It is recognized by the mountain top that these 4 fairy swords that have killed countless ancient monsters and gods, as long as they are obtained by Aliang, or a handy sword with a rank close to the rank by Aliang, they are hard to kill and not lose. Bai is the most proud of the world. De Yaoguan Ali laughed, and the futon at his feet cracked open, breaking the sword intent. The golden-armored knight slightly grasped the spear in his hand, and the ancient armor on his body was shining brightly. The mount gently stepped on the void, and under the horse's hoof, circles of water ripples rippling in all directions. The knight asked heartily, "Do we need so many people to participate in the siege? You really want to fight for help?" "People?" Katkin smiled, and she continued to shake the whisk in her hand, breaking up the afterglow of the sword intent within a radius of several miles, and expelling it slightly outside. It was really troublesome. Within 1,000 miles, the sword intent was quietly circulating everywhere. One's own attacking magic weapons, magic powers, Shudishan and certain escape techniques, when used will be very troublesome, and it will become easier to reveal clues. Even so, there is still no one who wants to be that early bird, taking the lead in showing the kind of magical powers that move mountains and seas and replace small worlds, and transfer this sword intent to another place. I never thought that a person's sword intent poured out into the world and it could be counted by 2 caddies and it was hundreds of caddies, more than 1,000 caddies? I really don't say the least. The ride next to Katkin was born out of the sky. Even she didn't know the other side's avenue inheritance. The latter had no experience of confronting alien on the battlefield. At most it was the previous offensive and defensive battle of the Great Wall of Sword Qi. Watching the battle, I saw Liang's fall from the sky, and the majestic questioning sword with Lu Cha afterwards. She had to patiently explain, winning or repelling Aliang and keeping or beheading Aliang are completely different things. Not everyone can exchange punches with Da's second child. Aliang has 2 things. The thing that makes the mountain cultivator fear the most. One thing is that he is not afraid of besieged and is good at singles out a group. Besides, so far no one knows the magical powers of his natal flying sword. Speaking of this, Suyu glanced in a direction in the distance and whispered, "As for Toyue Mountain, is there any plan to encircle and fight for aid maybe?" Aliang suddenly withdrew from the previous posture of about to pull the sword out of the sheath. One jumped gently, the golden rooster was independent, shook his legs, changed legs and shook again. The 10 fingers are staggered across the chest, and both hands and arms are undulating like water. The golden armor knight muttered, "This virtue is really annoying." Small smiled and said, "It's good to get used to it. When the fight really starts it will be ignored." Sure enough, 2 more groups of people behind the scenes appeared in the distance, one after another. A thin old man with a cane with sunken cheeks, this 14th realm great monk, the creator of the Hall of Valor in the wild world. This is an alien from outside who hasn't appeared in the previous wars. It wasn't until the confrontation between the 2 worlds that he appeared in Tuyueshan, very long overdue. According to the secret records of the Summer Palace and the Confucian Temple, Dao Ancestor rode a bull to pass the pass, and most of them rushed to him. Naturally, this old guy did not dare to discuss the Taoism with Dao Ancestor, so he hid outside the sky and finally gave up the 15th realm. The first line of opportunity at the same time is virtually tantamount to giving way to the sky for the later one high. Flying Ascension Realm Sword Repair, now the nominal master of the barren world, brilliant. Firen and senior brother Che Yun, it is the old man's direct biography, but Firen is Che Yun's apprentice, so I have never seen this master before. The departure of the great ancestor of Tuyueshan was actually a provocation. The biggest gift is the Fei Ran, Shou Qin, Zhou Qinggao and others who were placed high hopes by Zhoumi Yupujing female sword repair, Lu Bai. She is wearing a fairy soldier robe named Fishtail Cave Sky. The other place is Xiao Yan and his friend Zhang Lu. 14th level sword repair Xiao Yan. She hung her legs cross-legged in the air, pulling her horn braid with her hands as if watching a play. The great sword fairy Zhang Lu was drinking. The 2 sword repairers actually had a very good relationship with Aliang in the Great Wall of Jianghu in their early years. Xiao Xing said with a straight face, "It's too bad to die in the hands of others, so I'd better be beaten to death." Zhang Lu was silent, just drinking. The drink that this great sword immortal now drank was brought by Xiao Yan from Haoran, but the variety was still far from enough, especially without the immortal family's distilled wine with the head of the Shenzhou sect in the Middle Earth. The spring breeze and the bleak autumn breeze can make you sober. But in fact, the best hangover is the mess in the world. It is too difficult to sober up if you want to be drunk. An old immortal whose 14 realms tend to be consummated, seems to have an extremely ancient Taoist name, with a great meaning, rising. The old guy is really a talent and he would even give himself such a famous name. A Ascension Realm Swordsman who condenses a world of luck. Similar to Ning Girl, they are all nailed to the next 14 realms. Of course, the premise is that today's frame can survive brilliantly. Recommended. Mimi Reading app is really good. It is worth installing. After all, you can cache books and read them offline. A 14th level sword repairer who has refined the entire Hall of Valor? What do you think Xiao Yan is looking for? Are you so angry with the old sword fairy? As a sword repairman, he walked on the left side of the 14 realms of refining heaven and earth. In fact, with Xiao Yan's aptitude, as long as he is willing to wait, there is absolutely no need for this. It's just that Xiao Yan always likes to do things with will, regardless of the world, even life and death, just for a happy one. So the more peaceful the world is, the more unhappy she is in the Great Wall of Jianghu. If Xiao Xing were not dragged by left and right, Haoran might have to lose at least one more continent, such as the northwest Luxiazu. A great sword fairy of the Great Wall of Jianghu who was a friend of the wine table. Friends belong to friends. The battlefield is a battlefield, life and death each loses. As for that little girl in the Yupu realm, just obediently watch from the wall. Lu Bai actually didn't know why he was drawn to participate in this siege, but this was the common meaning of the ancestor and Firen. However, on the battlefield today, Lu Bai didn't have the slightest fear, and her sword heart was firm. She had nothing but respect for alien who had caused the wild world to be extremely troubled. Only someone, even if she just glances at it, she will be like a big enemy, almost to be a demon. Zhang Luhuai emptied the wine jar and said with a smile, "I have never seen Aliang's natal flying sword with his own eyes." He was drunk in partnership with Aliang, but he failed to name the flying sword every time he drank. As long as there is a woman on the wine table, he has to step on his left foot and right foot, but he doesn't vomit again and again, and he can also say heart-wrenching words to the woman, which is called truthfulness after drinking. Xiao Yan nodded, arms crossed his chest and sneered, I just rushed to his natal flying sword, otherwise I would not bother to come over and join in the fun. Zhang Lu asked curiously, I asked Aoyang if he could beat Dong Sanging. Aoyang only said with a hippie smile that he could not beat Dong Laoer. Xiao Sun hesitated for a moment and said, except for Qin Qingdu, no one may know how high Aoyang's kendo is. The battle is about to start, and in the formation Shouchen reminds him in his heart, xuanhuan, be careful that Aoyang is the first to kill you, staring at you from beginning to end, so you must save your life and delay the time to the greatest extent. Which type of Qi practitioners are most annoying to the cultivator? It is the battle division. The formation division in the narrow sense is similar to Han Zhoujin, who is a branch of the earth. In the final analysis, it is still upside down the time, occupy the ground and win the harmony. In a broad sense, the formation master, every saint who sits in the small world actually counts. For example, Qin Pingan, because of Fijian's cage in a bird, can also be considered. New Makeup nodded. Although she is the bait, she is afraid that Aoyang will get her hands too soon. If you besieged and killed ordinary Ascended Realm monks, where would there be such worries? All need to worry about the bait being eaten too quickly? The old man smiled and asked, today's Aoyang seems to be different from what you said. He is also in a situation where one person is singled out against a group, but today there are not a few grotesque things. Nodded brilliantly and said, a Liang like this would be terrible. Liang, who was trapped in the encirclement, looked around and nodded, quite satisfied. It was almost the same. This battle, this pomp, is actually better than Fuyaozhou. 214 realms came, not to mention, and there are a lot of sword repairs today. It's not wasteful to shout to help out. Even on the battlefield of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, Liang still rarely cooperates with others to produce swords. Is also around. A Liang from the Subsage line and the Wenxing line is the best kind of friend. Even if there is that 3-4 dispute, he still does not change. Liang glanced at the sky and took a deep breath. Tianhe armor-washing soldiers, most suitable for sword making. Today's questioning the sword, you really don't need to speak your own words anyway. The sword repairs all the truth only on the sword. From the northernmost Jiangxi Great Wall ruins in the wild world, a long line was drawn. The sword spirit is full of energy, and it has crossed the mountains and rivers of about half a barren world, and this sword light is still condensed. It is like building a long bridge of sword energy in half of the world. At the head of the city, Chao Jun was stunned, looking far away, exhausting his eyesight, but still far from seeing the end of that long line. Probably this is sword cutting the world? Chao Jun looked back until his eyes were sour, rubbed his eyes, couldn't help turning his head and asking, Wei Jin, if you are in the Ascension realm, can you do it? Of course not. Wei Jin said without hesitation, Mr. Zhuo's swordsmanship is already at the apex. In the future, the swordsmanship can surpass those of Mr. Zhuo today, only Mr. Zhuo who has advanced to the next level. Wei Jin suddenly said, Converge your mind, just now your swordsmanship. In fact, there is a trace of dispersion. Chao Jun was stunned for a moment, with a look of horror on his face. If it weren't for Wei Jin to remind him, he would just be unaware. Chao Jun quickly inspected Xiao Xiandi and carefully checked his state of mind. Only then did he discover that there is a lot of green lotus in his heart. A small lot of lotus flower appeared imperceptibly, and it tilted. Chao Jun immediately sat in a jerk and stretched it one by one. Wei Jin waited until Chao Jun returned to Daoxin and then said aloud, Your sword training aptitude is really good. You can withdraw that ray of mine so quickly. Even if you are reminded by others, you can only watch yourself. With this flaw, Mr. Zhuo is willing to teach you swordsmanship for no reason. Chao Jun smiled and said, Wei De Jiangxian, don't you know to remind you earlier? Wei Jin shook his head and said, You are not just climbing and practicing. The guardian is not to help, but to show others the way so that you will not go astray or go astray. Chao Jun sighed, The truth is such a truth, but it sounds awkward. Wei Jin said with a smile, I am a lot older than me and my realm is too lower than me. Of course it is awkward to come and listen to this kind of remarks. Chao Jun felt that the atmosphere of the Great Wall of Jiangxi was crooked. Most of the air trainers who have come to travel here are Middle-earth Divine Continent and AI Continent, one with the highest vision, and the other with spare money. Huanhuan traveled around the wild world, and even Chao Jun, the Yuaning sword repairman, was dumbfounded. Of course, these Qi practitioners would only be more shocked. One by one stopped on the top of the city, dumbfounded. Suddenly someone laughed. For the time being, I still can't live and die with Dao Lao, and I have to continue to break the boundary. Whether the left and right sides can enter the 14th realm and whether Lu Ji can enter the ascending realm are things worth looking forward to. Chao Jun turned his head and looked at him. He was an earth sage monk who came from a Taoist sect, and he was too embarrassed to say anything. The appearance of a middle-aged man with a long scorpion robe, a long-distance travel crown on his head, a pair of white cloud shoes on his feet, and a wooden sword on his back. However, this fairy-style spirit is no problem to deceive xianxia vulgars and lower 5-level air trainers. On the side of Uncle Chao, let's save it. Chao Jun smiled and said, "This Taoist, listen to your tone, can you break the wrist with the invincible by Yujing?" The Taoist chief squinted his eyes and smiled, then borrowed Chao Jiangxian's good words. Chao Jun asked in his heart at the same time, "Wei Jin, shouldn't he be a pretending outsider?" Wei Jin replied, "You can only see that it is a monk Wei Yuanying, but you should be more careful with your words. More is worse than less." Chao Jun was relieved, half listening. Fengshua Temple Great Sword Immortal, when encountering an ascendant realm, he wouldn't miss it. Unless it is a situation that is Fu Lu Yuxuan Longhu Mountain Zhao Tian Lai, and the real person Ping Daifeng Fire Dragon, these few deliberately hide the atmosphere, and it happens that these old soaring walking outside the mountain, are all in an upright style no like to use blind eyes. You can never come across 14 realms by yourself. Get. Chao Jun clasped his fists and said, "Fortunately we will be lucky." The middle-aged Taoist glanced at Wei Jin and Chao Jun who were sitting on both sides and smiled and said, "If the will is not strong, the will is not generous, the vulgar, and the love how to ask for personal arrangements, it must be quite difficult to enter the room. You deserve to be a sword fairy." Wei Jin laughed off. His relationship is already well known to passers-by anyway. It doesn't need to be irritated to be broken by an unknown Taoist wandering around. Chao Jun angrily said with a smile, "This Taoist commander is teaching me to practice sword? Why, the Taoist commander is also a sword repairer." "What kind of sword repair I am? I don't know anything about kendo, I just watch the fire from the shore and barely watch the excitement." The middle-aged Taoist priest smiled and shook his head, but did not continue to speak, but chose the city head between the two, gently leaped up and sat cross-legged. "No matter where, I just recognized two cheap nephews." Unfortunately, the two guys only talked about studying. They are indeed far behind Qin Pinyin. Therefore they can only hear the meaning of the words, but even, the will not be strong and the will the term generosity, comes from a letter from nephew, and I forgot. This trip to the savage wilderness, nothing serious, relax, take a look at the scenery, and then find the old deaf child who is in charge of the Swordchi Great Wall Jail, but he hides better. There have been some deductions before and a few traveled. I couldn't find the place by myself. There is no way after all, it's not in the Qingming world. There are too many obstacles to the evolution of the avenue which is really impossible. Just go to Jin Suiqing and ask Zheng Juzhong. The city lord of Baidi City, he left a message at the Middle-earth Confucian Temple before, so that he could go to Jinsui City as a guest, and he was very sincere. He laughed with a heartfelt voice. Wei De Jiangxian, starved to death the courageous and timid. Since he is holding a sword book handed down from Zongyuan, why hasn't he still been able to obtain those ancient sword intents that linger? If I were Zongyuan, I would be a little disappointed with you, the boss sword immortal who personally helped select the heir. Wei Jin said solemnly, "Dare to ask the predecessor's name." Wu Shuangjiang smiled and said, "It's not worth mentioning, you can treat me as the uncle of the hermit." Wei Jin was at a loss. Qingming Xianxia. There was a burly man sitting cross-legged on a sea of clouds, drifting with the clouds all the way after drinking wine, and throwing his hip flask casually. A young man standing beside his back with his hands behind his back, Mizei wearing a tiger head hat, is a bit funny. If you don't have this hat, you'll feel as if you want one person to take up the word. The man stood up, stretched his waist, stretched his muscles and bones, intertwined his fingers, twisted his body, and then inexplicably made a punch and handed it far forward. Fist shakes by Yujing. Run after hitting. The man stretched out his hand to wrap around the neck of the young man in the tiger head hat, dragging away the young man's arms around his chest, his feet off the ground as if lying horizontally on the ground, calm and relaxed. The only person who dared to pass the fist with Bai Yujing and treat Bai Yi like this was his best friend Lu Shirley. The wild world above the battlefield. A battle in which it is almost impossible to distinguish who besieged whom is officially launched. After the saber was broken in his early years, Aliang just kept wearing the bamboo sword, and went to the sky outside the sky under the blue sky and confronted Da's second child, and it was useless. Today, Aliang was holding the hilt with both hands, slowly pulling the sword out of its sheath, and choosing an unprecedented gesture of holding the sword with both hands to confront the enemy. Sword repair and swords are not bound by the world and are not prisoners in the sheath. This short-stature man, a man who likes to call himself a swordsman, only holds a sword in each hand, and hasn't really made a sword yet. There are countless fierce flying swords condensed from sword intent around the world. Is like the manifestation of a magnificent avenue, the mountains and rivers of a foreign country with a radius of 3,000 miles, and thousands of flying swords. The wild great demon who participated in the siege, everyone has a share, and each needs to face a sword formation. Countless flying swords, come and go without a trace, ups and downs, crisscross, cut and kill. Aliang's knees are slightly bent, arms spread out, holding double swords and whispering, "Night." The mountains and rivers in the original daytime scene, if received in order, xianxia will change the color of the world, and in an instant the world is dim and pitch black. Thunder, fire, rapids, comets. The magnificent sword light transformed by the four kendos suddenly lit up in the night. Thunder and lightning are intertwined, the snow is white, the flame is long, the red is like blood, the river is rolling away, the green is faint, the comet drags and cuts the sky. Like a swordsman, just because the swordsmanship is too high, it seems to be able to control four gods with the sword at the same time, which is equivalent to possessing an unreasonable natal supernatural power. Anti-kill. Sword of Coming Chapter 843. The upload was late, sorry. The night was heavy, and Liang was nowhere to be seen in an instant. Only the sword light shone everywhere. When a single person shoots a sword, there is the atmosphere of many gods and methods in the ancient battlefield. Together with Shou Qin, she is responsible for running the new makeup of the Great Array. As the direct disciple of the great ancestor of Toyue Mountain, senior sister Lizhen, she quickly looked around and displayed a magical power, her eyes gleaming, precious light flowing, even the long river of time, and there are clues in the path of Yin and Ming, but Xuanhuan still can't find the trace of the man. It's no wonder that in the early years he was able to slip away in that dangerous scene of big monsters. Shouchen had drawn an unsheathed long sword from the sword box, clamped the blade with his 2 fingers, and swiped it swiftly towards the tip of the sword, as if peeling off a layer of immortal relics. The sword light turned into a thunder light, and hit the bright electric light. Together at the same time, the heart voice reminded, "Don't look for it, you and I only care about the formation of the abbot, and lead the sword with peace of mind." Xinzhuang immediately converged her mind when she heard the words, offering an inconspicuous bag, shook it gently, and the clouds rose and filled quickly, as if they had borrowed a wind and rain with the ancient Fengshen rain master to envelop her in it, and the clouds and mist were shaking. It seems that it is not the land of the abbot, but in fact there is a cave, a vast expanse of wind and rain, thousands of miles away, like an alternative mustered supernatural power, helping Xinzhuang hide in a huge lake, even if Liang can cut open the landscape of Xiaoxiandi with a single sword. Prohibition cannot cut her real body. The wild great monsters who besieged Liang this time, it seemed that if anyone didn't have 1 or 2 fairy soldiers in their hands, they would not have the face to go out and show up here on the battlefield. Xinzhuang was in a worry-free situation for the time being, so she took a few more glances at the sword box that Shouchen was carrying. On the teacher's inheritance, in a wild world, the only person who could compete with Toyue Mountain was actually Wenhaizhou Misline. I saw Shouchen scratching the sword body again and again, constantly peeling off layers of ancient sword intent, to contend with the thunderous atmosphere of Liang's sword. The same is the Ascension Realm sword repair, and the gap is huge. Not only is the current realm of Shouchen not completely stabilized, but also the level of Kendo. Shouchen had to admit that if he wanted to approach the current height of Liang's Kendo, there was only one possibility. The opponent had a short life and he had a long life, and then a little bit of water milling kung fu and follow-up opportunities would have hope. The sword box carried by Shouchen is painted with a picture of 3 mountains, 4 seas, 5 sacred mountains and 10 blasphemy, which is very different from the true form of Taoist talisman which is widely spread in later generations. Because of the previous involvement of Liang's sword intent, the sword box blindness has faded, revealing the long-lost true form of the 3 mountains with unobstructed views. They are like gods sitting on corpses, mountains and wild monkeys walking, and clouds hidden by dragons flying. The responsibility of the 3 mountains is to hold the yin and yang for good fortune, the belonging of the 5 elements, determine the period of life and death, the length of the matter, the main astrological division, and the destiny of the fish and dragons of water descendants. The sword box itself is a great treasure array of great immortal ranks. It is rumored that the ancient spirits are true to human beings. Holding this picture, crossing 3 mountains and 5 sacred mountains, reading through the rivers and seas, the spirits of 100 gods are respected and welcomed. It is an ancient formation, but unfortunately the craftsman who cast this object is unknown, but he is used to be called Mr. Sanshan Jyoho by the mountain monks, and then carefully refined by his teacher Zhomi into a raised sword named Sword Tomb. The place, known as the master of sword cultivation in the world, can cultivate up to 9 long swords, and can nurture a certain kind of magical power similar to the natal flying sword. Once the trainer obtains this treasure, it is not a sword repair that is better than a sword repair. Inheritance from the mountain is so important, and the immortal species also pays attention to an apprenticeship such as reincarnation. As for the ancestor Zhu Fei, who was the ancestor of the world-moving mountains, stepped on the long sword Dingshan, and the avenue became a small mountain world. Zhu Fei held a long stick and showed his true body. The long stick expanded at the same time, and one stick smashed it down, hitting the head of the fire dragon and smashed it. The flames were everywhere, the mountains and rivers were thousands of miles away, and the fire was torrential. I never thought that the fire dragon with its broken head would evolve into thousands of slender fire dragons on its own, winding like a mountain, resembling the dragon veins of the earth, in order to provoke Zhu Wei, the ancestor who moved mountains, who liked to move mountains. Then just move. Zhu Wei turned into a double-handed stick, a huge body spinning non-stop, and laughed loudly. "A Liang of the dog, although you and I are in the opposing camp, but you are a man, I look back in my wild mountains and rivers for you. Set up a monument. Grandpa, I will personally write an epitaph for you. How about keeping the grave piled up like a mountain every year?" With the long stick again and again, Zhu Wei displayed the natal magic power of the mountain-moving genus. It is the masterpiece that draws the river into the land. On the devastated and full of swordsmanship on the earth, he pushes away the awe-inspiring swords that are like giant lakes. It means that this unreasonable method of dividing water is far better than the method of water and soil on the mountains of the future generations. It can separate the rivers and seas at will, and the water will come out, divide the mountains and rivers, and leak out of the land. It is simply a kind of vulgar changes in the vicissitudes of life. Zhu Wei crashed to the ground again, stepping on the exposed roots of the earth. His body suddenly soared by 50%, swept with a stick, and angrily said, "Don't get out of here," obediently kowtow to Grandpa. The new makeup who watched the battle from a distance frowned slightly, really disliked Zhu Wei's fighting style, yelling and screaming really noisy. But Xuanhuan knows his roots and knows all these things. Don't look at Zhu Wei, the old ancestor who moved the mountain every time on the battlefield. He likes to swear words and speak inconspicuous rhetoric, knocking on the mountain all the way in the vast world. Sui Yu's methods were tyrannical and rampant. In fact, every time Zhu Wei encountered a strong opponent, he would have a sense of measure. The methods were insidious and they were the same as Sikhen. If Zhu Wei were to be regarded as a monster with only brute force, he would end up miserably. The golden armored knight beside Xuanhuan has taken out a meteor hammer from his waist, twisted his wrist, and the golden light circulates and spins rapidly, condensing into a flawless golden circle, and finally is swiftly thrown at the one that seems to be trying to break the ground. Comet falling from the sky. His 2-pocket meteor hammers were originally designed to intercept 2 unusual meteors from the sky, and then spent countless treasures of heaven, material and earth and carefully refined them. For thousands of years, most of the sages of the Confucian temple have been worshipped. Following the ritual saints stationed in the sky, often fighting against the gods, coupled with the early years of the ritual saints, the ancestors of the philosophers of the 100 families, and the dragon and tiger mountain celestial masters and other mountain monks' joint travels, the sacred battles in the sky never stopped. During this period it has created a lot of human visions. For example, it once caused the wild world to appear in 2 taboo places, one in the towering northwest, and the southeast boundary which seems to be collapsed. The former often rains and falls. Falling to the earth, the latter rains torrentially all year round, continuous heavy rain pouring down the earth, almost all year round without seeing the sun. It was in one of the places that the old throne great demon Fei Fei found Yu, who later became the sword repairman of the Jiashan tent. Before Liang took the shot, Xiao Deng had already reminded Zhang Lu, when the fight really starts later, Liang will not stop you, otherwise he is looking for death, so be careful and give people a toast. Better than being offered wine. In his early years as a hidden official at the Great Wall of Jianxi, Xiao Sun was notoriously heartless. She made friends and asked for it. Whoever thinks Howren is not pleasing to the eye, Xiao Sun will fall in love with. In this matter, Liang is another exception. Probably because this Confucian son who is a descendant of the sage of the Confucian temple is really not like a scholar. Coupled with Liang's sword repair status and his ability to stay in the Great Wall of Jianghu without moving for 100 years, Xiao Deng actually has a very good relationship with him. Back in those days, there would be a sloppy guy on the front side of the city during the heavy snow season, holding the little girl's 2 croissant braids in both hands, and he called it writing with a pen. Maybe this is just like what Liang himself said. Every sad story at the end has a warm beginning. Every year, the snow and winter come from the warm spring flowers. Zhang Lu got up and smiled. I'm not a kid anymore, I know the severity. Today's battlefield is only sword repair, not friends. This great sword fairy who once became a gatekeeper at the Great Wall of Jianghu possesses 2 natal flying swords. One is Reflection, and the other is Feng Li. Xiao Xing stood up, made a jump, did not display the golden body technique, and faced the sword intent with her true body. She jumped into the green river where the kendo was manifested, stretched her 2 slender arms and punched wantonly, crushed Jenny. In addition to the fight with the left and right from the Howran world to the sky. During his years as a hidden official of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, Xiao Deng not only never sacrificed his life-flying sword, nor even a long sword to take advantage of him. Every time he rushed to the battlefield, he didn't even bother to use the standard sword of the sword workshop. Not today. Because left and right will definitely come to the battlefield. The old ancestor was just ascending, indicating that Firen was not in a hurry. The old monk held the crutches and jabbed the ground several times. Each time the crutches squatted on the ground, it was an exercise of supreme magical powers. The Great Road was good fortune, free of charge, pot of heaven, gas, nightmare prayer. Lu Bai sighed quietly, trapped in such an encirclement that can completely kill 14-level cultivators. Even if you are Liang, can you really support it to the left and right? In the next moment, Liang, who had disappeared, finally appeared on the battlefield. Instead of looking for new makeup, Jian Guang went straight to the back of Zhu Wei's head. Your grandma, you like to spray manure with your mouth, right? Today I have to teach you how to brag about drafts. Before Zhu Wei could withdraw his true body, he offered a secret method to replace the true body with the image. Even if he stepped on the roots of the mountain, he still did not dare to show his true body anymore, and instantly retracted to the ground. I saw that Zhu Wei's Faxiang head was chopped off by a sword on the spot, and when it bounced a little bit, it was cut to pieces by the next sword light. Zinshuang's eyes widened and Shouchen said solemnly, I'm looking for you. Sure enough, a sword light is not a straight line, but a curve that just fits the yin and yang fish formation, breaking the formation with one sword. Liang stepped out with his sword and broke into the clouded world, with a sword intent like an iron cavalry chiseling formation, ignoring the new makeup's second formation restriction. Fortunately, Xuanhuan didn't support it, so he immediately chose to run the big formation, and the yin and yang were reversed. They exchanged positions with Shouchen. The sword box behind Shouchen fell off by itself and turned into an ancient formation. This ascending realm sword repairman appeared with a 3-headed 6-armed golden body, each holding a sword. Liang, who only had 2 swords in his hands, had no sword skills at all, just hacking. Compared with Shouchen's image, Liang's mustard figure is completely negligible, handing the sword again and again, the sword light draws arcs, dazzled, crisscrossed, and the Shouchen's law is cut back again and again after leading the sword. The last time he took the sword, his figure disappeared and he went straight to the new makeup. As soon as the new makeup started the formation again, Shouchen sighed, and it was too late to remind. Liang returned to the spot and the sword fell straight. The makeup was shocked and she had no power to fight back. She had to put a robe on her body to help her die. The robe was suddenly as big as a sea of clouds, and eventually it was broken like flowers, but no new makeup was seen. Liang had no expression on his face, twisted his wrist, holding a long sword that was about to break upside down, and the tip of the sword casually poked into the void of the earth. The long sword disappeared like an immortal. In the next moment, the long sword pierced through the newly make-up vest and tilted its body. At the same time, a long sword just shattered, and the newly make-up body looked like a flying flight. Sword rainstorm. Fighting with Jianxiu, that's it, never procrastinating, often in a blink of an eye the winning streak is divided into life and death. Liang had had countless dealings with the great monk on the top of the mountain, and saw a lot of messy magical powers. After Yijian injured the root of Xinzhuang Avenue, almost at the same time, he shattered the second long sword in his hand. There were countless broken swords. Sword energy is soaring, Gathering on the new makeup side is equivalent to temporarily setting up a sword formation, trapping the world around the new makeup. Who of you has the ability to reverse the long river of time? Casual. Anyway, you can't let the new makeup go back along the river. Fortunately, the ancestor of the rising star held his palm against the crutches and said silently in his heart, I don't know how to sacrifice. He actually protected Xuanhuan's life and allowed Xuanhuan to temporarily maintain the realm of immortals while dispelling Liang's sword energy. The remnant smoothly patched up the yin and yang fish array that could not be gathered. Liang had already anticipated this and had long been accustomed to it. One person surrounded a group of people and it was nothing to lose. Holding the hilts of the two sabers at his waist with both hands, Liang once again disappeared from the place. Lu Bai was shocked to see this is Liang who really let go of his hands and feet and fight with others. A sky curtain in the wild world, the vortex turned over, the wind was surging, and finally a breath of suffocating avenue appeared, slowly landing on the world. There is no trace of the flying sword, but it is an undoubted natal flying sword. In the north of the wild world, there is still a sort of light going south at an incredible speed. Liang left and right, vertical and horizontal, kendo swordsmanship, slashing the wilds. At the fire temple in the capital, the old master Yu Hong stopped looking at the young woman. The old man swallowed a mouthful of blood and finally settled down. He strode out of the snail's dojo, his original small figure grew bigger and he was in the eyes of everyone. After returning to his normal height, the old man finally stood still, held his fists in salute, and immediately won numerous cheers. The first-class consecration of this great criminal department, even if he does not rely on the pinnacle of martial arts who has moved the capital, he can only rely on this consecration status to walk across the continent. After this battle, Yu Hong's prestige in the mountains and rivers and lakes has improved even further. Among the crowd, some people clasped their fists silently, or quietly gave Yu Hong a gift. They were all survivors of the old Zhuang dynasty. Later they were appointed as officials in the Dali court or Sada living in the capital, and they were in a similar situation to that of Zhongyue Mountain. They came here today. Naturally they have more complicated thoughts than the average spectator. As the strongest existence in Central Aquarius, the Zhuang dynasty is no different from the many big Livas whose territory is like a tofu block, so Zhuang the Dugu family is destined to be hopeless. As for whether this action will be a taboo, these people are quite indifferent. The Song court of Dali still has such a belly, and the support for this tolerance is, in the final analysis, national strength. Back then, the Dali cavalry went all the way from north to south, like a broken bamboo, and horseshoes resounded through the coast of the South China Sea. The mountains and rivers of all countries became hometowns. It was chilling and terrifying. In the end, the Dali dynasty protected a continent of mountains and rivers from falling apart. One to respect. Zhou Haijing, who is also a martial artist at the top of the mountain, does not have this kind of official body for the time being. She had previously joked with Qingzhou Jianxian and asked Su Lang to help introduce one or two from the two sides of the ritual and punishment department, and match up with that Donghu and Zhaoyu. The two important central officials said a few good things. However, Su Lang knew well that this was just Zhou Haijing's usual speech style. It's not true. After this questioning, Zhou Haijing only lost slightly. So a first-class worship status must be something in her pocket. Maybe without waiting for Zhou Haijing to return to the collapsed area of the capital, the Department of Military Election of the Ministry of War or the Memorial of the Ministry of Rights to pay homage to the officials of the Qing dynasty, officials will take the initiative to find Zhou Haijing. When I think of the place Zhou Haijing chose, it's said that him in the capital, and him going all the way to pick the treasures of Feng Shui. Su Lang feels helpless about it. It's too shabby. Su Lang can't imagine that there are so many places in Dali capital. Chicken shit, dog shit, and even the pigsty on the side of the road. Before I went to Zhou Haijing, Su Lang had even walked through the door of a dark prostitute kiln for the first time in his life. Anyway, it was a narrow alley with dark light on both sides, so I couldn't hide. When he found Zhou Haijing at that time, she burst into laughter. The first sentence was to compensate Qingzhou Jianxian for a pair of boots. Su Lang asked softly, "Miss Zhou, are you okay?" "Not so good, old piffus thief." Zhou Haijing stretched his hand around to the back of the waistcoat, rubbed the area where Yu Hong was hit by an elbow, complaining, "I don't know the least bit of Lianxiang Xiu." Asking for a boxing, her face has exquisite makeup, and she has become a big face. As for the hair accessories that have been piled up in the mountains earlier, they have been beaten to the Yu Hong Quangang. It is a pity that they are all money. If you can keep it, the next few items can make a small profit. She angrily said, "Next time I ask you to find a place back, there are not so many people watching the game." Watching my old lady, I will go straight to Xiasan Road and then I will ask you to eat egg fried rice." Su Lang was speechless. This female great master, who was a similar age but was above her realm, hadn't seen him for many years and his words remained humorous. Zhou Haijing got into the carriage, took out a napkin, vomited a big mouthful of blood and put it in her sleeve. She didn't care about the injury at all. She dipped her finger in saliva and twisted a few bills, all of which she had previously gambled in Beijing. Zhuang's bet. On the roof, Qin Pingan asked, "I'm going to meet an old friend, do you want to join me?" Ning Yao glanced at the carriage in the street in the distance. "That coachman?" Qin Pingan nodded and explained, "His name is Su Lang, who has the nickname of Green Bamboo Sword Fairy. The people from the rivers and lakes of Songxi State are half of the neighbors of Senior Song. Now that Su Lang has an official status, he has also entered the far-traveling realm. Even if he can't make it to the mountain realm in the end, as long as Su Lang does not suffer a catastrophe, he still has a lifespan of at least 100 years, so I will definitely follow that one in the future. The mountain shrine, I have been dealing with Song Fengshan and Lu Qian for a long time. At that time Su Lang had just broken through the border and became a martial artist in the Seven Realms. It was at the time when Song Yu burned the golden basin to wash his hands and withdrew from the rivers and lakes. As a junior, Su Lang had actually won his fame and was still aggressive. Qin Pingan gave Su Lang a punch. He fought back to the small town, but later he cooperated with Su Lang, who took the initiative to come to the door and acted in a play. He gave the other party a step down and gave Su Lang Luo a big copy of The Reputation of Swordsmanship Below the Mountain Is Not Lost to the Sword Fairy on the Mountain. The older generation's social rules and human relations are mostly like this. In the same arena, as long as there is no feud, I will say a few more sweet words on the wine table. In the narrow part of the same road, leave a step and pedestrians to walk the single-plank bridge into a Xuanhuan avenue. Ning Yao looked at Qin Ping and Qin Pingan immediately understood, shook his head and smiled. "I don't have so many weird things, I just go to Su Lang to talk about the past. It's like walking in the rivers and lakes, not showing yellow and white when going out." Under normal circumstances, Qin Pingan would not easily open the basket and reveal that family property. In a more popular way it means beating people but not face. Ning Yao said, "Then I want go." Qin Pingan smiled and said, "Then I will go back on the way and buy some food for the capital master." Ning Yao nodded and disappeared in a flash, silently. She actually knew that Qin Pingan was still concerned about the war, and she wanted to find something to do. Distraction was a relief. So let him go alone to meet the so-called jianghu friends. Amidst the gazes of the various government officials, the people left the scene in an orderly manner. In a secluded alley the carriage slowly stopped. Su Lang frowned slightly, and there was a monk in front of him, blocking the way. Young Taoists, young monks, they are all raw faces. The young Taoist priest from his registration number took out a piece of Dao's Henjiwen genealogy symbolizing his identity. The Taoist Academy in the capital, Guling, has something to discuss with Miss Zhou. I implore Miss Zhou to get off the carriage first, and then follow the poor road to Taoism. The little monk folded his hands together. The little monk is a little novice monk from the Translation Bureau. Su Lang narrowed his eyes. A Taoist official under the Chongshu Bureau of Dai? Under the Jingxing Road, there are 6 divisions of genealogy, litigation, qingzi, palm seal, geography and qinggui. This young Taoist who calls himself Guling is in charge of the 1st division of genealogy. Dailess boss is Daojing of the capital, in charge of the issuance, promotion and relegation of the Taoist priests in the capital, but he can't control himself as a pure martial artist. If Daojing comes in person, Su Lang might be willing to be polite, even though the official rank is not high. In the end it still holds real power. As for the Taoist record of a chief official, the Jima official does not say that it is different from the Yamen of the Penal Department. It is really a second-class worship status issued by the Penal Department. It is a false title. Su Lang donated a green bamboo to his waist, and hung an accident card with colored thread. Second class, not low. Pure Takeo, only at the top of the mountain can you have the opportunity to wear the first-class accidental card. The second-class enshrines of Dai are mostly Jindan Zhenxiu, Wufu in the far-wandering realm, and Yuaning Qi. Unless the military skill is extremely great, the Golden Core Realm Qi practitioner who is not a sword repairer can only be classified as the 3rd class. Su Lang said indifferently, "If you have something to say, let it go if there is nothing." Guling smiled and said, "It's the green bamboo sword immortal of Songxi country. Poor Dao has long admired his name, but today I have something to discuss with Miss Zhou. It is not suitable for outsiders to listen." Su Jianxian, forgive me. The little monk asked softly, sword fairy? Now when the little monk heard of a sword fairy, he had a bald head and two big ones. In just a few days I have donated sesame oil money to the Buddha twice. This time Zhou Haijing was invited to discuss matters because of Song Zu's intention. After Wen Quan was over, she would be formally invited to enter the earthly branch. In fact, Yuan Huajing visited her once before, but the two sides didn't talk about it. Yuan Huajing didn't reveal his identity. Furthermore, the meaning of the Ministry of Rights and the Criminal Ministry also needed the help of Yu Hong to try Zhou Haijing's martial arts. Fill a vacancy. As for this suave chariot-driving martial artist, the little monk really didn't know him, only the innocent card. Earthly branch monks, 11 chi practitioners, everyone is the proud son of the heavens born in Aquarius Island, taking advantage of the trend. Most of the monks are not natives of Dali. The Dali court has high hopes for them, tilting countless financial and material resources towards them, and also spent a lot of incense on the mountain. The biggest reliance is that in addition to their respective monk realm and talented magical powers, there is also a continent of air transport. The only flaw is the fight against each other, which is too dependent on the integrity of the number of people. This time I met with Zhou Haijing, not only the little monk was anxious, but also the female ghosts who changed their beauty and worked hard. They were all worried and worried. In the end, Yu helped to express the voice of everyone, can make up for the last person. The strength skyrocketing is true, but the old saying is good, but there are only 3 things, let's not go to the trouble of the hermit lord. Song Su joked at the time, Yuan Huajing and I definitely don't have this idea anymore. If you are unhappy and unwilling, you must fight again. I can bite the bullet and convince Yuan Huajing. At this moment Su Lang looked unhappy and said, I don't care what you Chongshu Bureau Translation Bureau, give me way. Relying on a bit of official status, dare to pretend to be a ghost on your side? Guling was a little embarrassed. In fact, the most suitable person to invite Zhou Haijing here was Song Su. After all, he had the status of the second prince or Yuan Huajing, the highest realm, but the latter began to retreat. Zhou Haijing heard the movement outside, and turned a mouthful of pure innocence, which made her face pale a little. Then she opened the corner of the curtain and smiled charmingly. Are you colleagues of Yuan Jianxian? What's the matter? All like sneaky, isn't your identity so shameless? Isn't it the Secret Service of the Ministry of Justice, doing some pickling work under the countertop? I know, it's like an assassin on the rivers and lakes who collects money to kill people and eliminate disasters. Seeing people, when I first entered the rivers and lakes I was in this business and it was so mixed up. Zhou Haijing said to herself, it's a pity that I am in the realm of martial arts, and it is difficult to get into the eyes of the masters on the mountain. I don't dare to expect the first-class offerings. But if you want to say second-class offerings, there is still a chance. Besides, I can't trust you. In case it is the habitual offender who abducts and sells the good girl, I have suffered a great loss when I look back. You all the snakes, I am a helpless woman from the country, who can I go to complain? Su Lang waited until Zhou Haijing finished speaking and would continue to drive. Since he didn't give way, he would stop if he had the ability. Anyway, experience in the arena, gods and Taoists, lack a common adversity, a rare opportunity today. What's more, in this capital city, Su Lang is really not afraid of conflicts with the chi trainers of these 3 religions. His greatest reliance is not even the nothing card of the criminal ministry, but the status of Dallas Army monk. Guling sighed. It seems that only a few more people can be called to get this girl Zhou to drive. The little novice monk said earnestly, Mr. Chin has said that everything is courteous and respectful, and you should not be arrogant. A warm voice sounded behind the little monk. No, I haven't said it. The little novice monk immediately turned sideways, folded his hands together, and bowed his head and said, Mr. Chin is best at giving good words to people. I haven't said it for the time being. I will say it later. Guling turned around and struck a doorstep with the visitor, with a respectful look. I have seen Mr. Chen. Chen Pingan clasped his fists in return and said with a smile, I'm here to find friends to talk about the past. You are busy doing business. Su Lang immediately stopped the carriage and dared not rush forward. Because I recognized the identity of the other party. Zhou Haijing was about to put down the curtain and stopped his movements. A pair of moist peach eyes narrowed into a line in an instant, looking at the man in blue shirt standing beside the little bald head. The little monk was too short, making the man especially slender. The double intuition of the woman and the mountaintop swordsman made her realize that this unexpected guest floating down from the height of the alley in front of her is definitely not easy to mess with. Great martial god Song Changjing, Fengshua Temple Great Sword Immortal Wei and Jin Dynasty, and Wei Ying, the Supreme Lord of Zhenjingzong. All wrong. It's weird how sacred. Can you feel completely overwhelmed? Can't you do it? Qin Pingan nodded secretly. This Master Zhou was indeed a fellow, diligent and thrifty, and he was not willing to spend money on the matter. Su Lang's expression changed slightly. His mood was extremely complex. He quickly converged his mind, gathered the sound into a line and reminded Zhou Haijing. Miss Zhou, be careful of this person. He is Qin Pingan who asked Jian Zhengyangshan. Su Lang certainly did not miss the Grand Jingyang Mountain celebration. He is in the same awkward situation as Mengwu Mountain, but compared to the latter, the Sword Fairy is a little bit better. The storm near Jianshui Villa back then could barely be considered a good deal for both parties. After Zhou Haijing heard the name, Qin Pingan, she looked so bright she couldn't help but look at the most prestigious young sword fairy in Aquarius Island. It is very likely that he is still the youngest lord of the sect in the world. I almost heard that my ears were cocooned and I couldn't provoke it. A sword repairer who could make Yuan Jinya punch his body like a tickling, provoke him and only lose money. She immediately lowered the curtain, packed up the small and large objects in the carriage, slung a large package, bent down and walked out of the carriage. She would jump out of the carriage. Then I will go with Jinrengu. Mr. Su, please help me take care the carriage is out. The rivers and lakes are deep, drowning the daring, and the wind on the mountain is strong, blowing away the fairy tales. Guling smiled and said, "I'll just help drive the car." Su Lang hesitated and got out of the carriage. Qin Pingan turned sideways and stood at the root of the wall, giving way to the carriage. Zhou Haijing sat back in his place, then lifted the curtain on the side of the driving wall, and asked with a smile, "Qin Jianxian, let me ask a bit more. Make sure we have nothing to complain, right?" Qin Pingan smiled and nodded and said, "I have never veiled my face, no grievances or grudges. On the contrary, I watched the battle from afar and learned a few fist moves with Mr. Zhou, which benefited a lot." Zhou Haijing squinted and smiled, naturally charming, raised his arm and gently wiped the remaining powder on his cheeks. "It's just that my appearance is a bit ugly right now," which made Qin Jianxian laugh. Qin Pingan shook his head and said, "No. Zhou Haijing is suspicious, sir? I am a woman, so it is not appropriate to call a mother-in-law like that. These monks on the mountain are really weird. It's just that I can't show my timidity. The old lady is from a small place and hasn't read a book. What's wrong with her? She looks good, just a book, and men will only rush to flip the book. It is believed that the young sword immortal is mostly from a family of great powers. That clanny child, it's annoying to watch." The carriage slowly drove out of the alley, and the sound of the wheels of the carriage gradually faded away. Qin Pingan turned around and smiled, "Congratulations to Su Jianxian for breaking through." Su Lang immediately clasped his fist and said, "Dalian shrines Su Lang and is fortunate to meet Sect Master Qin again." Listening to Su Lang's self-introduction, Qin Pingan laughed dumbly, and he was not blind, so he could see such a big sign of the Ministry of Justice. Of course Su Lang was extremely nervous, but he had no affiliation with Song Yuxiao over the years, and logically speaking, Qin Pingan shouldn't bother him. It's just that this kind of sword fairy who occasionally goes down the mountain to play in the world is really unpredictable and illusory. Every time he takes a shot, he only depends on his mood, regardless of right or wrong, and often the sword light falls straight and his head rolls. Fortunately, in the misfortune, today's Aquarius Island has a lot of restraint on these lawless and arrogant monks. Moreover, after Su Lang was recruited by the Dali Department of Penalty, he did a few secret acts, targeting several groups of forbidden monks who thought they acted in secret. But what hurts the most right now, Zhou Haijing just hangs herself here, woman? Qin Pingan drew out an innocent card from his sleeve. Coincidentally, it's half a walk with Su Jianxian. Su Lang glanced at the innocence card, which was actually a third-class enshrinement innocence card. It was only slightly higher than the alternate enshrinement card. Su Lang will inevitably be a little embarrassed. Qin Pingan didn't want to take the opportunity to tease Su Lang, but just let him not think too much. Don't learn from the fairy Yunyi in the Jiozhen Immortal Pavilion. The two walked side by side in the alley. Qin Pingan asked with a smile, "I have traveled to a foreign land for many years, and I have not been in Aquarius for a long time. I just returned. How about the Jianshui Villa of Senior Song?" Su Lang carefully scratched his belly and said, "When I was goodbye, I never visited Senior Song's villa. I only heard that the Zui Villa was relinquished and moved to the border of Susui country. If you didn't participate in a few great blasphemy wars and later retreat, and then came to the capital, you should actually go to congratulate Mrs. Liu's mountain shrine. I heard from friends in the rivers and lakes that Senior Song has been over the years. The body is still strong and I have traveled a few times and often go out to relax. This is a good thing. When I am free I should make up the gift when I return home next time. Chen Pingan always looked happy, just like two old friends from the rivers and lakes reunited after a long time. Only a pot of good wine for each, nodded and smiled. It should be so, Su Jianxian has the intention. Good thing. Su Lang's originally tight heartstrings slackened a bit. By the way, Songshi Nation is close to both Su Sui Nation and Tsai Nation. Has Su Jianxian ever heard of the Lu family from Tsai Nation's Yanji County? Does Sect Master Qin mean the old Lu Xiangshu, or Lu Gaohua and Lu Gaoxin brother and sister? Lu Gaoxin was originally a disciple of the divine sect, but her luck was poor. She was extremely injured in the battle and the road was hopeless. After that she did not return to the sect but just practiced at home. Lu Gaohua is an ordinary master, but in the eyes of Su Lang, he should not be underestimated because he has the status of an official who accompanied the capital. Qin Pingan said, "We are all good friends." Su Lang understood immediately. As if remembering something, Qin Pingan took out a pot of 100-flower stuffed rice and handed it to Su Lang. "Thank you, Su Jianxian. Help transfer this thing to Master Lu Xian. I won't say any kind words of thanks to Su Jianxian." Su Lang took the pot of fairy brew from the mountain that he had never seen before with both hands, and said with a smile, "It's a trivial matter. It's a little effort. Sect Master Qin doesn't need to thank you." Su Lang already knew that when he returned to his hometown in the future, he would drop by to visit Song Yushao in the country of Su Sui and Liu's family in the country of Tsai. In the future it's also simple. If you don't need to communicate frequently, then you will fall behind. Just give a few points to both sides in secret. Qin Pingan and Su Lang walked to the side of the alley, stopped first and said, "Don't pass by." Su Lang clasped his fists to bid farewell, and suddenly couldn't hold back one and asked, "Dare to ask how old Sect Master Qin is now?" Qin Pingan smiled and said, "Less than 100. Su Lang sighed, "Sect Master Qin is really a genius of kendo. In the eyes of the younger generation, he does not lose the wind and snow temple Wei De Jiangxian." Qin Pingan smiled and said nothing. No wonder this green bamboo sword fairy could join Zhou Haijing, one without looking at the mirror and the other without looking at the Shanshui Dibao. On the side of the carriage, Zhou Haijing jokingly said, "Good day, Lu, are you enshrined in the palace? Is it possible that your majesty wants to see the girl?" The little novice monk sitting on his side by Guling hung his legs in the air, and quickly sang the Buddha. The powdery aroma of a carriage oozes out from the purple bamboo curtain, making the little monk almost confused. Guling was skilled in driving a car. His father was a general of logic, and he knew how to bow horses when he was young. He smiled and said, "Zong Master Zhou," said and laughed. The little novice monk was envious. Zong Master Zhou and Mr. Chen will be able to be respected by Mr. Chen if they meet together today. It really makes the little monk very envious. Zhou Haijing joked, "A monk also counts such false names?" The little novice monk immediately shook his head vigorously and said, "I can't be called a monk. The little monk hasn't received the ordination yet." Ningyao returned to the inn but saw two unexpected people and smiled and asked, "Why are you here?" Pei Qian holding a hiking stick. Chao Qingqing wore a Confucian shirt. Pei Qian said with a smile, "I received Master's Feijin letter, saying that he would stay here for about half a month." The younger brother asked Chao Sunny to come here for a wedding banquet, saying that Master was not suitable for showing up, and Chao Sunny's identity is more suitable. "He'll follow to see Master and Madam here." Chao Qingqing said, "Student Chao Qingjing, I have met the teacher." He secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Pei Qian finally knelt down and banged his head without a word. Straightening up, Chao Sunny explained, "Pei Qian accompanied me to Beijing on this trip. It was the younger brother in order to prevent some unnecessary accidents. Then I need to formally resign from the Hanlin Academy. Leaving Aquarius, go south to Tonggishao and choose Xiazong." Originally, according to the meaning of the younger brother, it was to retain the identity of the Hanlin editor, saying that the younger brother had his own means. However, Chao Qingqing didn't agree. He just led the salary and didn't do anything and didn't go to the office. If you want to be honest, you must be sincere. As a scholar of Wensheng's line, you need to use the word I Ching as the criterion of action. Ning Yao nodded, "Your master wants to meet a friend from the rivers and lakes, and you won't be able to come back later." She and the old shopkeeper borrowed 2 benches. After sitting down, Ning Yao immediately asked, "Why didn't you go and see the question boxing at the Fire God Temple?" Pei Qian Yin replied, it's important to wait for master here. Chao Qingqing sat on the other bench and remained silent. A young girl jumping on the street came approaching the inn and immediately calmed down. The girl was not polite with Master Ning. She sat down beside Ning Yao and asked in doubt, "Master Ning, didn't you go to the fire temple to watch people fight? It's really enjoyable, and the fight really compares favorably to Xiang and Cheer Street. It's much more beautiful for the children on both sides to clap bricks and scratch their faces." Ning Yao smiled and said, "I went because there were too many people, plus I went too late and I didn't get a good place, so I can't really see it." The girl said guiltily, "Blame me and blame me. I went out early in the morning. I was worried that my dad would stop me, so I didn't call Master Ning. I have a great place with a few friends from the rivers and lakes." She sat next to Ning Yao and kept twittering. "That woman Xiaozhou is so pretty. The old of fish is really well deserved. It is simply the kind of peerless expert in the book who casually gave out cheats or a jazzy internal strength." Master Ning had seen it before. He flew all the way from the sky and stopped at the ring. That master demeanor, simply. "I really don't know how Pei Qian, who is ranked higher than them, is so bullish. She must be able to make the opponents with her eyes burst into tears on the spot, scaring internal injuries. I heard that woman Xia Pei is young. She is a martial arts wizard who has never seen her in a century. She has already been superb and righteous. Master Ning, you are also a female xiaxia traversing the rivers and lakes. Is there such an honor to see woman Xia Pei from afar? A glance?" Ning Yao held back a smile. "What do you think?" The girl thought for a while and comforted, "It's okay, I haven't seen it either." Pei Qian sat on the other side of Ning Yao with a blank face, his brain hurting. Fortunately, the master is not there. Fortunately, Xiaomi Mi Li, who works part-time in ear reporting God and Chuan microphone, didn't come to Beijing with him, otherwise he would return to Luapa Mountain and would not be laughed at by the old chef and Qin Lingjun. Chao Qingqing always sat on another bench, clenched his fists with both hands and gently put his knees, looking ahead. A gentle smile, a modest gentleman, calm but so. Ning Yao turned his head and smiled at Pei Qian. "Your master wanted to accept Ms. Lu as a disciple, but Ms. Lu didn't agree." Pei Qian leaned forward and smiled at the girl. The girl blinked and glanced at the weapon leaning on the bench beside Pei Qian, confident enough to fight. "Why, fight the injustice for your master. Then let us follow the rules of the rivers and lakes. Let Master Ning give up our seats, just sit here and join hands. We will agree in advance and we will stop when we click. Don't hurt anyone. Whoever leaves the bench will lose." Pei Qian smiled silently as if he only said two words, "Not dare." "Do you understand me?" "Don't understand." The two sides just made eye contact and both sides could see clearly. Pei Qian was a little curious, where she was so naive. After thinking about it, she quickly glanced at the girl's state of mind, froze, and Pei Qian immediately put away and looked at it. The little girl in the girl's mind is completely different from the cheerful and lively the surface. After Qin Pingan and Su Lang parted, they returned to the inn soon, and saw the disciple of the Kaishan and the proud student, which was also very surprised. Pei Qian and Chao Sunny got up at the same time. Qin Pingan walked quickly and waved at the two with a smile. In this scene the girl nodded secretly. Most of it was a serious sect. It was a bit regular. This foreigner named Qin Pingan seemed to be quite prestigious in her sect, but she didn't know who their head was. Is not very old, is not high in boxing skills, and cannot beat the masters of the nearby martial arts centers. And look at that young man, a scholar who has caught up with the seeds of reading in Ichi Lane. She was even more certain that Master Ning's school was not a wild way. Qin Pingan sat next to Chao Qingqing and asked, "Why are you here?" Pei Qian pursed his mouth and dared not laugh. Master and Madam are exactly the same opening remarks. Chao Sunny explained it again to her husband. Qin Pingan thought for a while and asked, "Have Cui Dongshan ever said before, why is it recommended that you keep your status as the editor and repair officer of the Hanlin Academy?" Chao Sunny shook his head and said, "Little brother didn't say that because he saw me insisting on resigning, he withdrew his words." Qin Pingan turned his head and said, "Then don't worry about resigning, Pei Qian, then Fei Jin will send a letter and ask Cui Dongshan for the details." Chao Sunny heard what he meant and asked softly, "Mr. is the same as the younger brother, and I hope that I will keep the official status?" Qin Pingan smiled and said, "Nonsense, we are from the Wenxing line. Although Zhao Yao is now the highest official in the court, he is a servant of the criminal ministry, but he is not a clear one, and the road is not right. He belongs to the court. You are different if you are a talented person. If you resign from office, you will lose half of your skills." Chao Qingqing was speechless. Qin Pingan stretched out a hand and patted Qiao Sunny's shoulder, saying, "When I didn't come to the capital, I didn't think there was anything, but it turned out to be here, especially after visiting the government office in Nangsanfang. Finding that you didn't get the #1 pick in the exam and failed to win the world, Mr. is still a bit disappointed. Lin Junbis Boy is now the national teacher of the Xiaoyuan dynasty. It's okay, my own student will soon become the youngest master of the Haoranjiuzhou sect. It is hard to say that there is no one who has come after. It is destined to be unprecedented." Earlier, Qin Pingan and her husband had talked specifically about this matter, and they felt that it was not appropriate to make an exception, because Chao Qingqing was too early to enter the Yupu realm, so he would be given the status of acting suzerain of the fallen mountain sect. Chao Sunny became more and more helpless. Students can't take the exam again. Moreover, it may be good to say that they can try the ranking, but no one dares to say that they will win the championship. Qin Pingan smiled and said, "I've seen that Xuanhuan, you two have a good vision of making friends." Chao Qingqing was a little worried but was relieved soon. The worry is that Xuanhuan will be involved in the officialdom of the Dali court, but if the husband does things, what to worry about, even if it is a bad thing, can turn into a good thing. Ning Yao asked heartily, "Still don't worry about the wild world?" Qin Pingan gave a hum with his hands in his sleeves, his figure buckled, and his expression helplessly said, "It's hard to rest assured." Ning Yao asked, "Then we take a trip to the Great Wall of Jianghu?" Qin Pingan was puzzled. This side of the capital? In fact, he went to the Great Wall of Jianghu and he couldn't help much. If he really wanted to blend in, it would only help. But even if you take a closer look, whether it is the site of the Great Wall of Jianghu, or the four guiding ruins named Tianmu, Tetu, Xinxiang and Sunshan by the Confucian Temple, or the 3 ferry crossings of Bingzhu, Zuma, and Demai created by Haoranworld, all casually. Ning Yao said, "What do you want to do so much? You make an agreement with that short winter melon for a 10-year period, and the big deal is to ask Pei Qian to give the imperial palace a sentence, saying that when you are not in the capital, that 10-year time will not be counted. Even if she doesn't agree, it's up to you." Qin Pingan's eyes lit up. "It's feasible." Unexpectedly, as soon as Ning Yao got up, he took his seat again. "Forget it, you are too slow on your way, maybe you are still halfway and Shanshuadi will report the result." Qin Pingan was dumbfounded and rubbed his chin. Could it be that he waited for his husband to come back and asked him to ask for a holy prayer? If you ask for it yourself, it's not appropriate, you still have to let your husband go. Suddenly, 2 scholars appeared at the entrance of the inn. Both of them came from the Confucian temple across the continent. One is old and the other is middle-aged. The latter smiled and said, "Too slow? Not necessarily. Go ahead. Where do you want to go?" Sword of Coming Chapter 844. The gentleman who returned from the Middle-earth Confucian temple really brought the saints to Aquarius. Qin Pingan and the others all got up immediately, and Chao Sunny and his husband made a bow together. Pei Qian saw his wife holding a fist in a bow, and he would behave like this, otherwise he would be awkward. Only the girl in the inn was a little embarrassed, so she had to follow her up, looking from left to right, and finally chose to hold a fist with Master Ning. They were all informal children. She was wondering just now, what kind of martial arts sect is this, and the words are silent? Is it the long-lost sound transmission in the rivers and lakes? The young girl wondered whether Master's gang was actually a nest of supermasters. I never thought that a scholar ran out again at this moment, and she suddenly lost her mind. Whether Master Ning came from a sect of jianghu who was hiding in the corner, it was uncertain. Ning Yao touched the girl's head and smiled. "You go back to the inn first and promise not to steal your bench." The girl hummed, and it didn't make much sense to stay here. She crossed the threshold alone, and leaned over the counter when she entered the inn. She whispered to her father, "Father, there is a new scholar who doesn't know him. He is quite tall. Looks quite bookish. It can't be said that he is a senior scholar who is a high official." The old shopkeeper was flipping through the book while drinking at the side dish. He didn't bother to turn his head and look outside and smiled. "Are there fewer scholars in Ichi Lane?" Outside the inn, the saintly smiled to Chao Sunny and said, "It's rare." Chao Qingqing made another move. The old scholars and the disciples of the closed door can only assume that they have not heard the implication of Li Sheng. Except for Chao Sunny, who is a rare seed for reading. Wensheng's line is difficult to find a scholar who is not like Wensheng's line. Li Sheng turned his head to look at Pei Qian and said, "It's okay to take a look." Pei Qian shook his head. How dare she just look at the mood of Li Sheng? Li Sheng finally said to Ning Yao, "As long as you are still the first person in Wuxia Tianxia, then there are some unwritten rules, at least in xianxia, you must abide by it. When you return to wuxialover, even if the sky falls, I don't care because I, like the Confucian temple, need to abide by certain rules. Ningyao, remember that any mountain powerhouse does whatever he wants, no matter whether the starting point is good or bad. There is a world in which we live. A huge impact, many invisible effects, may last for thousands of years. There is no emphasis on words, no stern words, or even the meaning of beating. The Saint of Rights just speaks a common truth in a normal tone. Ningyao was silent. The old scholar coughed slightly and Chen Pingan immediately asked, "Mr. Li Sheng, why don't you go to my brother's house and sit for a while?" Li Sheng nodded and said, "Okay." As the group went to that alley, Li Sheng looked at the streets of Dali capital city all the way, and indeed he hadn't set foot on Aquarius Island for many years. Chen Pingan asked, "Mr. Li Sheng, can you not send me and Ningyao to the wild world, and only help me and Ningyao return to the Howren world from a certain place? The same is only to let the Saint of Rights take one shot. Someplace. Isn't it Tuoyue Mountain?" Li Sheng smiled and said, "Relying on those 3 mountain charms, crossing 2 worlds as you can imagine, the injury has not been fully healed. If you do this, it will only worsen the situation." He intends to sleep in Tuoyue Mountain for a few days first so that Ningyao discuss with the big demon guarding the gate of Tuoyue Mountain. After you rest well, you and Ningyao will demolish the Patriarch's Hall? Such a good thing. I can go to Tuoyue Mountain by myself. They waited 2 or 3 days and gave me half of the incense kung fu. Chen Pingan nodded and gave up the idea without hesitation. Understood. In fact, Chen Pingan had already had a rough estimate in his mind when Ningyao proposed to take a trip to the Great Wall of Sword Qi before. The sequelae of the world, and the underestimation of the Tuoyue Mountain prohibition, since the Saint of Rights gave this final result, Chen Pingan can go back and verify the effect of the Sanshan talisman, and even roughly calculate the road that the 2 worlds now pass. The degree of connection between the gate and the passage to the market. Li Sheng walked slowly on the street and continued, "Don't go to the hospital in a hurry, take 10,000 steps and say even if Tuo Yushan is really broken by you, you still need to do whatever you want on the battlefield where Liang is. Don't underestimate the mental abilities of the great demon in the wild world. I'm not denying your merits as a hidden official. It's just a matter of fact. Back then, all the affairs of the summer residence of your abbot, and the line of the hidden official issuing orders, was able to flow so unimpeded. To a large extent it was because you got the boss sword immortal everywhere. Asylum, the boss Jianxian gave you the last hermit of his 10,000 years of truth. Replaced by the xianxia Chaotang, even in the Confucian temple, no matter who supports you, you will never repeat this matter. Besides, have you ever thought that Tuo Yueshan might be the person who is really waiting besides a Liang? It is also you or even Ningyao?" Chen Pingan just listened carefully. The old scholar stroked his beard and smiled. Although the saints of rituals are never the kind of stingy words, in fact as long as the saints of rituals are reasonable with others, there are a lot of words, but our saints generally do not speak easily. The old scholar and Ningyao said in their hearts, "Ning girl, don't be angry, don't make it, the saints have always been like this and they are very rigid. In someone's words, what is freedom is that we go out on a rainy day with an umbrella in hand. The only thing that is not free is to hold the umbrella and don't get out of the umbrella." Ningyao said. Li Sheng said, "We will talk about the water suspension situation when we get to the house." At the entrance of the alley, the old monk Lu Jia and the young Zhao Duanming immediately appeared. Chen Pingyan pointed to Pei Qian and Chao Sunny and explained, "My disciples and students are not outsiders." Lu Jia moved 2 steps horizontally, stood in the middle of the alley, pointed at the middle-aged Confucian scholar, and asked Chen Pingyan, "Wait a minute, where's this one? You kid pretend to be garlic with me and want to make a paste? There is no way to get through." Chen Pingan was a little embarrassed. It's okay for my senior to find such an unselfish janitor. Doesn't he really understand the slightest official rules and the sophistication? Take the lead and lead the way first, and the husband walks side by side with the saint of ceremony behind, and then Ningyao, Pei Qian and Chao Qingqing are behind. It's all in this posture. You Lu Jia still can't see the severity? Li Sheng didn't mind and smiled and introduced himself. "My name is Yu Ku and I come from the Qinta Confucian temple." Lu Jia thought for a while, shook his head and said, "No matter who you are, don't blame me for being unkind. If you think I'm inferior to others, I'm up to you. Anyway, I have the rules here except for Mr. Cui's article. The scholars in the veins or the people doing business in the Dali court don't even want to enter this alley except for the 2. The Middle-earth Confucian temple is amazing, there are not many good birds. In the early years, Cui Guosher sadly returned to his hometown of Aquarius, and eventually became Dali Guosher. In the final analysis, isn't it just for your Confucian temple? Chen Pingan feels weak, but in fact he deliberately gave this old teacher Lu a chance to be close to the ritual Xingpan. Just ask a few words. Lu Jia is good and he is addicted to blocking people? The young Zhao Duanming leaned against the wall, eating peanuts to watch the fun. It turns out that his brother Qin winked vigorously at him over there, secretly pointed his finger at the man in Confucian shirt, and then pointed at Mr. Wenxing. Zhao Duanming is worthy of being a son of the Zhao family in Tianshui. He immediately recovered, his teeth trembled, and he said to his master, "Master, he seems to be the saint of rites. The saint of literary temple rites." Without the presence of Mr. Wenxing and the hint of Brother Qin, the boy would not be recognized even if he was killed. Who can believe that the saint of rites will really come to him? If I ran back to my house and vowed to say that I had seen the saint of ceremony, my grandfather wouldn't have to laugh. Hee hee, did the silly boy thunder again? As a child of the Xianghu kingdom surname, especially a man, there is no lack of respect for Confucian temples. It is normal not to recognize the master of Wenxing. It is a bit far from the appearance of the real person, and the deity of Wenxing. The hanging statues have been removed for more than 100 years, but the rituals are different. They are hung in various Confucian temples year after year, and they just accompany the holy master. The old monk sullen his face, waved his big hand, moved several steps horizontally and gave way. When the group of people stepped into the alley and almost walked to the door of the house, the young man was willing to turn his head and retract his gaze, and found that his master had been facing the street and his eyes were dull, that was sweating. In the end, the master and apprentice squatted together in the alley. The old monk even made an exception and offered the young man a pot of wine, and then drank silently together. "Master, what are you doing? Don't tell me your old man is really a man. I used to think you were bragging. You were not young and handsome. There were countless female heroines and fairies who admired you, but you were hard-hearted so that the teachers of the country could take a high look. It's true. If you talk about those old almanacs in the future, I won't be deaf to my ears. Shut up and drink your wine. Master, I think it's going to be like the current situation. Next time the person who stops us should be the holy master, right? Go away. Master, what are you doing with me?" anxiously. Fortunately, I remind him that he is a saint. Some salted peanuts. Outside the Renyun Iyun building, the small courtyard is quiet, with ordinary bluestone slabs. On both sides of the yard, there are a few green plantains and a lonely old thin plum tree. It is straight and shapeless. The four people sat around the stone table and the youngest generations, Chao Sunny and Pei Qian, stood there. Chao Sunny stood behind his husband, and Pei Qian stood beside his wife. Chen Pingan took out a jar of 100-flour stuffed rice and 4 flour god cups. Li Sheng smiled and said, "It turned out to be 100-flour stuffed rice. I haven't drank it for many years." The old scholar stood up and said, "Peace, you just sit, I'll pour wine for the saint of ceremony. Sir, I can do this kind of thing. No need, you finally went back to your hometown. You still have to worry about it every day. You don't have any leisure at all. It's not for guarding the gate of Taiping Mountain. There was a conflict with people. Even the immortals are provoked. I cleared the door with Xingyang Mountain, changed my atmosphere, and visited the Confucian temple without mentioning anything else. I just had a face-to-face meeting, and I entered the eyes of old Master Li. How did the old antique look higher than the top? Speaking prickly, to be honest, even I stunned him, and now you are here again in this big city to help sort out the veins, check the omissions and fill in the vacancies as much as you can, and the result is not bad if you avenge your grievances. Don't you have a moment of peace of mind, sir? I feel distressed if I don't do any trivial things for you, mister, will not be strong in his heart." Li Sheng looked at the two quarreling two, smiled and said, "Why don't I pour the wine? As for the yin and yang weirdness and innuendo of old scholars, just get used to it." In the early days of the Confucian temple, the old scholar did not say anything less. Anyway, he was alone in the context of a context, and he spits casually without any concerns about accidental injury. The old scholar sat back angrily, and the disciples who closed the door poured the wine, followed by the guest saints, his husband, Ning Girl, and Chen Ping and himself. Before drinking, Li Xing said, "Wait a moment, go back twice." The old scholar hurriedly said, "Why is the saint of rites like this?" It was just between the sparks and flints. The old scholar only sighed and said nothing. Blocking a fart, just such a blink of an eye, the saint of rituals actually go back, has been completed, and finally returned to the present. Going back in time, tracing the origin and following it, the road is hindered and long, which is called return. Along the long river of time in the same direction, swimming along the water and passing the flowing water quickly is to go. Li Sheng smiled and said, "There is no danger, you are very careful." Since I was talking about the purely divine Qin Pingan, of course, it meant that Qin Pingan was in front of him, but it was actually no different. Qin Pingan stood up and thanked him. "You have worked so hard to pay tribute to Mr. Sheng." The old scholar cautiously asked, "Holy of Rites, how far have you gone?" "This is no small matter." Li Sheng said, "Don't worry, it's not far." The old scholar began to show off a fame and skill that even the closed disciples hadn't learned, and played a rogue. "Don't tell me these vain things, just say, how far have you gone?" Li Sheng turned his head to look at Qin Pingan, his eyes asked as if the answer was on Qin Pingan's side. Qin Pingan couldn't pretend to be stupid, so he had to bite the bullet and give the answer in his heart. Zen has something to say, saying that it's just like nothing. Just as there is an old saying in Qin Pingan's hometown, you can't talk to outsiders when you make a wish with a bodhisattva. The old scholar raised his wine glass with both hands with a smile on his face. "Then I will mention one first, the saint of ceremonies. It is meaningless to drink alone. It's better to let my brothers go one first. You are free, I can't even go three." A good meal of wine that no one would persuade to drink was to toss the old scholar with a wave of recklessness. The saint was really casual, just toasted and took a sip of wine. The old scholar craned his neck, waited. "Forget it, the saint of ceremony is not enough, so don't be polite and take a sip." The wine that the disciples finally earned after closing the door, drank it leisurely, and turned back to the few pots of 100-flower stuff that he had to give away. Qin Pingan asked a big question. "I was at the inn earlier, has he seen the saint of ceremony?" Li Sheng nodded. Qin Pingan was completely speechless. How can this sort of thing count the order? According to Master Zu's explanation of words, the upper and lower sides are called the universe, and the universe has been called the universe throughout the ages. Buddhism has the saying that the 10 directions are boundless and boundless. Taoist ancestors once said that things are mixed together, born innately, and cannot be described. The strong word is Tao. Lu Qin said directly that he was drowning in ants, weeds, and dung. After taking a sip of wine, Li Sheng said coldly, "If you want to be among the 15th realms, you need to completely transcend all the great imprisonment caused by words." The old scholar spit out a drink. Qin Pingan became more and more dumbfounded. Ningyao thoughtfully. Chao Sunny and Pei Qian looked at each other, one with a worried face and the other with pride. The former shook his head slightly, and the latter glared at him. Li Sheng was about to get up and leave Bea Pingzu and Qin Pingan and Ningyao to the Jianghu Great Wall site. The sequelae of this solid dissolution, of the great ancestor of the wilderness, was too great, and he needed him to break the cocoon little by little. The old scholar hurriedly wiped his mouth and took the other party's arm. "I just drank a glass of wine and left without giving face? Let's talk again, just a few more words, nothing will be delayed, let's talk about it, my protagonist will be passed on again." "Well, how much to save me some face?" Qin Pingan immediately poured a glass of wine for Li Sheng, because there were still many doubts in his heart. He wanted to take the opportunity to ask Li Sheng. Ning Yao, Pei Qian and Chao Sunny were all silent. Most people really want face, they wouldn't speak like this. Li Sheng had to reseat. Qin Pingan asked heartily, "Sir, the real name and surname of the Saint of Rites, the surname you, the one who abides by it? Or is it the guest of the guest?" Regarding the name of Li Sheng, there is no record in the book, and Qin Pingan has never heard of it before. Li Sheng said, "It's the latter." Qin Pingan was a little embarrassed. On the side of the Saint of Rituals, those who are silent are really meaningless. Li Sheng smiled and said, "Abide by the rules? Actually, it doesn't count. I'm only responsible for making etiquette." Qin Pingan took a sip of wine. Similar words, probably like Aliang said I brag? Ning Yao said that the sword needs to be practiced? The real fire dragon said that he knew something about Dao Fa. The eldest Jianxian said that he was in the Great Wall of Jiangxi, and said he didn't count anything. After pouring a glass of wine for her husband, Qin Pingan asked, "Is the tomb created by the ascending ghost in the sea the hanging mound recorded in ancient books?" Such tombs often belong to ancient emperors alone, with numerous institutions inside, neither feathering up, nor entering the darkness of the yellow springs, just like a kind of alternative immortality, which is immortal, and is not restricted by any road. It's just that in the Howran world there have always been written records, and there has not been a physical object for thousands of years, so that even the monks on the mountain have regarded it as a kind of strange and mysterious nonsense. Li Sheng nodded and said, "It is true. Qin Pingan raised his head and glanced at the sky. That one high's thoroughness is just so lingering. The ascending ghost that was found by Ning Yao must be a deeply buried chess piece in the barren world. For example, when Howren was aggressively attacking the barren world, it suddenly smashed a route to the market, monks and ferry. In addition to the damage to the soldiers and horses, this is a nearly fatal blow to the hearts of the people in the world, and any gas trainer will feel anxious. On the battlefield of the wild world, the monks on the mountain and the soldiers of the various dynasties will worry about retreat, and those who have not yet rushed to the battlefield have to worry about it. Whether they can live to see the scenery of the wild world, it seems impossible to say. It's just the most terrifying thing or the in case. Even if this result has been reached long ago, it's even more terrifying than the most terrifying. Naturally, when Hai deliberately did it deliberately, not hesitating to squander the life of an ascending realm ghost, and let Howren go into the wild, the world is safer, more stable, and more at ease, and I feel that there is no more scruples and hidden worries. On Ning Yao's side, Qin Pingan has always had something to say, so this worry is straightforward and straight to Ning Yao. Ning Yao's answer couldn't be simpler. I'm only responsible for making swords on the unpleasant personnel. I can't control the rest. If you want to think about it, think about it. If you don't want to, just say hello to the Confucian temple and make them want to go. Qin Pingan agreed with a smile at the time, saying that he could think about it. No matter how much he could, he would not think about it. Probably because only this kind of Ning Yao can make Qin Pingan talk about his thoughts, and no taboos. All the thoughts in the world cannot just be kept, otherwise everyone who thinks a lot and thinks well may be a bitter face. Qin Pingan asked, "Does the Confucian temple have similar arrangements?" Li Sheng smiled and said, "Of course, it's not impolite to come and go." Finally, Qin Pingan asked a question that had been hidden in his heart for many years. In the 13th battle of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, did the Lu family of the Yinyang family of Middle-earth harbor evil intentions? The Wild World and the Great Wall of Jianxi each sent 13 people to catch each other and fight. Xiao Deng Lu Ji Ning Yao's parents Yu Qing Mi Hu Zhang Lu Yao Chongdao Li Tumi. The lists of both sides are fixed and clear. The paper strengths of both sides are roughly the same, and the key depends on the order. Regarding the ranking arrangement, it was finally proved that the sword repair that was extremely unfavorable to the Great Wall of Sword Qi was simply a trap of falling into the wild world step by step. For example, Ning Yao's parents and Zhang Lu lost to Shouchen. If it weren't for Aliang to play at the bottom, the sword would be a soaring demon, the Great Wall of Sword Qi would lose all the games. An ancestor of the Lu family used to specialize in secrets, and for this reason he lost his Dao cultivation level, and he was not even a proclaimed fairyland, but a genuine ascendant monk. Li Sheng shook his head and said, "The opponent is better." The Confucian temple learned afterwards that it was the savage rising from the outside world, that is, the old man who appeared in Tuition with Xiao Sun during the last discussion. The ancient gods secretly used the method of shifting stars and changing battles together to calculate the Lu family of the Yin and Yang family. If there is no accident, the first rise to do this is a careful secret instruction, and it can be counted by this. Let Howren lose an ascending realm of Yin Yang family monk. Damage part of the top combat power of the Great Wall of Sword Qi. In the eyes of ordinary monks who are not on the top of the mountain, one city of sword repair can win a war. Such a wild world, even if it hits the world, what storms can be created. Since he didn't understand the strategy of the military, he would only fight brute force, and the top combat power was still so unhelpful. By the time Howren he was just shut down and beaten up. Li Sheng asked, "If it weren't for this answer, what would you do?" Chao Sunny, who had been standing, held his breath and clenched his fists. Pei Qian narrowed his eyes. The old scholar is there instead. Qin Pingan replied truthfully, "The Lu family of the Yin and Yang family will be the next Jinyang mountain, and it may be even worse." Li Sheng smiled and said, "I have seen some grievances on the mountain." The old scholar helped to add, "No, I don't care." Qin Pingan hesitated to speak but stopped. Li Sheng gave an example, man and grasshopper. None of them asked anything, but one gave an inexplicable answer. Qin Pingan nodded and understood. Ning Yao was too lazy to think and finally started to toast and drink. Chao Sunny was puzzled, Pei Qian looked blank and confused. With a broken leg, the grasshopper can still jump alive. And as a person with the strength of spiritual beings, leaving aside the cultivator, he can't have this powerful vitality. As soon as Qin Pingan heard this metaphor, he immediately thought of the Xianxia fairy. In Qin Pingan's earlier imagination, a fairy that shuttles through the sea of clouds is logically interlocking and extremely sophisticated. But in fact, the construction and composition of the Xianxia fairy, except for the secret key formation center in addition to everything is actually far more rough than Qinping's imagination. So in the same way the whole world and the world need a certain degree of gap and distance. The same is true for the master of heaven and earth that my husband proposed. It is not blindly close, it is a good thing. If Li Sheng had strict control over Howren's affairs, then Howren would definitely not be what Howren is today. As for whether it might be better or worse, no one knows the result except Li Sheng himself. The final fact is that the ritual still chooses to close one eye to many things. What? Is it intentional to raise all kinds of people with the same rice? Is it tolerant of certain errors, or does it feel that making a mistake itself is a kind of human nature, and is keeping a distance from the divine, and that is why people are humans? Cui Dongshan once put forward an extremely weird argument. Someone becomes a Confucian saint with full merit, or becomes a Buddha, or becomes a real person of Baiyujing. It is actually a good thing, so if one day everyone is really good, is he a saint without fault? Assuming everyone is a literary saint and a sub-sage, what's seen? Tens of millions of people are one? Is it a great blessing, or will we, ordinary masters who have not cultivated enough, feel a little bit lingering today? Qin Pingan thought more and more far and he didn't realize it. When he picked up the wine glass and drank a sip, he recovered and immediately curbed the complicated thoughts of wandering thousands of miles. Li Sheng said, "Where are you going after you think about it?" Qin Pingan said, "The Great Wall of Sword Qi." The old scholar was sneaky and started winking at the saint of ceremony. Li Sheng shook his head. "Meaningless things have proved that you, a closed disciple, have no possibility of shaping the outer body of the yin and yang god." The old scholar still doesn't give up, try again. The saint still shook his head. The old scholar lifted his chin and squinted in the direction that imitated Baiyujing. "I had a fight anyway, and I also quarreled the old master who disliked the Confucian temple." Li Sheng ignored him and stood up. The old scholar had already come to Li Sheng's side and stretched out his hands. Li Sheng had no choice but to say to Qin Pingan, "This trip to the Great Wall of Sword Qi, your situation will be similar to that of the Confucian temple, similar to Yinshan traveling far away from the body." Qin Pingan nodded, then stretched out a hand holding the long sword Yayo in his hand. Just so, there happened to be something big or small in the capital which made Qin Pingan more careful. If he can really use the stones from other mountains to tap jade, he can verify what he thinks, and maybe he can answer the student Cui Dongshan's proposal. The final answer to the question may still be wrong, but at any rate it is an answer from the husband to the students. In the next moment, it was like only Ning Yao disappeared out of thin air, and Qin Pingan who was left behind, except for the Yayo sword in his hand. Li Sheng walked to the courtyard gate, and both Lao Xiaocai and Qin Pingan followed. Qin Pingan turned his head and smiled at the two student disciples. "You can go to the library to find books and you can take the ones you like. You are welcome." Chao Qingqing and Pei Qian entered the bookstore. Pei Qian didn't plan to borrow books, but saw that Chao Qingqing was similar to a bandit and they were no thieves. In the blink of an eye he took several copies. Pei Qian said in a bad mood, "You almost get it." Chao Sunny ignored her and soon changed from holding a pile of books in his hand to holding a pile of books. Looking at the posture, it was the kind of borrowed money. Pei Qian had nothing to do with him and felt that he was still the self he was when he was a child and he had already kicked it. Chao Sunny said for no reason, "Do you have a booklet to record Mr. Chestnut?" Pei Qian said angrily, "How did you know?" Neither Sister Nwanshu nor Millet knew about this. She did treasure a book secretly, more hidden than all the account books, and was secretly named Chestnut Collection by her. The chestnuts that Master struck each time, the time and place, and the specific reasons are recorded in detail. Chao Sunny turned his head and said with a look of surprise, "Is there really any?" "No, I have to tell my husband to go." Guessed casually. Pei Qian laughed, fingers interlaced. "You guys want to sue? Then don't blame me for not reciting fellowship." Chao Yingqing smiled and said, "Just kidding. By the way, do you know that, in fact, your husband is very worried about you now, too much like him?" Pei Qian was stunned for a moment and frowned. "I learned from Master to walk the rivers and lakes, but I don't always learn like it. Besides, if I learn like this one day it will be my own way." After a moment of silence, Pei Qian seemed to mutter to himself, "Master, don't worry about this." Chao Sunny asked, "Say these words to Master by yourself." Pei Qian sat on the threshold with his back facing so many books and said, "I dare not." Chao Qingqing faced the bookshelf and turned his back to the door and said to himself, "If you dare not say anything, Master will always worry about you. Only if you say it, Master will be true. Don't worry because you will feel that you have really grown up." Pei Qian did not speak for a long time. Chao Sunny had been looking for and picking up books and then said, "Then I will tell you something in my heart. I will never forgive the money when I was a kid. I may never forgive it in the future. On the Great Wall of Qi I wanted to make my husband and younger brother relieved, so I lied. But the current master sister, I think it's good." Turning his back to Chao Sunny's Pei Qian, his eyes became red. Because she actually knew that Chao Sunny didn't lie at all that time. The one who really lied was today. Pei Qian sat on the threshold, bowed his head and hugged his knees. Chao Qingqing turned his head and asked, "Pei Qian, I have taken too many books, lend me a square inch?" Pei Qian said dully, "Get out." Chao Sunny smiled and said, "It's the interest." Seeing that Pei Qian never reacted, Chao Sunny had to give up. Near the gate of the house, Qin Pingan suddenly stopped and turned to look at Renyuniyun Tower. Back then, when I walked out of the rain alley with Chao Sunny under the umbrella, there was a black charcoal girl who stood alone at the door for a long time. Li Sheng and Lao Xiao continued to move forward, and stopped until they reached the door. Chen Ping'an took a deep breath, turned his head and walked quickly towards the door. The Confucian Temple, or the Saint of Rites, was in fact the same predicament as his brother Cui Yong. When Cui Yang visited Luapa Mountain, he had an open and honest dialogue with Chen Ping'an. "Did anyone believe me? Even if some people believe it, will something good happen?" Maybe they knew the truth early, but more people chose to take the initiative to open the door to welcome guests. The advancement of the wild world became smoother, completely smashing Fuyazhou and Tonggishao, and taking Beipingzhou at the fastest speed. After that, many forces from Jinjiazhou, Luxiazhou, Aizhao, and the three continents fell directly without fighting. In the end, only Beiju Luzhou and South Pasuozhou will accompany the Zhongtu Shenzhou negative corner to resist, and then fall one after another. In Chen Pinggan's view, the three people who have worked hardest in the world for thousands of years are the saints of rituals who are in harmony with the awe-inspiring world, the elder sword immortal of the Great Wall of Jianghu and the old man in the backyard of the medicine shop. The three of them seem to be in prison for 10,000 years. In Chen Pinggan's eyes, Grandpa Yang, regardless of whether he has long-term calculations, even if he knows the identity of the old man later, in his eyes, Grandpa Yang has always been a human, not a young boy Tianjun who is in charge of an ascending platform. Li Xing said, "Talk to Ning Yao, she still needs to go to the Confucian Temple." Qin Ping'an agreed. It is not the Li Xing and the Confucian Temple who are putting on airs, but the Confucian Temple's recognition of Ning Yao's identity. Qin Ping'an made an effort and did not get up for a long time. The old Xiaocai patted the closed disciple's arm lightly and Qin Ping'an got up. Looking at the young man's clear eyes, Li Xing smiled and said, "It's nothing. Many good reasons are empty because the reasoning person has never felt the same way, and the reasoning person is not in sorrow and joy, and cannot really compare the heart." Just like in the early years in the Rouge County of Tsai country, when the little girl Xiaohuan suffered a catastrophe, she was only naturally close to Qin Ping'an, a stranger. Because of the same suffering. The beauty of people is in the eyes. Being silent for a moment is better than 1,000 words. Qin Ping'an had only been in the Great Wall of Sword Qi for so many years, and he was almost crazy, so he knew more about the efforts of the boss and the saint. The same reason, so the Saint of Rites will answer nothing. Before Li Xing left, he smiled and said, "Just talk about preaching and teaching karma to solve puzzles. Is the same as your husband, very good." The old scholar stomped his feet and complained, "Sage of etiquette, this kind of sincere language, is not better to keep it when discussing matters in the Confucian Temple?" Li Xing glanced diagonally at the old scholar. The old scholar immediately turned to the wind and greeted the rudder, and smiled heartily, "Now that is also very good. You don't need too many ears to listen to good things." After crossing the threshold, Li Xing returned to Middle-earth in an instant. The old scholar took Qin Ping'an into the alley. "Treasure girl Ning, except you, no one can make her feel so sullen." Qin Ping'an was at a loss, wondering why his husband would say so. It is rare for an old scholar to be on the side of this closed disciple. Wanting to get angry, he raised his hand subconsciously and immediately withdrew his hand. He almost regarded it as a silly and big one. In the end he just smiled and said, "Smelly boy, this time it is not a pretense. Stupid, really stupid. Don't pretend to be stupid when you should be stupid, and don't open your mind when you shouldn't be stupid. You didn't find out, girl Ning's this awe-inspiring trip, she is on your side, is she always active? Provoking the conversation just to make you say a few more words?" Qin Ping'an scratched his head as if that was the case. The old scholar caressed his beard and smiled. The man and woman love each other. As a husband, he still has some knowledge to teach his disciples. Qin Ping'an said, "Sir, the order should not be chaotic. No matter how good the knowledge is, there is no foundation in front. They are all sciatic. The old scholar thought for a while, helpless and relieved, and nodded and said, "Yes too." Suddenly the old xianxia said, "I miss my brother Bai Yi a little bit." I listened to the meaning of Li Sheng. He already has the first natal flying sword, but I don't know the dozens of names I helped pick earlier which one has it. Qin Pingan said in shock, "Mr. Bai is already a sword repairman?" The old scholar nodded, "No." The old scholar touched his head, "What a perfect match." Qin Pingan was puzzled, "Sir, what's the point?" The old xianxia said, "Didn't Bai Yi become a child? He has to find himself wearing a tiger head hat, sir. I can't stop how I persuade him." Qin Pingan thought for a while, then echoed, "That's about the same as I can't stop Lu Jinglong from drinking." In the back alley, the two students looked at each other and smiled knowingly. The carriage stopped at the gate of a Taoist temple, and the little novice said, "Miss Zhou, we are here." Zhou Haijing stepped down the carriage and looked at the door face, which was small enough to look like the woman with the gauzy face, and said, "Good day, Lu. Is it possible that your Daojing master is practicing the law of longevity in such a small Taoist temple?" After getting started, it is a fairy family mansion with a cave in a strange land. Giant, a lot of fairy birds and beasts? Guling explained with a smile, "It's not as mysterious as Miss Zhou said, and it's not too big inside. It's just an ordinary 4-entry courtyard. The Taoist priests who live here all the year round, the 6 divisions of the Taoist Academy, and the 3 or 4 people in each division. There are only 20 Taoist priests and half of them cannot live in a private room." Zhou Haijing smiled and said, "The sparrow is small and has all 5 internal organs." Zhou Haijing turned her head and asked the little bald head, "You are a little monk who comes to Taoism, don't you make a taboo?" The little novice monk folded his hands and shook his head and said, "The world in the 10 directions is pure land." Zhou Haijing thought this little bald-headed speech was quite interesting. "When I was dangling on the rivers and lakes, I saw some monks who are known as Buddhist dragon elephants. They had the courage to call the Buddha and scold the ancestor. Do you dare?" The little novice monk shook his head like a rattle. "Don't dare not. The little novice monk now knows the 7 orifices of the Dharma, how can he be disrespectful to the Buddha?" Zhou Haijing asked casually, "The monk I saw, isn't it that, slander Buddha?" The young novice monk patiently explained, "The level of the Dharma, regardless of whether the fighting skills are good or bad, has nothing to do with whether they are practitioners. Those who have attained the Tao, claiming to be the Super Buddha and the ancestor, have great Zen opportunities. It's not nonsense. It's just that they can say that, but the little novices can't learn this way now or they will be like falling into a devil's cave. Alas, it's better to chat with Mr. Qin, save worry and effort." Listening to the endless talk of the little monk, Zhou Haijing regretted mentioning it. Fortunately, the Taoist temple is so big and Guling has taken them to a side house, which is where his Daelu master's genealogy office is located. A chair and a bench for guests. Guling moved the chair. The little novice monk sat on the bench and Guling poured 2 bowls of water for Zhou Haijing and the little novice monk. Zhou Haijing waved his hand and said with a smile, "I'm afraid you secretly took off the Mongolian sweat medicine and went out, especially for women. Be careful." Guling had to leave the bowl of water for himself, and never thought Zhou Haijing stretched out his hand and said with a smile, "Goodale can't make a joke too much." The little novice monk didn't rush to drink water, looked down at the water in the bowl and looked carefully. A pot of water in Buddha's view contains 48,000 insects. Zhou Haijing saw the scene of the little bald head out of the corner of her eyes, and she was stunned. Damn, could it be possible that this decent Goodale could really do that kind of act? Guling really didn't know what kind of road the great master of whooping took. Song Su hurried over, and Zhou Haijing deliberately waited until the footsteps were near the door of the house before looking up. "Yo, the master is here." Song Su crossed the threshold and saw that there was no place to sit. He signaled that Guling and the young novice monk did not have to give up their seats, held fists with Zhou Haijing and said straightforwardly, "My name is Song Mingshu and I came from the Song family in Wuxianhua County. Now a sword repairman officially invited Master Zhou to join our earthly branch." Zhou Haijing spouted water on the spot. No matter how lonely and ignorant she is, she still knows where the Longxing land of the Song family of Dali is. What's wrong? The old lattice mouth has been opened. Even if the Emperor's Majesty hasn't looked at the beauty of the people, she will look at a royal child. "Are you really ready to hide in the Golden House?" Unknown Song Su went inside and turned to look at Guling. Guling smiled and said, On the way here, Miss Zhou joked whether she would be chosen by Her Majesty and be selected into the palace. Song Su smiled and said, Zhong Master Zhou has thought about it too much, don't worry about this. Your Majesty will not act like this and I have no such disrespect. Zhou Haijing said solemnly, why don't you be disrespectful, Gu Jinren? Can you give me a separate house and let me put on makeup first? Song Su and Gu Ling looked at each other. The little novice monk held the bowl in one hand, lowered his head to face a bowl of water, and recited Amitabha. Gu Ling explained in detail, Song Su is our second prince of the Dai dynasty. Zhou Haijing sighed, but it was a sword repairman. Song Su did not have any extra polite greetings, and roughly explained the origins of the earthly branches and the pros and cons of becoming a member of Zhou Haijing. In fact, the so-called drawbacks are really nothing. At most, they cannot rely on their identity to kill innocent people. As long as they do not identify themselves with others, the Ministry of Rights and the Ministry of Justice will not even take care of any personal grievances, but the premise is that they cannot cause too much damage. The interests of the Li dynasty. Then there is the opportunity for them to fight each other. Will not be too many. It is very likely that there will be no one in the entire 100 years. But as long as it is their turn, the opponents they will target must all start in the fairyland. Song He continued to speak without taboos, with great sincerity, and directly reported a series of imaginary enemies, the emperors of Weibo, Jinqing, Shenzong Qijin, Yunlin Jiang Patriarch. Maybe after 100 years the earthly branch, the monks of the same line, will break through their own borders. The enemy they need to face at that time, Xuanhuan, will ultimately be responsible for killing with a sword. It will be an unruly Hanshu, or a foreign soaring realm passing by Aquarius Island. Great monk. Zhou Haijing didn't interrupt from beginning to end. After Song Su finished speaking, she smiled and shook her head and said, I don't believe there is such a good thing in the world, so I refuse. Song Su poured himself a bowl of water, and after drinking it in one breath, he nodded and said, there is such a good thing. Zhou Haijing smiled and asked, if I don't agree, will you buy and sell? Song Su nodded and said, yes. Zhou Haijing rolled his eyes. Well, one of them accidentally entered the thief's den, so the old lady couldn't get on the thief boat by mistake. Song Su said, since we have chosen you, you cannot refuse. The great master of martial arts, even if you look at the mountains and rivers of Aquarius Island, is still rare. On the previous list there are only a few people. Yu Hong is limited by his martial arts qualifications and is old, and he is destined to be endless. As for the embroidered mother of Beiju Luzhou, who is also a female martial artist at the top of the mountain, the Dali criminal department has actually been in contact, and the advice given is to give up. As for the more suitable Pei Qian, forget it, no one wants to deal with that hermit now. Zhou Haijing shook the water bowl. What if I must refuse? Will I be unable to leave the capital? Song Su nodded and said, it's bad luck, that's it. If you are lucky you can escape from the capital by your ability, then you are not allowed to step into the territory of Dali in this life. Once you find it, you will be determined. Zhou Haijing tooted, hey, what I said, I finally believe that you are the second prince of the Song family. Song Su smiled and said, I just said so much. Zhou Haijing dropped the bowl of water on the table casually, stretched out his thumb, wiped his lips and slowly said, by the way, what does it mean to damage Dallas' interests too much? Who can help explain? Gu Ling took the initiative to say, for example, a person who is in the Dali martial arts or a certain upper 5-level monk in Dali, except for wild repairs. Zhou Haijing said, silent for a moment and tentatively asked, you can't be happy, unconstrained, lawless, kill whoever you want to kill? Don't you, Dali Frontier Army, have all the merits of battle? Song Su shook his head and said, no. Gu Ling added, if we really have feuds with these two kinds of people, we can report them in advance. As long as the two servants of the criminal and ritual department have passed, we can still take action, and we can guarantee that there will be no worries. Zhou Haijing smiled and said, I am a girl from a fisherman village, girl who only dare to walk the rivers and lakes down the mountain, but I don't have the ability to provoke the floating gods on the mountain. No one spoke up. She had to continue. Listen to your tone, even if it is the official lords of the Ministry of Rights and the Ministry of Justice, they can't call you, so you still care about the rules and what to do? Does this count as a group of dragons without a leader? In that case you do it. Why don't you choose a leading eldest brother yourself? I think His Royal Highness the Second Prince is very good-looking, kind, patient, and high-level, much better than Yuan Jianxian who likes to stinks. Gu Ling said, the National Division has made several untouchable rules which must be followed. Zhou Haijing curled his lips, but the master of the National Normal University who created the earthly branch by himself is no longer there. Song Su shook his head and said, the real rules are in no one's place. Zhou Haijing frowned as if she didn't think this kind of thing would be said from a big prince. Guling smiled and said, Miss Zhou, it doesn't matter if you say this here, just don't be heard by the previous Mr. Chen. The little novice monk stretched out his hand to cover his mouth and whispered, maybe I have heard it. Guling nodded his head with deep approval and glanced outside. He didn't feel that his Taoist temple's mountain and water restrictions could prevent Qin Ping's flying sword from sneaking in. This hidden official Qin Jianxian did a lot of things. Savvy? In short, they have experienced it personally more than once and the cost is more painful than ever. Song Su rubbed his eyebrows and looked at the woman who did not believe in evil. In fact, Song Su was not worried that she would refuse this matter. Instead, he began to worry about whether she would involve the other 10 after joining the earthly branch. One person. Zhou Haijing got up and said, I rented the carriage. Can you return it for me? Song Su smiled and nodded, of course it's okay. Zhou Haijing was very angry, do you not only know which store but also how much money I spent, you can find out exactly what it is? Song Su said, as long as Zhongshe Zhou agrees to be a member of our earthly branch, the criminal ministry will not investigate these privacy. This benefit will take effect immediately. Zhou Haijing smiled and said, I will think about such a big matter. I have to think about it before I give you an answer. By the way, can you lend me a non-event card to play around? What about a liar? The only thing you can do with the nothing card is to fake it and no one dares to fake it. Song Su drew out a prepared first-class accidental card from his sleeve, and gently threw it to Zhou Haijing. Zhou Haijing walked to the door, don't give it away, I can't run. It turned out that no one sent her out, making her half to death. After Zhou Haijing left the Taoist temple gate, she covered her face and immediately turned into an ordinary woman's appearance. She then wandered all the way and walked back to her residence in the capital. It's not a lie to choose a place, as Su Lang said. When I first arrived in the capital and went to the temple fair, although she was covered in her face, she couldn't hide her figure, her chest was bulging. With a thin waist, which man is not greedy when he sees it? Soon the two young thieves were caught up. They were bold enough. One of them wanted to wipe their hands and feet, and the other was even more excessive and wanted to steal money. The one who wanted to wipe the oil, seeing that her brows were pretty clean, pinched her cheek and turned it around. The pain made the teenager's face full of tears, as if half of his face was torn off by the woman. As for the who dared to steal money, he just dislocated his hands and was kicked to the ground by her, rolling on the floor with pain, only to feel that a bitter gall was about to break and she stepped on the side face. Use an embroidered shoe to run repeatedly. After that, she asked the two teenagers to lead the way, saying that she would help find a place to settle, and only one condition was that she did not need to spend money. Then he found the place where he lived right now. Apart from the fact that it didn't cost any money, the green bamboo sword immortal knew the best way. Within the city of Dali, there are not only wealthy families like Cheer Street who are interested in Qixiang, but also the grievances of frogs at the bottom of the well, and there are also places where cockroaches, dog pirates and horses grow thin. After walking through a roadside pigsty, Zhou Haijing glanced inside. He was still a little thin. Even if he sneaked into his house in the middle of the night, it seemed that there was not a few caddies of meat to stew. What is the hardest thing to survive the new year? Is it a poor man without money? Aha, wrong, it's actually a pig. Zhou Haijing laughed to herself, funny, and she was really funny. In the future, whoever will smoke from his ancestor's grave and be lucky enough to marry himself will definitely not be bored every day, whether it's on the bed or under the bed. Walking in a dark alley, she suddenly stopped and sneered, Qin Jianxian, as the master of a sect, is he not kind enough to act so sneakily? After a while, Zhou Haijing breathed a sigh of relief. Either he had thought about it more or he didn't swindle. In fact, along the way she was carefully investigating the surrounding air, but she never found any clues. Zhou Haijing spit on the ground. These immortal, misty and dog-like cultivators are veritable mountain gods compared to the ordinary people at the bottom of the mountain. They are powerful and extraordinary, and they do things better than the people of the rivers and lakes. If you don't talk about the rules, you can't see it, so what else can you do besides only using force to violate the prohibition? Along the way, passing by a few alleys with inferior powdery powder scent, chatting with some familiar sisters and sisters, some women persuaded her to pull her into the group, saying that it is easy to make money. Zhou Haijing answered, right? Earning money is fast. Several women laughed so beautifully together that it became harder to hide the wrinkles around their eyes. Zhou Haijing returned to his residence. It was a secluded and shabby yard with two teenagers squatting at the door. Zhou Haijing kicked one away and said with a smile, "A handsome young man like you must be careful when going out, maybe one day his will hurt." She took out the key and opened the door, too lazy to close the door, so she went to the clothes rail to collect the clothes. She stood on her toes, stopped her waist, stretched her arms, and the two teenagers sitting outside the door twisted their necks together. "Look at that graceful shrew." Zhou Hai's camera didn't turn, and he continued to collect clothes on the bamboo poles and said with a smile, "Be careful, my old lady will kill you all." Someone coughed in the alley not far from the courtyard. Zhou Haijing became furious. "A good xianxia, you really have a face, why don't you just sit on the bamboo pole and wait for me?" Chen Pingan walked to the door and after stopping he clasped his fists and apologized. "It's a crime to come uninvited." "Something." Zhou Haijing threw out a piece of clothing directly, "Apologize then die." Chen Pingan was facing a major enemy and instantly avoided sideways. "Then I will come again next time." On the head of the Jinchi Great Wall ruins, two figures appeared out of thin air just beside the cliff. Chen Pingan looked at the opposite side. Many years ago, he had been standing on the opposite side of the cliff, looking at the gray robe on this side, adding a lishen at most. Withdrawing his gaze, Chen Pingan took Ning Yao to find Wei Jin and Chao Jun, swept away, and finally stood in the city head area between the two sword repairmen. Wei Jin said, "Mr. Zhua has already gone south." Chen Pingan nodded. Although he had guessed it, he was still worried when he heard the answer. Sitting on the edge of the city head looking into the distance, Ning Yao stood by. Chen Pingan hesitated for a moment, but couldn't help asking the two in his heart, "Did my brother talk to you for help?" Wei Jin said calmly, "Never." Chao Jun didn't speak with a smile on his face, but just looked at the guy whose face gradually became gloomy. Did he take the wrong medicine? Can't it, a Xingyang mountain greeting ceremony, what a romantic sword fairy, people are more popular than others, I want to fight and kill in Aquarius Island and Tongyer Island, and I have countless swords and I haven't gained much fame. Chao Jun was glanced at by Ning Yao. Chao Jun had to say, "Here, in addition to teaching swordsmanship, Mr. Zhua has always been too lazy to talk nonsense with me. Chen Pingan is so talkative, this girl is different." After talking about this, Chao Jun was not angry and said angrily, "Chen Pingan, who said that Mr. Zhua invited me to practice swords here?" Chen Pingan smiled and asked, "It's me, what's the matter?" As long as the senior brother didn't let people help, even if this trip went south the risk was still great, but at least it was not the worst idea Chen Pingan had previously thought. Chao Jun glanced at Ning Yao and endured. Chen Pingan remained silent, just looking into the distance. Ning Yao sat aside. Chao Jun remembered something and said, "Chin de Jiangxian, there are many immortal masters who come here to play now, big and small, all of them eat and have nothing to do every day. No personal control, I guess it will happen right now." Never thought that Chen Pingan was like a deaf man. Chao Jun said nothing more. After a long time, Chen Pingan came back to his senses, turned around and asked, "What did you just say?" Chao Jun couldn't laugh or cry, lazily raised his hand to hug the back of his head and said, "It's okay." Chen Pingan did not look into the distance this time, but narrowed his eyes, looking at the vast ground beneath his feet. For thousands of years, how many swordsmen have been repaired, the hometown and foreign land, are here, come like wind and rain and go like dust. You're tuning in to the Sword Dance in the Vast Sky YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.